This time we will tell a manhwa entitled The Reincarnation of the Forbidden Archmage. This manhwa tells the story of an archmage who is very strong and invincible. However, due to an incident, the archmage died for some reason and was reincarnated into a youth who was weak and didn't have any skills. So how can that happen? Let's start the storyline. The story begins with a gate or dungeon that was opened 20 years ago on Earth. Along with that, various powers called skills also appeared. But only 1% of the entire human population has skilled. Not long after that incident, an organization was formed for the opponents of the dungeon, and they are now known as the Adventurers Guild. Then the scene moves to our main character who is registering as an adventurer. When checking, the officer is surprised because the main character doesn't have one but still forces him to register as an adventurer. Feeling unsure, the officer wanted to make sure he was sure he wanted to be an adventurer. The main character replied that he was sure and would work hard to do it. And beside him, there is also a woman who also has the same fate as the main character, where she also has no skills but still registers as an adventurer. Shortly thereafter, a man named Fukimoto taunted the two of them from behind. Fukimoto said that their decision was the same as suicide. And here, because Fukimoto is a C rank where he will guide them to do raid for the first time. Hearing that, the officer felt calm because if there was a rank C like him, the two beginners could be safe. Then after registering, Fukimoto took the main character and the woman to where the gate was going. On the way there, we are just told the main character's name is Siki, and the woman was Amami. At that time, Amami asked the reason why Siki became an adventurer even though he didn't have any skills. Siki replied that by becoming an adventurer, earning money is the easy one, considering that the drop items obtained after raid have high selling prices, and the reason why Siki needs money is for the treatment of his younger sister named Kadoha, where one day when Siki came home he found Kadoha lying down. Worried about this, Siki took him to the local hospital, and the doctor said there that Kadoha had awakened a skill that consumed himself, and the name of the disease is Incompatible Skill Syndrome. In this country, it's rare for people to be infected with cases like this, so the doctor suggested to Siki to bring Kadoha to America. Of course, the treatment is very expensive, and the doctor said the cost is around 500 million yen. And that's the reason why Siki became an adventurer even though he doesn't have any skills at all. The scene switches back to the three of them who have arrived at the gathering place for the adventurers to start the raid. While there, the two of them were not welcomed by the other two seniors, because someone like Siki and Amami were useless, and in this world, those without skills were called incompetent. So without lingering for long, they started to go inside to start the raid. The seniors didn't explain anything and just asked Siki and Amami to see because they would understand. Before entering, we are shown that it turns out that Siki has a skill called Forbidden Restriction. So why didn't Siki's skill appear? This skill is very hidden. Then it is explained that Forbidden Restriction is an ability that allows the user to use magic power in his previous life in exchange for skill point magic. And it turns out that Siki is a reincarnation, where before he was very strong and invincible, even to the point where he was called a solitary archmage. But in that life, even though he was powerful and invincible, he was unhappy and bored. But in his current life as Siki, he feels very happy even though he has many shortcomings. And now the only reason why he still wants to live is to save Kadoha. Next, the raid started. When they entered, they saw that Fukimoto and other seniors were dealing with several monsters. But with strength and cooperation they could defeat the monsters easily. Moreover, this dungeon is rank E, so the monsters inside this dungeon weren't very strong. After successfully defeating several monsters, they arrived at the gate to head to the dungeon boss. Without any hesitation, they went inside and fought the boss to clear this rank E dungeon. When entering the boss room, suddenly heard someone's voice saying several things have been accomplished, and surprisingly the extra boss appeared. Whereupon an enormous bull monster appeared. And when you see the aura of the boss, you can see that the level of the boss is similar to that of a rank B adventurer. Seeing this, everyone is scared and panicked, especially with the extra boss appearing. The exit door won't open before defeating the boss. While the seniors who didn't want to die in vain tried hard to fight back, it was a pity that their efforts always failed and one of the seniors almost died from being slashed by the monster's attack. But surprisingly, Siki manages to block the boss's attack with his sword. Siki said that he had a way to beat the boss, and for that, Siki asked the seniors to carry out his orders. Where Siki asked Fukimoto to buy time because here he would be prepared to do one thing to be able to attack the monster. Here Siki will use the power of Forbidden Restricted. This is because now he is not allowed to use this skill, but Siki will try to do it. But here Siki doesn't use his body to use magic. Instead, Siki will channel magic so that Amami will release the magic. Well, why didn't Siki use this magic with his body? Because of this skill, he couldn't use power in the previous world, or simply said his power had been sealed. So if the magic has flowed to Amami, Siki suspects that this skill can be used by him. And because they didn't have time, Siki asked Amami to do as she said. This is because Amami here also can't do anything, he can only obey him. Then after Amami agreed, Siki started smoothing magic from Amami and giving his magic. Then after the steps were completed, Siki asked Amami to cast a spell and direct the attack on the boss. And unexpectedly a large fire attack called Lotus Fireball aimed at the boss and made the boss seriously injured to death. Seeing this, Amami was very shocked because he didn't expect Siki to be a very strong person. After defeating the dungeon boss, Amami got a drop item called Minotaur Axe. In addition, they also get a mysterious red crystal. Not yet explained whether the usefulness of the crystal is expensive. Meanwhile, Siki's side leveled up and got the title of Reincarnated Archmage. After successfully defeating the Minotaur, they left the dungeon and requested emergency assistance to save the injured senior. Meanwhile, we are explained that the red crystal inside the dungeon is the core of the dungeon, where if the dungeon core is destroyed, then the dungeon will disappear. However, there are some cases where the core is not destroyed and is used as training for beginners. Then after the problem was solved, they returned to the Adventurers Guild and were given a log card, where a guild card is used to record any monster that has been defeated by someone. And the purpose of the card is for fair reward distribution. Not long after that, they were visited by the General Operational Division of the Adventure Guild named Hamada, where Hamada returns the guild card that he previously asked for. But before rewarding the two of them, Hamada wanted to ask a few questions about the extra boss that appeared. Before coming here, Siki asked Amami to be quiet and not tell about his skill, because if everyone knows, then he will be in trouble. On hearing those words, Amami would follow his orders. But here Amami also asked him one thing: would Siki want to be his teacher? But at that time Siki refused, not that he didn't want to, but if he taught the skill earlier, Siki was afraid that Amami would get caught in something dangerous that could kill him. We return to the question from Hamada, who asked Amami to explain the appearance of the extra boss and how they beat it. Amami explained that it was Senior who had seriously injured the dungeon boss and was the one who dealt the final blow. Hearing this, Hamada hesitated a bit, but because Amami only explained that, Hamada finally believed him. Now, because Hamada couldn't dig deeper here, he gave up and will wait for the seniors to recover so they can be questioned. Then the point of the meeting was finally discussed, where since they were both listed as the last hit, Hamada was going to give them some money. And surprisingly, Siki got 250k yen, while Amami's last hit got 3 million yen. Suddenly, Amami was very surprised by the gift. After the meeting, Amami, who felt he had done nothing, intended to give this money to Siki. But at that time, Siki refused because it was a gift that she got. Besides, if he accepts this money, then Hamada will suspect him. And since then, Siki and Amami have exchanged contacts and information and gone their separate ways. Meanwhile, when he comes home, Siki looks happy because even though he hasn't fought in a long time, he is still strong. And because earlier he had already risen to level 10. He checked it because usually by leveling up he would get potions and skills. And surprisingly, the system explains you can summon management fairies. Feeling curious about this, Siki pressed him. And suddenly a girl appeared and looked angry. The girl said to Siki that she had missed training for a full 20 years. Meanwhile, here Siki, who doesn't know anything, asks the girl to explain. The girl said that she was his creation in charge of managing the forbidden restriction, and his appearance is only for one purpose: to make Siki stronger. But here Siki doesn't know him. Then the girl says maybe you've lost your memory. If what he said was the truth, he asked the girl how he could die. But apparently, the girl doesn't know because she was created after the death of Siki. Hearing this confused Siki even more. If indeed the girl was created after his death, then it means in his previous life he had planned this. Meanwhile, the girl also didn't explain anything, as if the girl was covering up what happened. And maybe the girl didn't tell him because, in his previous life, Siki asked him not to tell her. Then Siki asked the girl, what do you mean to make me strong? The girl replied by updating the forbidden barrier, then Siki could become strong quickly. Then to explain this, the girl showed a system called item to trade, where, with the help of this system, Siki can take the items you have first. Of course, not all of the items he owned used to exist, all were limited and depended on the amount of stock collected by Siki first. Finding this, Siki was happy because the previous item was there, which means his item box is also there. Item box itself is an infinite time space, where the storage contains legendary weapons that have been collected by Siki. And of course, there are conditions to be able to take the sword, where Siki has to bring several points to take the sword. Feeling interested in this, Siki looked at the item box. Sure enough, when he opened the item box, all his swords were there. But what he's looking for now isn't that, because he used to have omnipotent elixir items. And when you see the price to be able to get this item costs 500 million yen, where the function of this item can heal all wounds and even the last stage of the disease. Knowing this makes Siki excited, because if he gets this thing, he doesn't have to go far to America for Kotoha treatment. And here the girl also told, which was during the previous dungeon boss fight, he can get stronger because previously she has given him a buff. So the more Siki faces monsters, the stronger he can become. Knowing this, Siki was very happy because with this he could grow strong quickly and bought the item to heal Kotoha. And for that, Siki received the forbidden barrier and will maximize it. Well, because here the girl doesn't have a name yet, Siki named her Sphere. Even though it sounded complicated, she accepted it. After getting a buff from Sphere, Siki intends to take part in the raid, which the next day Siki joins a party and raiding a rank D dungeon through the Adventurers Guild. Now because here Siki is rank F, all the members look down on him. Meanwhile, on Siki's side, there is no need to worry because the average member is rank C, so later if something unexpected happens he doesn't need to show his strength. And after making their strategy start doing raid. However, when he entered Siki, he found members who had strange auras. It had not yet been explained what would happen next. For sure there would be traitors among their members. The story continues from the D-rank dungeon. It is clear that all raid members are fighting desperately against the orcs. Suzuki, Takai, and others try hard to defeat the goblins simultaneously. They ask Siki to back off, of course, finding that Siki felt bored. And when the orc wants to breathe fire, Takai and others must resist the attack even though the movement is very messy. Then surprisingly Siki was already in front of the orc with glowing red eyes. Siki let go of his sword and stopped the orc's breath of fire. At that time we saw a flashback last night. He wanted to think about how to use the skill points to the fullest. However, the points are only 9 points, meaning that each level up gets 1 point. Then the first skill set I got was Fireball and Enhance. He pondered whether the best choice would be Fireball or Enhance. But he just found one important thing: the skill obtained from Forbidden Restriction does not require an MP. This means that Siki can use Enhance anywhere. Because of all these advantages he finally chose Enhance. And when looking at the explanation of the skill it seems that the part on the right is leaning toward close combat. And since the skill points I have are limited, I will focus the fighting style on close combat. Back in the fight, where Siki used skill Enhance and released lightning energy in one of his hands, he then hit the orc's stomach with Enhanced skill. We can then see that the sonic impact skill released by Siki is so strong that the orc is blown away and immediately dies. Takai and others are very surprised to see the strength of Siki because Siki is actually just a reserve. In Siki's own perspective, he was quite surprised because he could go up 2 levels by defeating only one orc. Suzuka, who was curious, immediately asked how you got that strong. Siki guiltily said that he just acquired this skill yesterday. Suzuka told him that he should first explain his powers so he wouldn't worry. At the end of words Suzuka said thank you for saving them. After that Takai asked the chairman to share all the loot equally because Siki has an important role in this dungeon. And if Siki is on this team until the end of the dungeon then we can finish the dungeon easily. Then happily Suzuki said that from now on we will rely on you, Siki. Soon they quickly arrived at the boss dungeon. With Siki's help and hard work, they were finally able to defeat the dungeon boss without being seriously injured, and the good news here is that Siki has leveled up to 17. For this victory, Takai is grateful and didn't expect Siki's abilities to exceed our expectations. With fiery joy, Suzuki told everyone that we will celebrate this victory in the future guild. However, surprisingly Ozawa stabbed Suzuki from behind. Then with a face without remorse, Ozawa said that I have committed murder. The story continues from a truly tragic scene where surprisingly Ozawa stabbed his own friend. Of course, Takai was very angry with his actions because he did not suspect that Ozawa would dare to commit betrayal. Takai immediately releases an attack to kill Ozawa, but the attack is easily parried by him. Takai asks Siki and Suzuka not to get involved with internal guild matters. Ozawa responded very casually that I will kill this person with my own hands. Siki, who got that order from Takai, could only obey him and didn't move at all. Siki actually gave advice to Takai not to push himself too hard, because the world is like this. But Takai said to hand over Ozawa to me. There Siki observes the movement and sword of Ozawa, who seems to have experience in the killing. And that can be seen from the red knife he uses. Back in the fight, Takai immediately moves quickly, swinging his sword toward Ozawa. Takai realizes that he should be able to do it at this speed, but what is happening in his movements can be read by Ozawa easily. And it turns out that all this time he's been hiding his skills. Ozawa's possible rank now is B. Meanwhile, Ozawa, who got a gap, is suddenly behind Takai. He mentions that longsword users have a weakness when fighting opponents with high speed. And sure enough, we can see Ozawa can stab with a circular motion. Ozawa mentioned whether Takai could kill him with such strength. At that time Takai was silent and looked at the potion in his hand. It is known that this potion is a birthday gift given by Suzuki when he first completed the mission. Actually, Takai will only use it at the right time. But because the wound is this deep, inevitably he has to use it. While drinking the potion, Ozawa didn't allow Takai to recover. He made a quick move and intended to slash his neck directly. But when the knife hit Takai's body, there was an explosion of light that sent Ozawa flying. It turns out that the potion effect adds 2 to the user's attack, and all attacks can be blocked. Then Takai gathered energy into his sword to finish Ozawa with one strike. But Ozawa again showed an insane skill, which before the attack hit him he was able to pass through and even scratch the eye of the scar with one move. Before Ozawa ended Takai's life from behind, Suzuka immediately shot an arrow to stop him. Of course, Ozawa, who was very angry, immediately strangled her and said not to interfere in this matter. With his scary face, Ozawa picked up the knife and pointed it at Suzuka's neck. Luckily Siki immediately blocked the knife with his sword. Ozawa was very surprised because there were people who could fend off the knife. Siki told Takai to hand over Ozawa to him. Ozawa felt humiliated because the substitute seemed unlikely to be able to beat me. But without words, Siki issued a sonic impact skill which made Ozawa bounce far enough from that place. Seeing Ozawa still standing, Siki intends to bring out all of his abilities. At the corner, Ozawa throws out a strange red ball and moves forward to outwit Siki's movement. Siki easily endured it, even though he said that Ozawa's strength is still too weak. Of course, a very annoyed Ozawa said that you're going to make you be my bonus material. Again, Ozawa uses his maximum speed to find a gap to kill Siki. Siki loudly insulted him that such speed is too slow, and yup, Siki can stop it with just one attack. When his attacks were stopped like that, Ozawa realized that Siki wasn't a beginner, but rather that Siki's strength was stronger than his. Ozawa says who he really is, same as before. Siki replies that I'm a substitute. Since there was no chance to kill Siki, Ozawa immediately targeted Suzuka as his weakness. Of course, Siki didn't let it go, his eyes turned white and energy came out of his body. He was already behind Ozawa and stabbed him without Ozawa noticing. Ozawa was furious as he struggled, but for some reason, he suddenly couldn't use his skill. It turns out that the one who did it all is Siki. Previously, he had attacked the vulnerable point in his mana channel, so that was why Ozawa couldn't use any skills at all. When hearing this explanation, Ozawa had arrived to be able to do anything else. He let go of the knife and gave information about the knife. Ozawa reveals, kill me with this dagger, its strength will increase every time you kill someone. The EXP points you get from killing people are more than monsters. Previously, the adventurers were hiding the fact that there would be no mass killings. With a terrible face, Ozawa asked Siki to hold the dagger and for starters kill me. Then you will know how good it is to kill people. Siki only responded with pity for him, it seems you can't escape the curse to be stronger. In his mind, Siki expressed that if it wasn't because of that forbidden restriction, maybe I could walk on the road. I think he actually saw a lot of people in my past life who couldn't choose their reason to get stronger. Of course, hearing that, Ozawa felt disgusted and asked to kill him immediately, Siki only if he didn't want to kill him. The reason is that Ozawa looks a lot like him, and if I kill you then I'll fall into the same apricot. Because Siki didn't want to kill him, Ozawa immediately took something out of his mouth, which turned out to be a smoke bomb. He immediately took his knife and intended to stab himself. Unknowingly, Siki was already behind him and hit him on the back of the neck until he fainted. Siki gives advice, before you die you'd better repent. After that, Suzuka asked why Siki said that. Previously, according to her, Siki was not that kind of person. In fact, he seemed to be a very good person, even though his aura was a little creepy before. Feeling guilty, Siki immediately stroked her head while saying thanks you. Intermittently leaving dungeon, Ozawa was immediately arrested, and Takai was taken to the hospital to get treatment. When Takai woke up, he thanked Siki for saving the chairman. If he is not treated immediately, then Suzuki will definitely die. After leaving the Takai room, Suzuka asked Siki to speak for a moment. Suzuka wanted to know that at such a young age, Siki could obtain such power. And here it is known that Suzuka is older than Siki, where Siki is still in junior high school, while Suzuka is already in senior high school. Then hear this, Siki was very happy and said that he had a little sister. Suzuka felt a little surprised because she didn't expect such a cold attitude to actually have a little sister. She reveals wants to meet Kadoha, Siki's little sister. Before going home, Suzuka asked for his cell phone number so she can contact him easily. After returning from that place, Kadoha informed him and gave the current condition. It was seen that even though Kadoha was in pain, she was still cheerful. Not long after that, strange smoke appeared from his cell phone, which turned out to be Iori. This Iori is a system that only Siki can see, and she is a person who really cares about what Siki is doing. Iori gave the good news to Siki, which is that I've added the hidden dungeon key to the exchange item. This lock is a very difficult solo dungeon. Hearing that, Siki felt weird. What feature is that? Sounds interesting. When you press this feature, a lot of ranks will appear in front of you. Then he was surprised why there is a 50% discount. Iori reveals that it is energy to buy items. Iori then asked him to use the key and level up. When he saw all the rank prices listed, Siki was impressed, because rank C alone requires millions of yen. Iori gave a little warning. If this dungeon is different from the usual dungeons, then this means that the monsters are much stronger than the usual ones. And with that, you will get more EXP for forbidden restrictions. Even though this is very difficult to do alone, with Siki's current strength, Iori guarantees that he can do it. Hearing this explanation, Siki then decided to save his money by buying a B-rank dungeon. But before that, he tried first to challenge a C-rank hidden dungeon. Without thinking, Siki immediately entered the dungeon, even though he had finished Raid Dungeon D yesterday. With very high ambition, my wish is to become even stronger in order to be able to get the antidote for Kadoha. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Kadoha's face was very pale, and he coughed up blood several times. And the bad news is no one is in the room. So like it or not, she has to wash it herself. However, when walking a few steps, Kadoha immediately fell unconscious. The nurse who saw this immediately reported it to the doctor because Kadoha's condition was getting worse. Meanwhile, Siki didn't know the news from Kadoha because now he was in a C-rank dungeon. When he saw the area around here, he felt a little strange because he had never encountered a forest like this. It also happened that he saw the Lana fruit from his previous life in front of him. Siki didn't expect that the fruit could grow in a place like this. This fruit is used for alchemy, but this fruit is rare. And if this fruit is found, then around here there will be lots of monsters. Then to find out the location of the monster, he jumped very high in the air. Right from above, the target is clearly visible, a living creature like a rabbit, but its speed is extraordinary. The story continues with Siki, who has found his target. He immediately rushes after the rabbit. However, it seems that the speed of the rabbit cannot be matched by this situation. So he had to think of something. When he thought about it, suddenly Iori appeared and gave suggestions to use Itsenia. But before that, Siki asked why she could appear in this dungeon. She explained that she could only appear in hidden dungeons. Regarding the topic of the problem, if I'm not mistaken, Itsenia is a carnivorous plant. The creature will try to eat whatever is nearby. Iori asks Siki to lure the rabbit into its habitat, and they will catch it for you, because that's the only solution that I have to do it. When chasing him and directing him to Itsenia place, for some reason, from behind there are lots of monsters chasing him. Even though we managed to catch it, later we had to fight with all of these monsters. Luckily, when approaching the habitat of Itsenia, the speed of the rabbit decreased. And to be able to increase the speed, the rabbit must eat the Lana fruit. Siki takes advantage of the opportunity to catch him. Unexpectedly, even Siki was trapped and eaten by Itsenia along with the rabbit. Same as usual, Siki can easily get out of the plant even if his level goes up. Surprisingly, his level is now 32. This is a very drastic increase. The problem this time is how to deal with all the monsters up here. From above, all the monsters started attacking Siki, but Siki only smiled and said that I had turned things around. And sure enough, he needed fire energy in his fists, and instantly kill all of these monsters with the Crimson Lotus Fireball skill. The huge explosion instantly destroyed the place until nothing remained. Siki was quite surprised that he was able to level up by 20, so the current level is 52. When looking at inventory, Siki was also quite surprised because he got some pretty good drop items. Iori said if you sell them you will easily make several million yen. Hearing this statement made Siki shocked, because if he continues to attack this dungeon then I can get 1 billion yen in a short time. Iori said again that Siki can only enter a rank C hidden dungeon once, so if you want to get more from this dungeon, Siki must enter a rank B dungeon. Their conversation suddenly stopped from Siki, who felt a very strong energy in front of him, and sure enough, in front of him was a rank C dungeon boss. The monster's appearance was very weird, namely a half-dragon man. Iori immediately analyzed the strength of the monster. Surprisingly, to fight this monster, it was recommended that Siki reach level 150. Despite knowing the difference in power, Siki did not want to back down, because if he beat him, he would get a lot of money. Siki said that this dungeon boss is just an EXP resource. Iori slightly explained that dragon skin is special because it can absorb magic. Usually, they are known as the immortal enemy of the witches. Knowing that Siki tried to attack him using physical attacks, but his attacks failed to scratch the monster. Then the monster spits out a strange liquid from its mouth. The liquid that hit the ground immediately melted. This means that if Siki is exposed to the liquid, he will die. It is also very likely that other attacks will definitely cause fatal injuries. Siki smiled, saying it's been a while since I wasn't this nervous against enemies. Then he took out an item from the Forbidden Restriction ability. He can store and retrieve items whenever he wants in separate dimensions. Once again, Siki will attack the monster with the axe he just got. Siki darted to the back of the monster's neck and intended to decapitate it, but what happened was that the axe couldn't scratch the monster's neck. At that time, Monster reversed the situation by throwing Siki with its tail. Surprisingly, Siki's axe that tried to withstand the attack was broken into two. Having no more weapons, Siki desperately attacks him with magic, as it was expected that his magic was absorbed by the dragon, which meant that the attack meant absolutely nothing to fight dungeon bosses. Of course, Siki doesn't just keep quiet, he has got an idea to solve the problem. There should be a limit to the monster's absorbing magic. If Siki can pass it, then it will leak. The good news here is that since Forbidden Restriction allows him to use skills without consuming MP, then he can cast the Fireball skill without fear of losing MP. With a face filled with confidence, Siki immediately cast the skill Crimson Lotus Fireball repeatedly. That's where the surprising thing happened, because too often using this skill, Siki repeatedly vomited a lot of blood. This means that even if you don't use MP, your physical strength cannot withstand the skill's weight. Despite knowing that this would happen, Siki still continued to use it, because according to him this pain is not comparable to the pain of losing Kadoa. Then we saw a large explosion of fire at the hole in that place, until in the end, the monster could not withstand the magic it received, so the human body of the monster was destroyed. Getting the opportunity, Siki, who was exhausted, continued to use the skill until the monster exploded. As expected, even though Siki was exhausted and his stamina was low, he managed to defeat the dungeon boss. For that victory, he got a B rank Poison Dragon Sword. Yes, this is a very passable reward for defeating this monster. After that, Siki lay limp and couldn't move. Because Siki fainted, like it or not, Iori immediately took Siki out of this hidden dungeon. However, Iori put him in the wrong coordination, which means that this room does not belong to Siki but in someone else's place. And it turns out that this is Amami's room. Amami, who entered the room, was very surprised because Siki was in his room in a weak condition. Long story short, Amami immediately takes care of Siki to make her better. Siki thanks for helping him. Amami asked why Siki could be in this place. Siki explained what happened before. When hearing this, Amami was very surprised because going alone to a rank C dungeon was crazy. Before leaving, Amami gave him some food because, from the looks of it, Siki was quite hungry. Of course, Siki can't refuse it because it's not good to receive kindness from someone. When eating the soup, Siki was very happy because the cooking was very delicious. Then Siki asked, "Do you live apart from your parents?" Amami explained that his parents died after being attacked by monsters 7 years ago. Siki asks if that problem made you a hunter. Amami replied that it was not completely wrong, but she hoped to save many people from being like me. So that's why. Previously, she asked Siki to make her a student. Even though previously Siki said I wasn't fit to be a hunter, she wished to want to leave with everything she had. Hearing that, Siki immediately apologized and withdrew from the previous words, because Amami now has great confidence. "So now would you be my disciple?" Hearing this, Amami felt confused and very happy. Why only now Siki said it? Siki answered, "To be an adventurer it only takes courage." Hearing that, Amami of course accepted it and said, "I will look forward to the first lesson." After returning from Amami's place, Siki returned home to check his inventory. After taking a thorough look, he will sell some items and will use the rest. Then when he saw the stats and level now, Siki was quite surprised because his level was now 70. Iori stated that with this, Siki is now on par with C ranker. During this fun, Siki got a call from a doctor who said that Kadoha's condition was critical. If this continued, then it could be that Kadoha would die. The doctor suggested that Siki stays near Kadoha for a while. Siki asks the doctor to give his phone to Kadoha. Siki asks Kadoha to hold on a little longer because I've found a way to heal you. Despite such pain, Kadoha replied that I would wait for you. At that time, Siki's face became very serious. He asked Iori if I could get 500 million yes. Even so, Siki has to do it, otherwise Kadoha will die. Once again, Ioro gave a warning not to be careless because, with his current rank, it is impossible for him to survive the dungeon. Even though he has warned him several times, Siki remains firm with his decision, so Iori can only support it. Before long, Lama Siki immediately bought on a rank dungeon and entered the dungeon without hesitation. Before heading to the floor, Iori will guide Siki so he doesn't make a big mistake. But when I wanted to enter the floor, Siki was surprised by the presence of a lion guarding Tower Nema. The bad news is that the level of the guard is at a level far from Siki, namely 350. Siki isn't afraid at all, because fighting monsters is strong, even if he thinks it's an advantage. If he can defeat him, then he will get a rare item, and fighting the next monster will not be too difficult. To fight an enemy as strong as this, Siki has exchanged several points for a new skill called Tenma. This skill is very useful for close combat. Tenma is a spell that causes a significant surge in terms of physical abilities when enveloped by highly concentrated mana. Exactly once Siki will use this moment to destroy the monster. The lion started to move forward and tried to bite him. Siki, who was ready, immediately used this skill. And sure enough, he was able to move quickly and kick the lion to blow it far enough from that place. The good news here is that he can use Tenma freely because he doesn't use MP. After dropping the lion, a notification appears saying that there is a special quest. Iori was very surprised because the special quests were a good opportunity to grow. The quest gave him the mission to tame the Lion of Nema. The reward is summoning magic. Knowing that, Siki felt a little strange about it, but if it was in his mind, then this is a very rewarding quest. At the time of thinking that, from front, Nema already moved to attack again. But with a flash, Siki can take him down with Tenma. Even though it's been taken down like that, Name can still stand up, and for some reason, Tenma Siki's attack doesn't have too much effect. However, Siki keeps trying. According to him, by making Nema his pet, it will be easy for him to get to the boss floor. After several battles, Siki finally realized that Nema had the same move. Of course, this is a big chance for Siki to beat him. He repeatedly dodged Nema's moves and succeeded in repeatedly knocking Nema down. In the end, with a very crushing blow, finally, Name was made helpless. Then for the last time, Siki asked Name to listen to him. Because he was battered and unable to do anything, Name finally complied with Siki's orders, which means he has completed the special quest. Siki gained Nema's summoning magic reward. Siki had also leveled up and obtained the White Lion gauntlets. Surprisingly, his level rose quite drastically and now it has become 120. Before continuing his journey, Siki asked Iori to provide an explanation of what enemies he would face. Iori said that the enemy was a B rank undead monster pack of the first layer. After hearing this explanation, Siki chose a skill that could be useful in the next battle. And of course, Siki will utilize all the monsters in the first layer to get a lot of EXP. The story continues with Siki, who intends to clear the dungeon. Before entering the sphere, warned Siki that if he intends to enter, then he must complete it because the dungeon will not be opened until the boss is defeated. Even though Siki has been warned, he will continue. So why is Siki in such a hurry here? Kadoha's condition is getting worse day by day. When entering, Siki saw seals on every edge of the building, and that was a sign that this dungeon was closed. Like it or not, Siki had to finish it. In addition, the sphere explained that the undead had come and asked Siki to get ready. Now, because of the high-level undead, Siki didn't fight him alone, where he summoned Nemia as their opponent, whereupon Siki ordered the Nema to run around to attract the attention of the undead. And the reason Siki asked Nema to do that was he made Nema into bait so Siki could annihilate them in one strike. And then after the undead were provoked, Siki began to coat his sword with Tenma and then became a demon sword, where with just one slash Siki managed to kill all the gathered undead. And thanks to that, Siki leveled up. After checking his status, Siki was surprised because he didn't expect his level to rise rapidly to around 240. Apart from that, he also got drop items that had high price values. Then Siki asked Sphere how much money if all the items owned were sold. Sphere answered that the total of all those sales was around 600 million yen. Finding that, Siki was quite a shock because he didn't expect to be able to raise money this fast. And because his dream has been achieved, Siki intends to go home. Hearing this, of course, Sphere told Siki that he couldn't go home before heading to the top floor and defeating the boss. Finding this, Siki does not run out of ideas, and he seeks solutions to quickly go to the top. Then when thinking that the shape of this tower rises, Siki intends to forcefully destroy the roof so he can meet the dungeon boss quickly. Meanwhile, on the Sphere side, who found a crazy idea from Siki, just kept silent and said, "Are you crazy?" Siki only replied that this was the only thing he could do so he could go home soon. It wasn't long before Siki started preparing to destroy the roof. Before launching the action, Sphere warns that the boss tower in this dungeon is the Grim Reaper, which has level 550. Even though here Siki knows that his level is far apart, but here Siki is sure that he can beat him, because, with the power of the forbidden restriction, anything can happen. Then after getting ready, Siki took out skill Tenma and prepared to destroy the roof to the top floor. Sure enough, Siki's crazy action was successful, and they both reached the top floor. When he was there, it was seen that the Grim Reaper was seen sitting in his king's chair. It didn't take long for the Grim Reaper, who was starting to be threatened, immediately mobilized the undead to fight Siki. Meanwhile, Siki's side used the perception block skill to block the attacks of the undead. Where is this skill useful for hiding its whereabouts so the undead doesn't attack it? Feeling his undead attack fail, the Grim Reaper came down and immediately behind him and ready to make a slash. But because here Siki already knows this tactic, Siki immediately uses the skill Eye of Wisdom to find out his whereabouts. Even though the Eye of Wisdom in Papua is not complete yet, this upper level ability is still useful to fight it. Thanks to that, Siki managed to avoid and counterattack, and as he suspected, his sword managed to stab the Grim Reaper. But even though the attack was successful, the level difference made the attack only do a little damage. But even so, Siki is sure that if he attacks continuously, then Siki can beat him. But here Siki missed one thing, where he just remembered that now he has a weak mental resistance. And at the same time, Siki saw the shadow of a Kadoha who was in pain. Seeing this, Siki fell silent, while the Grim Reaper was seen behind him and carried out a slash. And sure enough, because at that time, Siki, who had been mentally affected, couldn't avoid it and was hit by a slash from the Grim Reaper. In this difficult condition, Siki was confused about what to do, and the only thing that occurred to him was Kadoha's happiness. Memories of happiness with Kadoha made him rise from his situation, because if he were to die here, then his past and present life would be just as boring. And suddenly a system appears and tells Siki whether you want to remove the forbidden restriction. While the Sphere, who knew this, was also surprised because as long as he was created he didn't know about this. On the side of Siki, who sees this, asks if she accepts, then my restriction will be released. Here Siki, who doesn't understand all of this, finally accepts it and will accept the consequences later. After accepting that, the system then lifted the forbidden restriction and started setting up Forbidden Archmage for free. And at the same time, the Grim Reaper, who felt an air of danger, immediately slashed Siki from behind. But it was too late because Siki has now got his strength back in full. Where because Siki didn't want to waste time, he immediately shot and landed an attack on the Grim Reaper, which is a powerful power wielded by Siki, which power is very crazy, and only with a light attack Siki managed to defeat the Grim Reaper and the dungeon until nothing remained. Then after being released, Siki went straight home and headed to the hospital with his abilities. And at the same time at the hospital, it was seen that Kadoha's condition was getting worse and he was starting to lose consciousness. But at the right time, before Kadoha lost his life, Siki came and immediately drank the elixir he had just bought with all the money he had. And the effects of these items are very crazy, where Kadoha looks fit and in normal condition. Seeing this, Siki was moved to feel both sad and happy because Kadoha had returned. After that, Siki came to the doctor and asked for an explanation of him whether Kadoha's condition had returned to normal. The doctor said that Kadoha had returned to normal and was allowed to go home tomorrow. The doctor also asked Siki elixir what could heal like that. Siki replied that Siki found an item that can cure all diseases. Hearing that, the doctor smiled and said, I didn't expect elixir to be like that. And if so, it must be somewhere far away and mysterious. With a smile, Siki could only laugh. So, because the next day Kadoha was allowed to go home, Siki intends to prepare a taxi. But at that time Kadoha refused and said that she wanted to walk because it had been a long time since she had seen the situation outside. While walking home, the two of them bought some ingredients to make their favorite meal from Kadoha. And when he got home, Siki forgot that Sphere was still there. But in reality, Kadoha is not afraid but happy. And because they like to talk, finally they both can get along quickly. Then Siki will cook Kadoha's favorite meal. Then when it was finished, they both ate the meal happily and reminisced about their past. And suddenly when eating, there was news that there was an announcement finding about the emergence of a large dungeon that had appeared in the Tokyo urban area. Then due to the sudden incident, the Adventurers Guild determined that the dungeon that appeared was a rank level. The Adventurers Guild has also issued a registration sheet for adventurers who wish to take part in the raid in the dungeon. And at the same time, an emergency quest appeared, where the quest says that the quest done by Siki is called Compensation Release of Restrictions and has a 6-star difficulty, and the system asks to complete dungeon crystal mines within 30 days. Discovering this, Siki didn't expect that there was a special quest like Nemia, but the most important thing is why this quest has a time frame. And when thinking about this, Siki finally realized that this quest was designated as compensation for releasing the forbidden restriction. And the dungeon the system meant the dungeon that had just appeared in Tokyo City. And the reason why the quest has time is, if Siki can't complete it within the specified time, he will die. Hearing this, Sphere was very surprised. Even though he was a manager of power, she didn't know about this. The next day, Kadoha begins to live a normal life. As for Siki, he will go to the realm evaluation site so he can enter the dungeon. Because the conditions to enter the A rank dungeon was at least he had to be a B rank, or and for that today he would check it out. Of course, the officers there looked belittled Siki because someone without skill intends to evaluate to take part in raid in the A rank world. But at that time the officer was left speechless because after placing his hand on the evaluation site, the officer was surprised because he was embarrassed. Siki was an incompetent person, but his level is now 240. After passing the measurement exam, Siki is directed to the practical exam. And when heading to the exam site, Siki saw two men arguing, where the two men were an A-rank person named Ryuzaki and his subordinate named Shimizu, where one can see that the crux of their problem is that Shimizu doesn't accept being blamed because it wasn't his fault. And of course, as the guild leader, Ryuzaki must be responsible for the fallen members. But the fact is that here Ryuzaki was angry and intended to hit Shimizu, but Siki, who saw this, stopped him. This makes our Ryuzaki even angrier and intends to fight Siki, but that didn't happen because the summoner Ryuzaki went to the reception desk. Thanks to that, there was no chaos. Meanwhile, Shimizu was here thanking him and telling him about their problems and why Ryuzaki got angry like this. And the conversation between Siki and Shimizu was cut short after Siki was called to do a practice exam. Hearing this, Shimizu asked Siki to step down because Ryuzaki would be the examiner, where every year Ryuzaki becomes a tester and everyone who is always tested by him is always seriously injured. But here Siki said that it would be fine, even though I look weak, but actually I am a strong person. Meanwhile, on Ryuzaki's side, he saw his opponent was that the man earlier was very happy and was going to teach him manners. On the other hand, Siki isn't scared in the slightest. Instead, he's happy because his opponent is like him, because he doesn't need to hold back his strength to be able to beat him. Shortly thereafter, the test began, where Ryuzaki immediately landed an attack on Siki, but at that time Siki managed to avoid it. The unexpected effect of the attack shattered the floor, and it showed that Ryuzaki was a very strong adventurer. Adding to Ryuzaki's main strength is not all, where he can manipulate gravity as he pleases. But even so, his second attack was still able to be avoided by Siki. Seeing this, Ryuzaki is even more excited and will bring out his full abilities to get revenge. On the side of Siki, he then uses Tenma to increase defense if an attack from Ryuzaki cannot be avoided. And because this could be dangerous for him, Siki uses the Eye of Wisdom to see his movements and thwart his gravity skill. Seeing that, Ryuzaki was confused again, because, for the first time, he saw someone as strong as this incompetent. However, their fight did not continue because the test was over, while Siki also doesn't want to continue because he's still busy with other things. After the measurement and evaluation finally, it was decided that Siki would be rank A, while Shimizu, who saw that Siki was fine, felt confused. What was certain if he was fine meant that Siki was a very strong person. And because here Shimizu felt grateful, he gave his mobile number. If he needs help, he will meet him. Then after finishing taking care of this, Siki needs steps to join the guild, and to be able to find out about this, maybe Siki will meet Takai or Suzukaze. And when heading home, surprisingly the wardens were running because a monster appeared in the middle of the city. Knowing that there was a monster, Siki rushed over to help. Since the appearance of the gate in the middle of the city was the cause, he would settle it with his own hands. And when you look at it with the eyes of wisdom, the monster is a giant snake. Knowing this information, Siki will take care of this quickly. The story begins with the exam supervisor named Hamada surprised after seeing the rapid development of Siki. Even though it's still a few months, Siki has become a rank A hunter even though someone is incompetent. Of course, Hamada, who found this, felt strange, because even if someone was talented, at that time it was impossible to get rank. A feeling that he didn't understand this, Hamada would tell the higher-ups of the Adventurers Guild about this. Scene continuation of several adventurers who are seen fighting the snake monster, and not just one but several B-rank adventurers. But their efforts were fruitless because the attacks they launched did not injure the snake in the least. Not long after, a B-rank adventurer named Seidu appeared, where the attacks from him are powerful enough to fight these monsters. From a distance, Siki just watched, because here he wanted to see how strong rank and C-rank adventurers were and what abilities they had. And when he saw their fight, Siki looked disappointed because even though they were at B-rank level, why were they stupid? Even though the opponent they fought was still not defeated and is now absorbing energy to attack. Suddenly Seidu, who didn't expect this, was shocked and just kept silent, and at the same time, Siki, who couldn't stay still, appeared and slashed the monster with just one slash. The civilians who saw this were amazed at who it was, even though what they were fighting was a golem monster that had hard scales. On the side of Siki, who doesn't want to be attracted to attention, he leaves immediately, because if he gets caught, it will be troublesome in the future. But unfortunately, not far from there is a woman who has taken pictures and videos of Siki's actions when fighting the monster. It has not been revealed who this girl is. For sure she is an adventurer. Curious about the man, the girl searched the adventurer's database for information. And not long after searching, finally, the girl found that the man was Siki Iori and someone a rank. Seeing this, the girl became even more interested, especially when Siki was an incompetent person. We return to the direction of the Siki house, where at that time Kadoha was surprised that his brother's actions had been recorded and uploaded by a famous streamer named Nagisawa Suzu. This streamer is none other than the girl from earlier. Nagisawa Suzu used to be a famous idol, and then after the gate opened, Suzu became a famous adventurer and has great abilities. Seeing this is not happy, Siki feels disappointed because if his identity is spread, Kadoha is in danger. So here, because Siki doesn't want Kadoha to be in danger, he will contact Suzu and ask to delete the video. Not long after, finally, there was a reply that Suzu would delete the video as long as Siki wanted to meet at the agreed place, and as a result, like it or not, Siki here had to obey her. The scene continues the next day when Siki goes to the Adventurers Guild to meet up with Suzu. Then when he was there, Suzu immediately took him to a quiet room, because if he spoke in a public place it would invite a crowd. After arriving in the room, they introduced themselves each and then entered into the discussion of the meeting, to which Siki immediately told Suzu to delete the video. As agreed, Suzu immediately deleted it. But here Suzu advises that the response from the audience is quite good, but why doesn't Siki like that? Here Siki said that he didn't become famous because his life goal was not to be like that, which turned out to be a reason why Suzu wanted to meet Siki here. But because Siki doesn't want to stand out, he definitely won't accept it. Whereas if they work together, they can become famous quickly. Then Siki asks Suzu why she wants to be famous. Isn't she already famous now? Suzu replied that her popularity is not enough now because her dream is to become famous all over the world and visit several places to express her expressions. On the side of Siki himself, he started to think about creating a clan because to enter in a ranked dungeon he needed that. So here Siki thanks and will consider cooperating with her. Hearing that, Suzu looked overjoyed, but before that Siki had a requirement if she cooperated with him, where here Siki asked Suzu not to record it without his permission. Found that Suzu accepted it. Now because they had agreed, they finally worked together to create a clan. And before going home, Siki asked Suzu for an autograph as a gift to Kadoha because Kadoha idolized her. Of course, before leaving, Suzu also asked Siki if he had any acquaintances he could join. Siki was blessed, but their levels were only C rank and F rank. Upon hearing that, Suzu was happy because if there was, then she could register clan with the Adventurers Guild. After returning from there, Siki immediately gave Kadoha an autograph from Suzu. The city that found this was grateful and overjoyed. Then Siki thought he would contact some people he wanted to work with, and the person he contacted was Takai. But Takai at that time couldn't come with him because he was still injured and still recovering. And because Takai couldn't join, Siki invited Amami and Suzukaze, and it also happened that they wanted to come, so there was one less person left. And when thinking about this, Siki remembers that Shimizu hasn't joined any clan yet, and for that he tries to contact him to ask if he wants to work with him to become a member of his clan. That night, feeling that he is still weak, Siki intends to grind to get stronger. Then Siki takes out a special key that can open a B-rank dungeon. Here Siki intends to become stronger so that he cannot escape the curse of the forbidden restriction. And soon the grinding began, and when entering Gate Siki he was immediately confronted by a large and very strong wolf monster. But with his current strength and level, a monster like that is nothing more than Siki. And to speed up the level up here, Siki summons Nemiya to finish off the monsters that are around. After 1 hour of hunting and killing all the monsters, finally Siki managed to meet the boss, and the boss that will be fought this time is the Monster Troll King. Before carrying out the attack, Siki asked Nemiya to fight the monster, but unfortunately, with just one attack, Nemiya was defeated. Seeing that this monster is very strong, Siki is getting excited because the stronger the opponent, the faster the level obtained. After getting ready, Siki immediately slashed from a distance with his sword pulped with Tenma energy. It looks like the powerful slash managed to defeat the monster with just one strike. After successfully defeating the monster, Siki got the title of Club of Kings, and his level has now risen to 400. After finishing hunting, Siki came home, and while resting, Suzu contacted him if he wanted to meet to discuss the clan created by Siki. Here Siki explains that he intends to create a clan to clear the dungeon. Hearing this, Shimizu accepted it. But before that, he told Ryuzaki to be careful because a few days had passed and Ryuzaki met him and asked for some information from him. Besides that, Shimizu also warned that Ryuzaki is a cruel person, so it's possible that when he does Reidi Dinji in a rank in the middle of us, Ryuzaki will use it for revenge. Hearing that, Siki said, I don't know what Ryuzaki will do later, but he will be fine. After returning from that meeting, Siki had succeeded in gathering 3 people to be able to create a clan. So here Siki will immediately contact Suzu to set up a clan formation meeting and member introductions. And before that, Siki thought that the ranked dungeon could threaten its members. And since there were still 26 days left, Siki had no intention of entering the dungeon just yet. Because now he thought it was better to train Amami and Suzukaze to become stronger, so that during the raid there will be no unexpected things that could harm them both. And of course, because the time is very short, Siki will unusually train them. The scene continues as the meeting arrives, where Siki is going to take Kadoa because she wants to meet Suzu. Then when they were in that place, all had gathered. All members are noisy with a girl who is with Siki's genitals so they don't get confused. Siki introduces that she is his younger sister named Kadoha, while on the side of Kadoha, who saw his idol in front of his very eyes very happily. Well, now that everyone has gathered, Siki asked everyone to introduce themselves. And because everyone was already acquainted with Siki, revealed that this clan would radiate to the ranked dungeon that appeared in the middle of the city. But before doing the raid, Siki will train Amami and Suzukaze to make them even stronger, because they are both still at the level of F rank and C rank. At first, Amami and Suzukaze were confused about how Siki could make them both stronger in such a short amount of time. On the other hand, Suzu said that if the coach was Siki, maybe it wouldn't be impossible, because Siki has proven that even though he is an incompetent person and he can rise to a rank quickly. Now, so that everyone is not confused, Siki revealed that he has a skill, but his skill is not visible, because his skill is a hidden skill. The story continues with Siki discussing with the others. Siki said that he has a hidden skill. Of course, hearing that, everyone was quite surprised and no one expected it. It turned out that none of the members knew about it at all. Kadoha alone also doesn't know it. Siki apologizes for not telling them all this time. However, everyone becomes very aware of how Siki can be this strong. In Amami's mind, she said sure what happened in the dungeon past was Siki's hidden skill. Suzu asked, what skill do you mean? Siki can't tell in detail. In general, these skills allow them to master the abilities of various skills. Hearing that, everyone was very surprised how Siki could have such an illogical ability like that. Siki said that even though this skill is unreasonable, it also has weaknesses, but as long as you know it, that's enough for me. Suzuka asked, what does this skill have to do with making me and Amami stronger? Exactly. The connection is great, which is because incompetents don't have skills, they can use magic. Obviously, Amami, who didn't know anything, asked what is magic different from skill. Siki explained that basically skill is a form of magic, like magic that can be used properly by incompetent. And as Amami already knew, he had already cast magic even just once, where on that occasion Siki had only cast the spell strong enough to kill a minotaur in one shot. So that's why Amami is very suitable for studying magic. Meanwhile, Siki will give in-depth lessons regarding Suzuka's skills. According to the hypothesis, all high-rank adventurers have different levels of understanding of the skills they possess. Or in other words, there is a possibility that the skill can develop as she understands it. Suzu also confirmed that what Siki said had some truth to it. Skills can change depending on how you use them. So that's what Amami and Suzuki will learn in the near future. After returning from here, Siki wanted to teach Amami to consciously use magic. Of course, Kadoha and Suzuka are interested and come to see it, while the others have other businesses. When everyone entered Siki's room, Amami and Suzuka were very surprised by the fairies in front of them. Siki explains that he is named Sphere Iori, and Sphere is part of hidden skill. Then they headed straight to the point. Here Siki gave the same instructions as before, and I'll touch your back again to stimulate the MP flow. The ritual began, and Amami began to feel warmth emerging from within her body. Yup, that's exactly the MP stream. Siki says maybe you will be weak, but I will handle it. Siki asked Amami to control the flow of mana well. If it continues like that, then one day she will become a very great mage. However, when he had focused long enough, it seemed that Amami could no longer hold it in, and as a result, all of her stamina was drained. Seeing Amami's pretty good progress, Siki immediately gave her a potion to heal in a short time. Of course, Suzuka was surprised how could Siki get the potion. Same as before, Siki only replied that he got this potion from hidden skill. Soon Siki will repeat this exercise, because according to her now we can do it up to 50 times a day. Of course, Amami felt shocked because practicing 50 times a day would be very tiring. On the other hand, Siki said that this was just basic training. The sphere explained to Siki that Amami was an ordinary person, so you can only do it little by little. Long story short, the training ended, even though at a few points Amami had quite a hard time, but it's good that he has got an idea about doing magic. Then Siki and Suzu took Suzuka to a rank B dungeon. Now the one who will train Suzuka is Suzu, because according to her, she is the person who passes to develop Suzuka's skills. First, she asked Suzuka to explain her skill details. Suzuka explained that the skill was called Magical Cupid Bow, and was able to add various effects to bows and arrows. She can also use elemental skills or debuffs on enemies. She can make the arrows go further or make them spin. Hearing this explanation, Suzu said, "Did Suzuka ever use any other method? Are you satisfied just because of that? And if she can come up with various ways to use skills, you will be able to deal with higher rank monsters with lower status." Because Suzuka didn't really understand the explanation, Siki asked Suzu to practice it directly against monsters. And that's right, ahead is the Minotaur. Suzu immediately took off at high speed, successfully dodging the Minotaur's arrow attack with ease. Then she used the Mirage Dancer skill. Actually, this is a support skill to buff team members, but by changing the way I can fight alone. She will cast a speed buff on her opponent's hind legs. That way the Minotaur couldn't balance with its front legs. Exactly, not long ago Minotaur that fell. Of course, it made Amami surprised. How to do this? Next, Suzu cast an attack buff on herself. It was clear that Suzu's attacks were terrifying. 1/Minotaur immediately dies. Then do you understand, Suzuka? Siki then explained again that skill is not related to the level you have, but strength skills increase according to the way you look at it. Inside her heart, Suzuka thought about whether she could do that. Meanwhile, Siki has another way to make Suzuka strong, namely with this item, Suzuka can become strong. Then Siki asked if you felt your skill had gotten stronger. Suzu answered yes, but I always thought it was because my level or stats increased. According to Siki, that is not the case. That is, you can increase your skills if your status rises. In other words, it is skill level. Hearing that, Suzu and Suzuka felt confused about what Siki was talking about. According to Siki, skill works exactly the same as status. Suzuka asked, if that's the case, why isn't the appraiser displaying the skill level? Siki answered, even though it's almost the same, the concept is different, so the skill level won't appear in appraisal. You need a different device to see the skill level. Because in this world no one has made it, Siki will make it so they can improve their skills. Then Siki immediately asked Suzuka to practice. By killing all the monsters in this dungeon, Suzuka will definitely be able to find out more about her skills. After returning from there, when making appraiser, Siki was very surprised because there was already one in the inventory. Siki was confused. How could an appraiser created in his previous life be here, but why is this also an appraiser status? Sphere explains that it could have been in Siki's previous life that both made him. However, Siki doesn't remember once doing that. Even though Siki is feeling confused, for now, he will put this matter aside as there is little time left. The only thing that matters now is to focus on mastering crystal mines. The next day, Siki immediately showed Suzuka appraiser status. Suzuka was obviously very surprised how Siki could possibly make it in just one day. Siki asked to put that problem aside and asked her to measure the skill right now. After laying her hands on the appraiser, Suzuka was very surprised because the skill level was obvious. Even though it was a B rank skill, it was still a low level. Knowing this, Suzuka became worried because it would be very difficult to enter a B or a rank dungeon. Siki said that it wasn't too much of a problem, the skill would get stronger if she mastered it. According to Siki, her skill potential is quite large. After knowing all that, Siki took her to the practice room. She would be training with Amami, so it was quite an efficient training. And it turns out that the training is very simple, where Amami and Suzuka will fight Siki alone. Of course, Suzuka and Amami were surprised because they couldn't possibly win against Siki, who was already this strong. Siki smilingly answered that this is the fastest way to make them both stronger. Before the fight started, Siki asked Suzuka to focus on improving her skills, while Amami only focused on using magic well. Since Siki had said that, the battle between them finally started. Suzuka prepares to move her bow filled with energy. Scene here can accelerate the rate of the arc. However, Siki can easily avoid it. But Siki is surprised by the bow that suddenly becomes a water wave. Taking the surprise attack, Siki wouldn't dodge it as a result of Suzuka's development. With the first attack successful, Suzuka releases her arrows, which are coated with lightning and will become shockwaves to take Siki down. However, the problem here is that Suzuka is still not very used to using it. As a result, the high-powered attack misses. But it didn't stop there. It turned out that Suzuka could control the arrow toward the target. Just as before, even though Siki was impressed by Suzuka's progress, the attack wasn't enough to injure him. Amami began to be able to feel the fire within her body. She immediately chanted the magic named Crimson Lotus Fireball with immense energy. Siki was surprised that Amami could do it in one chant. But Siki can easily destroy the magic with the same technique. After that, Siki praised them for their significant development. However, there are some problems that need to be fixed, whereas in the slightly upset side because Siki can also use the same magic as him. Their next task is to work together to be able to limit my movements. An hour later they finally finished their practice, but the result was they couldn't hurt Siki at all. Even though this training hasn't been fruitful, Siki believes that the two of them have progressed even though they don't realize it. Then their conversation was stopped by Shimizu, who gave bad news. Ryuzaki entered the crystal mines but has not returned for 2 days. Of course, Siki felt shocked by what actually happened to Ryuzaki. On the top floor of the Adventurers Guild, the chairman of the Adventurers Guild Council, Ugami Yoshido, was talking about the challenge to clear the ranked dungeon called Crystal Mines, which was currently stalled. This happened because the Adventurers Guild had lost contact with all the A-rank adventurers there. After this news, they decided to upgrade the Crystal Mines to an S-rank dungeon. Ugami is worried that there will be a disaster if the monsters come out of the dungeon like that. So that's the reason why they want an S-rank adventurer like Satsuki Ren, who is an S-rank adventurer, to take care of it. Satsuki Ren easily accepted it. S-rank adventurers are allowed to tackle large dungeons alone, so it would be easier to rely on Satsuki Ren at times like this. So far there have only been 9 S-rank adventurers in the entire country. There is no promotion exam to become an S-rank adventurer. S-rank adventurers are selected directly by the guild based on ability. People who have strength far exceeding a rank will be recognized as S-rank. In other words, every S-rank adventurer is as strong as a one-man army. S-rank adventurers are also exempt from all dungeon rules set by the guild. For example, in tackling large dungeons, they could ignore the number of adventurers usually regulated by the guild. Satsuki Ren said that I might start the mission tomorrow. Ugami of course didn't mind it. This young man was grateful because Satsuki Ren was willing to act immediately. Satsuki Ren is happy to hear that and leaves from there. While in the elevator, Satsuki Ren was previously curious about Ugami's reason for calling him. But now that he knows that Ugami needs him to clear the S-rank dungeon, Satsuki Ren thinks of another plan that must be completed. Elsewhere, Nagisawa arrives and immediately apologizes for making everyone wait. Shimizu on the other hand also apologized for calling the girl over. Shimizu certainly didn't mind and also asked why the man called me. Shimizu began to tell him that the clan he belonged to, namely the Red Dragons, suddenly lost contact with them after entering the Crystal Mines dungeon. Nagisawa knows the fact that Shimizu comes from the Red Dragons. Of course, Shimizu was surprised how Nagisawa knew that. Nagisawa apologized, but I've heard a lot of bad stories about Red Dragons before. More precisely about the leader of the Red Dragons named Ryuzaki. Shimizu of course couldn't agree more. Ryuzaki is a rude and unpredictable person. That's why Shimizu apologized, because I selfishly asked everyone there for help. Shimizu wants to know if everyone wants to help save the Red Dragons. Who would have thought? Nagisawa quickly refused and even called the Red Dragons trash. I don't want to risk my life to help the Red Dragons. Shimizu immediately confirmed the girl's words. I also know how selfish people are for asking for such things. Shimizu was initially treated cruelly and was always bullied by Ryuzaki. However, no matter what, Ryuzaki is still the person who has supported him all this time. From the bottom of my heart, that's the reason why Shimizu wants to help if he can. Nagisawa reminded him again that Shimizu would not only be risking his own life but everyone else's if he continued to carry out his plan. Shimizu was aware of this, but it seemed to me that everyone would be safe as long as they could limit themselves. They only needed to regulate the number of dangers that needed to be faced. Moreover, their goal in entering the dungeon was only to save the Red Dragons. However, in the end, I still couldn't force it. Nagisawa understood, so I asked everyone's opinion. 2 girls started talking and apologizing. They admitted that they were still too afraid to enter the big dungeon because they were fully aware of their weaknesses and limited abilities. The other girls immediately agreed and realized that it was too early for them to do so. On the other hand, Siki understands that they need at least 5 members to enter the Crystal Mines. Now even A-rank adventurers have failed to solve it. It would be too dangerous to go with only 2 reliable companions. Besides, even if they manage to save Ryuzaki, I might end up paying for the good they did by holding a grudge. At that time, Shimizu looked so listless. It made sense to him that the previous 2 girls refused to risk their lives like that. In his mind, Shimizu convinced himself that there was no other way than for him to go into the Crystal Mines myself. At that time, Siki continues to watch, suddenly asking if Shimizu really wants to save Ryuzaki. Shimizu confidently agreed. If I could, I would definitely save Ryuzaki. Shimizu revealed that Ryuzaki wasn't always bad, even though it is very different. Ryuzaki doesn't have strong skills and doesn't deserve praise either. When he was still a layman, other adventurers often teased him. However, Ryuzaki didn't care and instead continued to train his skills and body and managed to become a strong figure. That experience made him no longer trust anyone but himself. I looked down on the people around me and ended up starting a fight. Ever since Shimizu found out what kind of person Ryuzaki really was, I became sympathetic. Siki understands Shimizu's current feelings, therefore I am willing to help. Everyone was certainly surprised to hear that. But not long after, Nagisawa asked what Siki would do with this number of adventurers. Their number was less than the regulations for entering the dungeon. Siki casually says that they can go straight in. Of course, Nagisawa was confused by that answer. Siki Iori again explains that they only need to enter without permission. They can be safe as long as they are not discovered by the guards. Of course, Nagisawa laughed at this interesting plan. Usually, they will be punished if they are caught breaking the rules. Therefore, Nagisawa gave Shimizu a condition to arrange this. If you can confirm it, then Nagisawa and Seki will be willing to help. Shimizu was relieved to hear that and immediately thanked Seki. At that time, Nagisawa said he was willing to help. Of course, Shimizu was even happier. Nagisawa said that the Crystal Mines dungeon was a dangerous place, so I couldn't possibly let Seki and Shimizu die inside. Nagisawa is worried that she will regret it for the rest of her life if that happens. Meanwhile, the other two girls apologized for not being able to help. They believe that even though they try hard to help, they are still not strong enough. Seki understands and asks them not to worry. I know how hard those two girls have been training all this time. That's when Seki invited two other people to go save the red dragons. Seki, Iori, Shimizu, and Nagisawa arrived at the door of the S-rank Crystal Mines dungeon. At that time, Seki Iori will help his two colleagues by casting the invisibility spell. I asked the two of them to act quietly so as not to be discovered, so they could sneak into the dungeon. Nagisawa didn't expect that Seki Iori could also use the power of invisibility. Shimizu also felt amazed at Seki's abilities. Seki continued that once they use invisibility, they won't be able to see each other. So, each of them had to fight their own way into the door and they would meet inside. When everything was ready, Seki started invisibility. Both of them were amazed when they could actually disappear. They immediately mixed with the people to try to enter the dungeon door. Residents who saw the dungeon agreed that the dungeon did look quite difficult. Another man confirmed. Moreover, he heard rumors about the Crystal Mines dungeon having been upgraded to S-rank. Of course, his interlocutor was surprised because it had been a long time since an S-rank dungeon last appeared. That's when Seki Iori heard their conversation about the S-rank dungeon. Seki was very confident because he thought he could finish the Crystal Mines dungeon quickly. But now with the fact that the dungeon has risen in rank, it will be difficult to handle. The foreign man spoke again. They became curious about what really happened to the red dragons in the dungeon. Moreover, it had been quite a while since they entered the dungeon. Another man confirmed it. Even now I wouldn't be surprised if those red dragon people ended up dead there. But for them, this incident was karma for the red dragon. Another man agreed. For him, the news of the red dragon's death would actually be the best thing after everything that happened. In his mind, Seki knew that Ryuzaki was indeed a terrible person, but was nevertheless an adventurer who risked his life to challenge the dungeon. Seki never thought that other people would actually talk so badly about him. At that time the man fell and admitted that someone had pushed him. Of course, the other men just laughed mockingly because there was no one else there. Seki entered the dungeon and according to the agreement, I also met Shimizu and Nagisawa in the dungeon. Shimizu certainly felt satisfied because he managed to enter the dungeon without being discovered. I thanked Seki for his help. Seki says that it's too soon to say thank you. They weren't even at the hard part yet. Shimizu immediately confirmed. I realized that it was not easy to find red dragons because the size of the crystal mines was very large. Plus now the crystal mines are an S-rank dungeon, which means it will be very dangerous. However, Shimizu knew that it was the second time the red dragon had entered the dungeon, so they probably wouldn't have taken the same path. Shimizu knew they would definitely target unexploited areas. Seki Iori invited the two of them to go to the area in question and Shimizu and Nagisawa agreed. Before leaving, Shimizu said that I didn't feel the presence of any monsters around them. He thought it would be easy to get to the deepest part of the dungeon. Seki Iori suspects that the small number of monsters is caused by the red dragons who have killed some of the monsters. Although it was clear there were still some monsters left. Just then a monster appeared in front of them. They were all surprised to see the crystal deer monster, the worst monster they could possibly encounter in that dungeon. The monster unceremoniously began to attack. However, Seki Iori quickly stopped him. Shimizu was of course amazed to see Seki Iori able to stop the monster's attack with his bare hands. Seki Iori is determined to face the monster himself and he asks Shimizu and Nagisawa to start looking for traces of the red dragons. In his mind, Seki Iori was lucky because he entered the dungeon without forming a group. That way, you can monopolize experience points by fighting monsters alone. He was also lucky because he previously managed to clear a B-rank hidden dungeon, so now he could face such a monster with just one blow. That's when Seki started to attack. He uses a Tenma circulation boost which can increase the mana collected through Tenma and spread it throughout the body at high speed to increase physical abilities. The impact is far greater than just using themes. Seki Iori continued to attack until the monster was destroyed. Shimizu and Nagisawa were certainly amazed by him. Seki Iori, who managed to level up, casually asked them to continue walking. In his mind, Shimizu was amazed by Seki Iori's strength. Even though they were both the rank adventurers, the strength shown by Seki Iori seemed to be in a different class. Likewise, Nagisawa was amazed to see that Seki Iori was much stronger than I saw. The man had even had a peaceful life so far, but he doubted the world would continue to leave such a strong person alone. Nagisawa is happy and can't wait for the day when Seki Iori will become a famous person because of his abilities. Meanwhile, at the Adventurers Guild, Satsuki Ren had just come out of the building. Outside, there were already so many journalists welcoming him. They asked about the purpose of the Adventurer Guild's invitation to him. Is it true that their goal is to ask Satsuki Ren to conquer the Crystal Mines dungeon? They also said how all the residents couldn't wait to see what steps a superstar like Satsuki Ren would take. In his mind, Satsuki Ren was actually amazed at how the journalists were able to find out the news so quickly. He wanted to know who actually leaked the news. Like it or not, Satsuki Ren finally responded. He stated that he was thinking about trying to conquer the Crystal Mines dungeon. Crystal Mine dungeon cores are very dangerous and therefore they must be destroyed as soon as possible. The reporters then asked about Satsuki Ren's acting career. The man said that his schedule was currently free so he could arrange it well. Satsuki Ren's appearance on TV was seen by everyone, including Sphere and Kadoa. Sphere, who saw Satsuki Ren on TV, commented on how being an S-rank adventurer allows someone to get a lot of media attention. Satsuki Ren is completely different from Seki Iori. Kadoa just laughed when she heard that. For him, Satsuki Ren and Seki Iori have a lot in common. Of course, Sphere thought it was Kadoa's way of offending them badly, as if Kadoa knew Satsuki Ren personally. Kadoa casually agreed. She knows that Satsuki Ren and Seki Iori are actually classmates and they are used to playing together. Of course, Sphere was surprised and didn't think that Satsuki Ren and Seki Iori were really classmates. Kadoha was curious about how Satsuki Ren would react knowing that Seki Iori had also become an adventurer. The man would probably be very surprised. Seki Iori's group of adventurers continued to walk through the dungeon, finally arriving at a safe zone which was an area where there were no monsters. However, the deeper they went, the stronger the monsters they encountered would be. Shimizu actually hoped he could find Ryuzaki there, but he knew the man must have gone deep into the dungeon. On the other hand, Seki Iori was quite amazed by Shimizu's ability to guide them in without much problem up to that point. Even though he had just tried to enter the dungeon, seeing how Shimizu could remember a route accurately in one go, his memory must be very good. Najisawa realized that there was something different about the Crystal Mine dungeon besides its unusual structure. Shimizu also said that the last time I went there, I had given up at that point. Najisawa realizes the monsters there are too strong. It would be dangerous if they met two monsters at once. Even if Seki Iori were there, they would still have a hard time. Seki Iori asked whether Ryuzaki had come to investigate a dangerous place in the dungeon on purpose. Shimizu agreed but had also developed a strategy. Shimizu plans to use the smoke manipulation skill he has. He will try to track the location of Ryuzaki and the other Red Dragon's members. Seki Iori wants to know what smoke manipulation is. Shimizu explains that it is a support ability that allows him to strengthen his allies by covering them in smoke. However, this time he would let the smoke roam freely in the dungeon. The smoke can spread and be used as a radar to locate any adventurers. Najisawa realized that this ability was good, but it seemed like it would require a lot of energy. But at least it was possible, because previously Seki Iori had killed all the remaining monsters. So, the two of them haven't used any MP at all. Shimizu was very grateful for that. Seki Iori really has no problem with that. After all, by killing more and more monsters, he could also increase his level. Of course, as long as the monster doesn't appear in a group. Shimizu started using his skills. Even though he knew that his skills were not recommended for use in such a large dungeon, he would make sure he could find them. That would be the only way to find red dragons. As soon as the skill was displayed, the smoke spread very quickly throughout the dungeon. Najisawa is optimistic that they might be able to find the red dragons straight away. However, Seki Iori emphasized that it depends on how far Ryuzaki goes. It was a large-scale dungeon after all. They are still only on the surface. In his mind, Shimizu was sure that Ryuzaki was not someone who would die in a place like that. Shimizu remembered his conversation with Ryuzaki where he stated that he wanted to become an S-rank adventurer. Shimizu, who heard that, was certainly surprised. He wanted to know what really differentiated between being an A-rank adventurer and an S-rank adventurer. However, Ryuzaki explained that it wasn't about status or fame. However, if he can become an S-rank adventurer, he can act freely. That also meant that low-level adventurers would inevitably submit to him. Ryuzaki wanted it all. Shimizu wants to know how Ryuzaki will do it. The man answered that he just needed to beat up the other adventurers and show that he was the strongest. Shimizu asked again if Ryuzaki wanted to become the strongest. The man replied that he didn't want to, but he would become the strongest. He actually mocked Shimizu for being stupid, and according to him, Shimizu was indeed stupid. Since then, Shimizu has continued to pay attention to Ryuzaki, who pursues power so clearly. That's the reason why Shimizu secretly supported Ryuzaki even after he expelled him from the Red Dragons. That's when Najisawa called him. Shimizu had already used up all his MP. Of course, he was very upset, but Seki Iori helped him by giving him a drink that could restore Shimizu's MP. Of course, Najisawa was confused about where Seki Iori could get the drink. Seki Iori hasn't shown it to the two of them, but it's also his skill. Najisawa really didn't think Seki Iori could do anything. Once again, Najisawa thanked Seki Iori for helping her a lot. Seki Iori asked him not to worry and encouraged Shimizu to quickly find Ryuzaki and the others no matter what obstacles were in the way. After finishing his drink and gaining strength, Shimizu began to give it his all. He tried to find Ryuzaki's whereabouts and finally found him. Shimizu pointed in one direction and Ryuzaki was at the end of his trail of smoke. Of course, Nagisawa was worried because there would definitely be lots of monsters along the road. She actually wanted to avoid the monsters. At that time Seki Iori asked them not to worry and leave everything to him. He would follow the trail of smoke alone. He also asked Shimizu and Nagisawa to keep waiting there. Nagisawa praised Seki Iori's courage. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Shimizu wants to go with Seki Iori. If something bad happens, Shimizu will be a diversion so Seki Iori can get out of there. Of course, Seki Iori would not take Shimizu to do that kind of thing. Shimizu kept begging because from the start I was the one who forced Seki Iori and Nagisawa to enter the dungeon. I don't want Seki Iori to die because of it. Seki Iori finally agreed, although he certainly had no intention of sacrificing Shimizu later. On the other hand, Seki Iori will need Shimizu to support him so that they all survive. That was the condition proposed by Seki Iori and of course, Shimizu agreed. Because they had agreed, Seki Iori carried Shimizu's small body on his back. Once again he asked Nagisawa to stay at that safe point. She agreed and asked the two men to return safely. At that moment, Seki Iori started running very fast. In his mind, of course, Shimizu was quite fluttering too. But that way at least they can avoid all the monsters on that path. Shimizu's words didn't last long, because they encountered a very large monster and it was the strongest monster they had faced so far. Shimizu told Seki Iori that they would not be able to defeat the monster in front of them. They should avoid fighting as much as possible, so the best thing they can do is run away. Seki Iori asked Shimizu to hold him tightly because he needed to concentrate right now. Shimizu hesitantly agreed. Seki Iori saw a monster that was much stronger than the crystal deer he had just defeated. He knew that if he used too much strength, it would only waste his precious stamina. Seki Iori knew he had to defeat the monster quickly. The monster started to attack and Seki Iori responded to the attack with the people he had. The fight continued until he managed to defeat the monster. Shimizu, who saw everything, was still confused by what he had just seen. Seki Iori calmly said that he just needed a little concentration and now it was all over. Shimizu was curious whether the few words that Seki Iori said meant that the man had only released a little of his strength. Seki said that he used about 30% of his power. Shimizu was very impressed to hear that. For him, Seki Iori exceeded his expectations. Now he is optimistic that he can save Ryuzaki and the others. In his heart, Seki Iori also hoped so. He knew that even though he said he had only used 30% of his strength, he still couldn't use all his strength. If he forced himself, it might worsen the recoil until he couldn't even move it one way. For Seki Iori, magic is a double-edged sword. So far he may only be able to use 60–70% of his strength. It was then that they realized that the trail of smoke stopped at that point. At that time, Shimizu saw Ryuzaki and the others. They both saw that several people had died and only one person was still standing. Shimizu is sure the man is Ryuzaki. He could see that the Red Dragon clan had been defeated. Shimizu invites Seki Iori to get them all out of there. Shimizu tries to ask about Ryuzaki's condition. Ryuzaki shouted as a sign of danger. At that time Seki Iori immediately pulled Shimizu's body away. Ryuzaki, who saw Seki Iori, actually laughed out loud. He kept saying he would kill Seki Iori. Shimizu was confused about what was happening. Seki Iori said that it seemed like Ryuzaki had lost his mind. There would be no point in trying to talk to him at this point. However, Seki Iori knew Ryuzaki lost his mind due to bad causes. He could see Ryuzaki's mana increasing tremendously. Seki Iori suspected that someone was manipulating him at that time. The problem was that he didn't feel the presence of anyone around them. Seki Iori became curious about what happened there. Shimizu on the other hand was also annoyed. Even though he had worked hard to get to that point, Seki Iori asks Shimizu to step down. Seki Iori apologizes, but he has to beat Ryuzaki now. Shimizu also understood. He asked Seki Iori to defeat him. Seki Iori was very excited. Fighting is inevitable. Seki Iori threw a punch at Ryuzaki, causing him to fall. Under normal circumstances, Seki Iori knew that a blow like that should have knocked Ryuzaki unconscious. But right now he also wondered if the blow was enough. That's when Ryuzaki got up again. Seki Iori wasn't too surprised when he found out that his punch didn't have any effect. Ryuzaki countered Seki Iori's attack with a very fast movement. A huge explosion occurred and even sent Shimizu flying. As a result of the explosion, a crater was even formed. Ryuzaki even became much stronger than before. Not long after, Ryuzaki showed another skill of his, namely gravity. Seki Iori knew that in this condition, he would no longer be able to escape if Ryuzaki managed to pull him into the hole. Even if he tried to run away, it would make him easier to attack. Seki Iori felt like he was in an ant hole. Ryuzaki shouted again that he would kill Seki Iori. Seki Iori calmly asked if Ryuzaki had now turned into a wild animal. He knew Ryuzaki wanted a serious fight. Therefore, he would grant it and defeat him on his home turf. Shimizu was still observing the fight, realizing that both Ryuzaki and Seki Iori were using close-range martial arts techniques to fight. He knew Ryuzaki was one of the best adventurers who was skilled at martial arts, but Seki Iori was also very strong. But currently, Ryuzaki has become very strong in an abnormal way. Shimizu could only hope that Seki Iori would not die in this battle. The fight started again at close range. Ryuzaki started to carry out his attacks and Seki Iori also did not remain silent. Seki Iori knew that with Ryuzaki's gravity skill, he was trying to pull him so he could stop Seki Iori's movements. Seki Iori knew that he had no other choice but to engage in fistfights without dodging. He will accept Ryuzaki's challenge to continue fighting without stopping. Seki Iori threw his finishing blow sending Ryuzaki flying. But Ryuzaki laughed out loud. He was happy with the extraordinary strength that Seki Iori showed. That was the fight that Ryuzaki was looking for. For him, it was an honor to be able to face Seki Iori at full strength. Again, Ryuzaki shouted that he would kill Seki Iori. On the other hand, Seki Iori knew that Ryuzaki was a true martial artist and that even at a time like this, he could regain a little consciousness. Seki Iori will help Ryuzaki realize his wish by immediately ending the fight. The two of them fought again and Shimizu was amazed again. Shimizu could feel the overwhelming power even from where he was standing at that moment. Even with the distance between him and the two people fighting, he could still feel the vibrations in the air. On the other hand, the fighting continues. Ryuzaki was so happy because for him the fight was the best he had ever experienced. He never thought that Seki Iori was so strong. Seki Iori immediately realized that Ryuzaki had regained consciousness. Ryuzaki was certainly surprised by what Seki Iori was talking about. However, he didn't care. The only thing he cares about is defeating Seki Iori. At that time Shimizu tried to prevent it. He said that it was not the right time and place. But of course, Ryuzaki quickly told him to shut up. Ryuzaki is determined to do whatever he wants. However, before he finished speaking, a wounding force even penetrated his chest. Neither Shimizu nor Seki Iori were surprised. Seki Iori felt the mysterious attacker's mana energy. Suddenly a voice started to be heard. The voice said that Ryuzaki was a troublesome person and too selfish. He was so selfish that the brainwashing he did before was released. Seki Iori immediately realized that there was a monster talking. The monster then said that it was rare for monsters to develop language skills, so he would also understand seeing Seki Iori and Shimizu's surprise. Shimizu stutteringly wants to know why the monster killed Ryuzaki. The monster casually said that as he said before, Ryuzaki released the brainwashing he previously gave him. The monster just threw away something useless. Of course, Shimizu was very angry because the monster killed Ryuzaki. However, Seki Iori quickly asked him to calm down and cool his head. Shimizu tries to obey Seki Iori's words and apologizes because such a bad thing happened after he took great pains to join in to save the red dragons. The monster then says that fighting easy enemies like them is just a waste of time. Therefore, the monster made Shimizu stop moving with its power. Of course, Seki Iori is shocked, but the monster quickly says that Shimizu is not dead. Seki Iori was a little relieved, even though that meant he had to defeat the monster quickly so he could help Shimizu as soon as possible. The monster casually said that it was impossible. In his mind, Seki Iori knew that defeating the monster was impossible. He could see how the monster was so powerful and far above him. However, Seki Iori has no choice but to try because no one else will save them. With Shimizu knocked out and the red dragons dead, now only Seki Iori and the monster were left. Seki Iori is aware that the monster can also use magic and is much stronger than him, but he will still try to end everything quickly. Seki Iori began to use the Eye of Wisdom to deal with the very strong monster's attacks. The monster realized that Seki Iori was quite strong too. The monster began to attack again with renewed vigor. At that time, Seki Iori could still clearly see the attack pattern. Using his sword, Seki Iori began to move forward and attack. However, the monster avoided Seki Iori's physical attack by activating protective magic. The monster said that Seki Iori was very annoying. That's when the monster counterattacked. Seki Iori apparently thought wrong. He thought the monster would be weak in close combat because it used magic, but that was clearly not the point. Seki Iori begins to understand the monster's fighting style. Now he just needed to prepare himself for the worst. Monster praises Seki Iori's unique eyes. However, the monster could not stop thinking and he attacked again in another way. The monsters tried to attack from various sides, so even though Seki Iori could see them, he still couldn't avoid them. Monsters attacked Seki Iori and the big explosion was inevitable. The monster thought he had succeeded in defeating humans who would never be his match. On the other hand, it turns out that Seki Iori escaped death. It had been a long time since he had been in trouble, but somehow he managed to get through it this time. The monster was of course surprised to see Seki Iori still alive. Seki Iori secretly uses magic. He took the energy that came in the attack from the monster to erase it. The monster certainly didn't believe it because Seki Iori's words sounded ridiculous. That would be impossible because there would be too many attacks to control. Monster wants to know what Seki Iori is really doing. Seki Iori casually said that he was only practicing a theory that the monster considered ridiculous. Of course, monsters don't believe easily. It was as if Seki Iori was saying that he did something that was impossible even for a great monster like himself. However, Seki Iori was so confident because he had done it. Of course, the monster was offended because the Seki Iori insulted him. The monster attacks, but this time Seki Iori manages to read its attack. Seki Iori finally uses the Sword of Tenma technique that he had been saving for this spell. But this time he had to give everything to get past the monster's protective layer. The monster underestimated Seki Iori's attack and said that such a trash attack would not be able to reach his body. A human's mana would be impossible to penetrate the barrier he had created. Seki Iori immediately confirmed everything the monster said. It's just that this statement only applies in normal combat situations. Meanwhile, he is not normal. Seki Iori's magic doesn't require mana, so he can use magic without limits. Seki Iori immediately released his magic, which shocked the monster. Seki Iori's power apparently managed to damage the monster's barrier. This makes the monster confused because it cannot repair its barrier quickly. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Seki Iori once again attacked with full power. He managed to defeat the monsters and get a level increase. Seki Iori said to the monster that he might be stronger than him and that the monster was also skilled in magic. However, if it was as a mage or magic expert, Seki Iori knew he would not lose to anyone. Seki Iori has successfully defeated the boss monster, so now he just needs to heal Shimizu. The man was stabbed through the chest and the bleeding was quite terrible. Not only were there physical injuries, but his mana vessels were also cut and his mana was leaking. The consequences would be very bad if their previous fight lasted too long. Seki Iori just needs to stop the bleeding and reconnect the mana vessels. First, Seki Iori had to change the size of the fireball until it was very small, then burn the wound, and then drink the HP recovery potion on it. External wounds should heal naturally with a little help from medication. So now Seki Iori also has to focus on dealing with his mana vessels. Once everything is done, Shimizu should be safe. That's when Nagisawa apparently saw what Seki Iori was doing. He didn't expect that the man could also do such a thing. Even though Shimizu's wound was quite serious, it turned out that Seki Iori could treat it in an instant. Seki Iori saw Nagisawa and he asked why the girl was there. He answered that he was worried about Seki Iori and Shimizu's condition. However, based on what he saw, Seki Iori succeeded in eliminating all the monsters on the way to that point. Seki Iori praised Shimizu for being so brave. At least, Seki Iori was grateful to see Nagisawa there. He immediately asked the girl for help to continue monitoring the situation and inform him if a monster was coming. Nagisawa immediately understood and did as asked. Seki Iori is now confirming Ryuzaki's condition. The man was no longer breathing because his heart was pierced. He could no longer be saved. Seki Iori apologizes because they never fought seriously. Apart from Ryuzaki, all the Red Dragon's members also ran out of mana. Their lives weren't in danger, but everyone needed rest. As soon as Seki Iori wanted to walk away, Nagisawa quickly stopped him. He wanted to know where Seki Iori was going. Seki Iori will destroy the dungeon core. Of course, Nagisawa was confused because he didn't know what happened to the dungeon boss. Seki Iori casually said that he had killed him. The dungeon core should be up ahead. Nagisawa was quite surprised, but he also expected it because it was Seki Iori who acted. Of course, Seki Iori wanted to know what he meant. Nagisawa just said that whatever it was, he would wait to see what Seki Iori could do in the future. Seki Iori had told Nagisawa that he didn't want to be famous. However, for now, the most important thing is to destroy the dungeon core. Seki Iori walked towards the core of the dungeon, which was a glowing object. Seki Iori tries to find out what it really is. He finally knew that it was the Grimoire of Release or the Book of Liberation. Seki Iori wanted to know what kind of thing it was, but he would see it later after he destroyed the dungeon core. The dungeon core had been destroyed and the gate was successfully closed. Everyone in the Adventurers Guild thought it was the Red Dragon's doing. Not long after, Seki Iori managed to return to the Adventurers Guild with a group of injured Red Dragons. Of course, the staff who saw it were confused because the people who managed to conquer the dungeon were not Red Dragons. Meanwhile, all the members of the Red Dragons were seen falling. At that time, Seki Iori asked everyone there to take the Red Dragon's members to the hospital. Luckily, everyone including Shimizu managed to survive. Meanwhile, Seki Iori succeeded in conquering the crystal mines as was his initial goal. Seki Iori thought that was the end, but news began to spread that he and two other colleagues, who were Renka adventurers, had illegally entered the dungeon. The fact that Seki Iori, Shimizu, and Nagisawa had violated the dungeon rules was certainly a big case. Nagisawa was of course very annoyed, even though they went in there to save other people, so the Adventurer Guild should be able to let them go. Nagisawa asked Seki Iori for support for his opinion. On the other hand, Seki Iori felt ready for the consequences he would receive. It is possible that in the future another group will try to copy what they did and end up with serious injuries. That kind of thing was very likely to happen, so the Adventurer Guild couldn't let them set a bad example for other adventurers. Still, Nagisawa was annoyed, especially because Seki Iori's thoughts were very reasonable. Even though a man should agree with whatever a woman thinks at a time like that. Seki Iori apologizes, but Nagisawa no longer cares about it. He actually showed his cell phone where the news about them got a lot of responses. Nagisawa said that everyone was very surprised by what they did. At least Nagisawa was relieved that their names were not published. Seki Iori misfocused when he saw a comment that had Satsuki Ren's name there. He also just found out that Satsuki Ren was targeting the same dungeon. Nagisawa feels great, but Seki Iori certainly doesn't agree. Nagisawa continued to ask whether Seki Iori didn't want to brag about what they did at all. While they were still arguing, the door in front of them opened. The man immediately greeted Seki Iori because they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Seki Iori now remembers that the man is Hamada and that they haven't seen each other for a long time. Hamada is happy and honored that Seki Iori remembers his name. However, he was there that time to ask some things. Of course, Seki Iori welcomed him in a friendly manner. Hamada knows that Seki Iori was previously the fastest to become an A-rank adventurer and now he is clearing the Crystal Mines dungeon. The news that he was incompetent or had lost his abilities was definitely a fatal mistake. Hamada believes that Seki Iori must have extraordinary skills. This time he was determined to get all the information from Seki Iori. On the other hand, Seki Iori knew that Hamada was trying to check whether he was truly incompetent. However, the problem is that it might be difficult for him to cover it up because he has been exposed a lot recently. He didn't want the skills that had been hidden to be revealed because that would mean his presence would attract even more attention. If that happens, Seki Iori will lose his freedom. There is also the possibility that some strange person might approach Kadoha. Seki Iori is determined to keep his hidden skills a secret for everyone's sake. Not long after, Hamada started asking questions about how Seki Iori got into the dungeon. They had researched all the security departments, but Seki Iori and the others were nowhere to be seen, even though the gate is the only way in. Hamada wants to know how. Seki Iori said that they used their friend's skill which could make someone invisible. Of course, Hamada wanted to know about that person. What's more, he is part of the adventurers. Seki Iori replied that he was not an adventurer. The man also knew that the dungeon rules only applied to adventurers. So if he involves an outsider, then that person will not be bound by the statement that Seki Iori gave. Hamada understood and praised the foreigner's interesting skills. He then asked why Seki Iori entered the dungeon. Seki Iori also answered. The question and answer session continued for some time. Nagisawa also got questions and answered them easily. Luckily, Nagisawa clearly understood what Seki Iori was doing. Being a former idol makes Nagisawa someone good at acting too. Hamada finally finished their question and answer session. He apologized for disturbing the two of them even though they had just returned from the dungeon. Seki Iori also apologized for breaking the dungeon rules. Nagisawa also expressed his regret. Hamada felt guilty seeing the two people looking down at him. He asked them to stop. Hamada knows that even though they broke the rules, they did it all to save other people. Of course, as a guild employee, he wouldn't be able to get angry at brave adventurers like these two. Hamada also said that they couldn't ignore the fact that Seki Iori and the others had broken the rules, so punishment would still be given, but he promised to make it as light as possible. Hamada asked everyone not to worry. Nagisawa was certainly happy to hear of Hamada's extraordinary assistance. He and Seki Iori expressed their thanks. For Hamada, that was all he could do after taking up both of his time. Seki Iori and Nagisawa leave the Adventurers Guild. Hamada, who saw the two of them, ultimately couldn't find any evidence that Seki Iori was not incompetent. But it was clear the man was hiding something. Despite that, Hamada could ignore the facts regarding Seki Iori as long as he remained with the guild. Hamada remembers Seki Iori's words about the help of a mysterious person from somewhere. He also believes that after this incident there will probably be many incompetents who want to become adventurers. On the other hand, on the way home, Nagisawa complained about how tired he was. Seki Iori also felt that they had worked well today. At that time, Nagisawa again showed online news and comments. Residents began to speculate that it was Seki Iori. Seki Iori himself felt that all the news was very exciting. Nagisawa understood because it was indeed extraordinary news. But despite all the excitement of the news out there, she still felt uncomfortable knowing that there was someone they failed to save among the Red Dragons. Nagisawa knew the man was talking about Ryuzaki. However, for him, adventuring is a profession that will always be accompanied by death. Of course, Seki Iori needed to get used to that fact. Seki Iori knew it, but he thought about Shimizu's feelings. Nagisawa asked Seki Iori to take a look and then rubbed the man's head saying that he had done a good job. Of course, Seki Iori was confused by what Nagisawa was doing. The girl said that it was a special gift from her. Being rubbed on the head by a beautiful girl seemed like it must feel amazing. Seki Iori confirmed the girl's words. At that time, Nagisawa waved his hand, and she will go home to herself. Seki Iori of course offered to accompany him, but Nagisawa refused. He said he would be fine walking at night. After all, Nagisawa is not a weak woman but a rank adventurer. After Nagisawa left, Seki Iori returned to his own home. He greeted Kadoha who was at home. Meanwhile, Kadoha said welcome. She said she had prepared dinner, so he invited Seki Iori to eat together. At that time, Sphere also came to praise Seki Iori who succeeded in conquering the Crystal Mines dungeon as expected in just one try. He also asked about the quest, but Seki Iori said that he hadn't checked it. Sphere asked him to quickly look and Seki Iori did so. Seki Iori saw the compensation quest completed. That means Seki Iori's life is no longer in danger. Sphere was of course happy that everything was finished and he praised Seki Iori for his success. Seki Iori thanked Sphere. Kotoha says that they have a lot to celebrate that day. That's why she deliberately made a banquet to celebrate all the great things that Seki Iori had done. Seki Iori looks at all the food on the table and compliments how delicious it looks. Sphere says she also helps with the cooking by giving Kotoha instructions. Sphere asks Seki Iori to enjoy everything greedily. They ate with gusto before their food got cold. On the other hand, Satsuki Ren was watching the news on his cell phone. She knew that the Crystal Mine dungeon had been successfully cleared. Previously, because the Adventurers Guild had requested it personally, she thought that no one else could clear the dungeon. However, the news circulating said that 3 Ranka adventurers had done it. Of course, Satsuki Ren was very curious about these 3 people. Satsuki Ren wants to make an appointment with all of them. Seki Iori is observing his skill tree. He should already have enough points, but Seki Iori is confused because he hasn't been able to unlock the new spells in the skill tree. He couldn't continue with his old strength. However, at least now Kotoha is safe. At that time, Sphere asked him to wait. Of course, Seki Iori was confused. Sphere reveals the reason why Seki Iori has not been able to improve his skill tree. This happened because he hadn't updated the skill tree. Seki Iori became even more confused. Sphere explains that in his previous life, Seki Iori left so many gaps. If Seki Iori learns everything at once, then his body will not be able to accommodate all the strength and skills. Later, little by little Seki Iori's forbidden restriction will increase. If that's the case, Seki Iori can also gradually gain strength every time the sphere renews it. Seki Iori begins to remember the moment he first met Sphere. He also realized that the reason why he was suddenly able to use exchange items at that time was because of an update from the Sphere. Sphere immediately agreed. Seki Iori again revealed that this time he had enough skill points, so Sphere should be able to update the skill tree right now. Sphere was of course annoyed by Seki Iori's ridiculous thoughts. The last update he did was special because it was the first update for Seki Iori. However, for subsequent updates, Sphere requires an item for each update. Seki Iori is certainly annoyed with this difficult system. However, Sphere said he was just following the flow, and if Seki Iori wanted to protest, then he had to protest to Seki Iori beforehand. Seki Iori remembered that he was the one who created the system. He apologized to Sphere. Seki Iori wants to know what items the Sphere currently requires. Sphere answered that she needed an item that was rarely found in dungeons. The items were called Grimoires of Release. Seki Iori immediately said that he already had the item after successfully conquering the Crystal Mines dungeon. Of course, Sphere was surprised and said that Seki Iori should have spoken from the start. He immediately asked Seki Iori to give him the Grimoires of Release. Sphere looked at the Grimoires of Release and he knew very well that it was indeed the item he needed. He immediately updated Seki Iori's skill tree. That should have worked, but Sphere then realized that the book didn't seem to be the only item he needed for the skill tree update. The system screen shows a notification regarding the trial of release. Sphere himself was also confused because he had never heard of it. Seki Iori was also worried, but based on what he read, the message didn't seem good either and he had a bad feeling about it. Sphere said that Seki Iori himself was the one who created the system in his previous life, so the sudden feeling of unease might indeed be a sign of truth. Seki Iori didn't dare take risks, but he also didn't know why his blood as an archmage suddenly boiled. If there is a chance, then he can become more than he was before. At this time for Seki Iori, there was no other way but to accept the challenge. He chose to agree to start a trial of release. Sphere couldn't help but laugh because Seki Iori was starting to show his true self. Seki Iori and Sphere suddenly found themselves in a strange place. Sphere believes it is Seki Iori's previous mind world. Seki Iori thought about it and he wasn't surprised because it was something he would do. Until they finally found a flying ball of light. The ball then turned into a large flying monster. Sphere understands now what trial is. Apart from skill updates, the trial of release has one more goal, namely to get more packed familiars who obeyed Seki Iori in their previous lives. Hearing that term, Seki Iori could vaguely remember the details. Trial means it is a battle that must be won. Seki Iori saw a holy dragon Soru or phantom monster. Even though the phantom has not yet fully grown, its strength cannot be underestimated. Seki Iori knows that phantoms are strong enemies, but he must be able to handle them. At that time, with the Tenma he had, Seki Iori started attacking the phantom. In his mind, Sayaki Iori knew that all of this was the result of his work in his previous life aimed at ensuring whether his current self could handle it. Seki Iori needs to limit the memories he inherited from his previous life. Seki Iori must start his trial. The fight continued until Seki Iori realized that the only effective attack he could make on the phantom was using the Sword of Tenma. The problem was that to use that weapon, he needed to cast a lot of spells. This will put a burden on Seki Iori's body, so he needed to make a single attack to ensure his attack could hit the phantom. He needed to take full advantage of the Phantom's weakness. At that time, Sphere warned Seki Iori to be careful. Phantom shows the Holy Shower move, which is the monster's special attack. If you are hit by just one holy shower, the mana will be absorbed and damage will be received. Sphere doesn't need that detailed explanation. The problem now is that avoiding a hockey shower is impossible. Seki Iori confirmed, but he knew the trick behind the phantom attack. Seki Iori started to dodge the first attack with a haste spell and Sphere was there to praise him. Seki Iori knew that the holy shower was an attack that could track mana. That way, Seki Iori only needs to leave a trace of mana for a moment before dodging. By continuing to repeat the trick again and again, he could avoid the holy shower completely. Phantom will get tired after using the holy shower several times, and that's where Seki Iori will find an opening to attack. At the right time, Seki Iori managed to use the Sword of Tenma and injured the Phantom quite badly. Sphere was of course amazed to see such great power. He didn't expect that Seki Iori could defeat the Phantom. The man said he was just lucky because he managed to recognize the Phantom's abilities. As a reward, Seki Iori received the Summon Beast Holy Dragon Soru. That means from then on he can summon phantoms whenever needed. Seki Iori felt relieved and could return to his home. His forbidden restriction has also grown stronger. Likewise with Seki Iori's skill tree. Seki Iori can also see how his skill tree has grown a lot. The man started studying and there was a spell that required quite a lot of skill points to get. Sphere asks if there is a spell that Seki Iori likes. The man said yes and he was relieved because the trial was something worth doing. Sphere was happy to hear that. The next day, Seki Iori went to visit Shimizu. The man had not yet regained consciousness and was even on the verge of death. At that time, Hamada came and wanted to talk to Seki Iori. The man asked Seki Iori to go with him for a while. Seki Iori immediately agreed. The two started walking together. Hamada apologized for the seemingly sudden request. Seki Iori asked him not to worry. Seki Iori also asked what business Hamada had. Hamada said that the Adventurers Guild wanted to measure the strength of Seki Iori, who was incompetent. But they won't do it using measuring crystals. Instead, the Adventurers Guild wants Seki Iori to have a mock battle with someone else. Of course, Seki Iori was curious about this challenger. Hamada only said that he was a quite strong and famous man. Maybe even Seki Iori also knows him when they meet later. They finally arrived at a place. Seki Iori certainly wants to know what that place is. Hamada said it was a special facility that was much more robust than the Adventurers Guild's training hall. Seki Iori thought about the purpose of the Adventurer Guild to measure strength. Previously, Seki Iori had successfully passed the test to become an A-rank adventurer. Of course, the Adventurer Guild already had a good understanding of his strength. Seki Iori wondered if perhaps this test could be a promotion test for him to advance to S-rank adventurer. Not long after, someone came. Seki Iori can't wait to see the enemy finally reveal himself. The man apologized for making Seki Iori wait a long time. The man then declared that he would be Seki Iori's opponent today. The man introduced himself as Satsuki Ren. It turned out that both of them were equally surprised to see the figure in front of them. Satsuki Ren immediately understood that Seki Iori was the one who had conquered the Crystal Mines dungeon. They never thought they would be opponents. Their meeting was truly a bad reunion. But on the other hand, Satsuki Ren is excited because this time he can face Seki Iori as an opponent. Seki Iori said that the difference in rank between them was quite large. Seki Iori is an A-rank adventurer and Satsuki Ren is an S-rank adventurer. Therefore, Seki Iori would appreciate it if Satsuki Ren could restrain himself a little. Satsuki Ren said that it only applies to ordinary people and not Seki Iori. In his mind, Seki Iori was not at all surprised by Satsuki Ren's ability to always twist his words. Satsuki Ren said again that this time he would not only be a little serious but would fight it out. Of course, Satsuki Ren feels the need to maintain his pride as an S-rank adventurer. He doesn't want to just lose to Seki Iori. Seki Iori knew that his words would not be able to convince Satsuki Ren. In another room, Hamada was focused on staring at the screen which showed Satsuki Ren and Seki Iori there. For him, the result of the match is not that important. What he wanted to know was the results of observations on Seki Iori. Apart from that, also how far his defensive capabilities would be in facing an S-rank adventurer. Even though his expectations weren't that high either. The fight finally started. Hamada is still thinking about the outcome of the match. If only Seki Iori could defeat Satsuki Ren, then that would be a rare event. Seki Iori will be immediately promoted as an S-rank adventurer. Back to the match where Satsuki Ren started his attack. Satsuki Ren started with an easy attack, but of course, Seki Iori didn't feel that way. Seki Iori was able to avoid the attack. Satsuki Ren was of course not too surprised by the abilities shown by Seki Iori. Satsuki Ren started trying more fire powder. Seki Iori of course provoked him by saying that the attack was completely inconsistent with his statement of wanting an all-out fight. Satsuki Ren admitted that he did have initial thoughts like that, but he also knew that Seki Iori was not someone who could easily be defeated with rash actions. In his mind, Seki Iori knew that Satsuki Ren was trying to regulate his steps so as not to get tired quickly while also keeping his head cool. Seki Iori began to change his plans. He will force Satsuki Ren into close combat and make him pressed. The fight happened again and Seki Iori used the power of the Eye of Wisdom he had. Previously, thanks to the expansion of the skill tree's power, Seki Iori was able to open the second level of Eye of Wisdom magic. The ability in the second stage of the Eye of Wisdom is to analyze whatever is seen. Seki Iori immediately knew that Satsuki Ren had a primordial fire skill that seemed easy to use. Satsuki Ren started by raising the temperature. Seki Iori was a little surprised at the consecutive attacks given by Satsuki Ren. However, the attack didn't have any tracking capabilities, so he just had to dodge it. On the other hand, Hamada, who was still paying attention, was quite amazed by Seki Iori's strength, which had increased compared to when he took the A rank exam. Hamada was curious about what made Seki Iori grow strong so quickly, but suddenly, Hamada realized the possibility that Seki Iori had only been hiding his strength all this time. Even in the competition arena, Satsuki Ren began to feel overwhelmed. Up until now, they had only exchanged light blows, but he felt an unusual pressure. Even though he was the S-rank adventurer there, so he should be the stronger one. But all that disappeared when he faced Seki Iori. Satsuki Ren felt that the Seki Iori he saw was not the usual Seki Iori. It was as if he was fighting a creature that surpassed all common sense. Plus, he was the one who cleaned up the crystal mines. Always the same as he had expected from Seki Iori. Fighting continues between the two, who continuously attack each other, until they were so close and they both drew their swords. When their swords clash, Seki Iori immediately knows that Satsuki Ren has a second skill. This power is in the form of a sword of creation, which allows the owner to change the type of sword he holds. This is certainly hard to believe because usually one adventurer only has one skill. Satsuki Ren, who continuously received attacks from Seki Iori, however, had already expected it. Therefore, it seems like he has to go all out. Attack after attack occurred again until Seki Iori was forced to retreat. He didn't think that Satsuki Ren was that strong. He had difficulty because he had to deal with two skills at once. Satsuki Ren stated at that time that the real fight would begin from then on. Satsuki realized that Seki Iori's strength was unreasonable. There was no way talent alone could explain such strength. So Satsuki wanted to wait for what happened after their fight. Satsuki chanced Levitine to summon the most powerful sword he has. Seki immediately knew that the sword Satsuki took out was a weapon from his previous world. And that was one of the sword things that Seki used to have. Seki didn't expect he would find such a relic even in this world. Satsuki says that he wants a fair fight, so first he'll explain something. The sword he has is a fictional sword from Norse mythology, but his abilities are great, as using the sword drastically improves Iori's skills. This young man also explained that the sword was forged by the trickster god, Loki. Then Satsuki asks Seki to be proud because he has only ever used that sword against S ranks before. In other words, he gave it everything he had. An eye-dazzling flash of lightning immediately spread in all directions as Satsuki activated the sword's power. As fast as lightning, Iori attacked Seki, who looked shocked by his opponent's strength. Even Hamada, who was watching their fight, was amazed to see the powerful energy clash between the two young men. Hamada could now assume this was a battle between fellow S-rankers, and he should promote Seki Iori to S-rank. Iori realized that every attack from Levitine was very strong, very suitable for Ren as it enhances all fire magic. And this Levitine before him was as powerful as the one from my previous world. Iori realized he was in trouble now. Iori continued to be alert. Luckily, he managed to avoid Satsuki's rain of swords. Suddenly, Satsuki was behind Iori and tried to attack him while saying that Iori's efforts to dodge were quite good. But Satsuki wouldn't miss the opening that Iori left. So Iori immediately delivered another big attack on Iori, causing the black-haired young man to fall to the ground. Iori realizes that the various variations of Satsuki's attacks exceed the number he could before, so this just keeps getting worse for Iori. Even though Iori didn't want to show off all the power he had in that place, Iori didn't want to be found out so soon. But Iori realized he had no other choice. He had to be serious too. Moreover, Satsuki looked really scary walking towards him now. With the spell he obtained after the forbidden restrictions were renewed, Iori hopes he can defeat Satsuki. When Iori began to release his frightening aura, Satsuki's hands suddenly shook. Satsuki didn't even think that he, who was already at S rank, could feel as scared as he did now. Satsuki guessed what Iori was planning. Suddenly all the cameras that were watching them also had an error. Right now Mr. Hamada can't watch their match. Iori calls out Ren's name and says that he will put all his power into this attack. But Iori asks Ren not to tell anyone else about Iori's true abilities. Ren asks why is that. Iori replies that he wants to have as little fame as possible and doesn't want to cause bigger problems for Dirt. Ren smiles and says that he understands Iori's feelings, but then he said it seemed like Iori already thought he had won. So isn't that too fast? Ren's face turned serious again. He raised his sword and said, that Ren Iori's next attack. This time, Iori also looked more serious. Ren immediately raised his sword and jumped high to attack Iori. Then it exerted a force so powerful that it was like a large ball of fire. But Iori still realized that that wasn't Ren's true power. But Iori remains determined to win. This time Iori immediately used the Meteor Breaker skill to fight Ren's enormous power. And with just one attack, Iori actually managed to stop Ren's meteor ball. This clearly made Ren stunned. Ren could only stand still in his place while staring at Iori's figure, who was standing casually on the other side of the room. Then, with a smile full of pride, Iori said that he was indeed the winner. Of course, Satsuki Ren was surprised to see the extraordinary attack given by Seki Iori. He even asked Iori why he had been hiding such great power from him all this time. Casually, Seki Iori said that he never hid anything. He only got stronger. Satsuki Ren already thought that this was something Seki Iori could do. He also acknowledged the crushing defeat he experienced. Hamada, who immediately entered the training area, could only be shocked to see the damage caused by Seki Iori. The man damaged the roof of the training arena, even though it used special roofing material. On the other hand, Seki Iori asked Satsuki Ren to protect him. He asked his friend to cover up what he had done. Satsuki Ren certainly understands and agrees. Satsuki Ren immediately explained to Hamada that their attacks collided, hit the roof, and even damaged it. The man said that everything that happened was his fault and immediately apologized to Hamada. Hamada of course understood. He also couldn't do anything else. However, he asked both of them about the final result of their fight. Satsuki Ren states that the outcome of their fight cannot be concluded because so far their strength is equal. Hamada suspected the reason was because they were afraid of damaging other facilities around them and ultimately chose not to continue the match. Hamada was of course very understanding. At least he had gotten a little proof of Seki Iori's abilities, so it didn't matter if the result of the fight was a draw. It's just that Hamada didn't expect that Seki Iori could actually be the right opponent for Satsuki Ren. Satsuki Ren just smiled at Hamada's statement, even though in his heart he didn't feel like he was a draw or balance in the fight. But he actually lost. At that time, Seki Iori asked Hamada because the man previously mentioned Hamada measuring his strength. Seki Iori wants to know what the reason is. Hamada began to explain that the Adventurers Guild required a good understanding of the strengths of the high-ranking adventurers there. However, based on the results of the battle just now, which could not clearly show Seki Iori's strength, they finally created an opportunity to measure Seki Iori's abilities with what they had done today. Satsuki Ren offered help to Seki Iori, who was still confused, to explain the opportunity in a simple way. What the two of them had gone through was actually a promotion test for someone to get an S-rank adventurer. Seki Iori was of course not surprised because he had suspected it before. At that time, Hamada asked Seki Iori not to make a sorry face because he passed the test. Seki Iori's passing means he will become the 10th person to become an S-rank adventurer in their country. However, Seki Iori didn't want that. He wanted to turn down the opportunity to be promoted to S-rank adventurer. Of course, Hamada was confused and wanted to know the reason. Seki Iori said that currently being an A-rank adventurer could actually give him many benefits compared to being an S-rank adventurer. Of course, Hamada was confused about the meaning of Seki Iori's words. Seki Iori then reasoned that it was a personal reason for him, but he didn't want to stand out. Of course, Hamada didn't understand Seki Iori's mindset at all. But however, those in the Adventurers Guild couldn't force Seki Iori to accept the promotion offer. If that is what Seki Iori wants, then he can remain an S-rank adventurer. However, within the Adventurers Guild, Seki Iori will still be considered an S-rank adventurer. Seki Iori will not have a problem with it as long as the Adventurers Guild does not reveal this to the public. Hamada was of course grateful, but then he tried to convince Seki Iori once again. Hamada said that promotion to rank S was a very prestigious thing. Even his name will be written in history books. Seki Iori knew it, but he stood by his decision to reject the offer. Hamada could only agree while looking at Seki Iori, who was walking away. To him, the man was an adventurer who didn't have any great desires. For him, it was very strange. Outside the Adventurers Guild, Satsuki Ren was chasing Seki Iori. He admitted that he was not surprised to see Seki Iori reject the promotion offer to become an S-rank adventurer. Seki Iori again said that he was just not interested in the offer. Then Satsuki Ren talked about their childhood. For him, Seki Iori hasn't changed at all since they were young. Seki Iori confirmed it, but on the contrary, it was Satsuki Ren who Seki Iori thought had changed. For Seki Iori, Satsuki Ren is someone who is too far away and can no longer be reached by him. Of course, Satsuki Ren laughed and said that Seki Iori's joke was very funny. For him, it was Seki Iori who was now at a much higher level than him. However, Satsuki Ren is happy because he can meet Seki Iori again. He hoped that he could talk casually the next time they met again. Of course, Seki Iori agreed and Satsuki Ren could come to see him anytime if he wanted. Satsuki Ren also assured Seki Iori that he would keep his promise not to talk about their previous fight. Seki Iori once again thanked him and they parted ways there. Satsuki Ren was still watching Seki Iori, who was walking away. He knows that the main reason Seki Iori doesn't want to become famous is for the good of his little sister, Kadoha. But somehow Satsuki Ren is sure that this won't last long. This world needs adventurers and Seki Iori's strength is something that should not be hidden. Seki Iori, who is still on his way home, feels that he has succeeded in saving Kadoha and that his life is no longer in danger. Even Seki Iori actually feels he has no more reason to become an adventurer. However, he knew he couldn't just give up. Currently, he already has connections with more people than he previously expected. so for the good of everyone around him, he must continue to be an adventurer. Not long after, a man greeted Sekiiori. The man named Fukimoto admitted that he had not seen Sekiiori for a long time. He came up to Sekiiori and casually greeted him as an incompetent newbie. He didn't expect to meet Sekiiori in a place like that. Sekiiori could only take it casually. Fukimoto said that he was actually still indebted to Sekiiori for his help at that time in the Minotaur incident. They were lucky to survive and thanked Sekiiori. Two of Fukimoto's colleagues who were there also commented. Yamada realized that he must have looked really pathetic at that moment. Hayakawa also chimed in that Yamada was defeated easily at that time and didn't even remember anything. Sekiiori observed the three of them at first. He also didn't have a good first impression of them. However, upon further inspection, they were perfectly normal people. Fukimoto then started whispering to Sekiiori. As a thank you, he wants to teach Sekiiori a clever way to live the life of an adventurer. Even a beginner seems to be able to earn money. Sekiiori was of course interested and he wanted Fukimoto to explain further. Of course, Fukimoto was happy and ensured that Sekiiori could rely on him for this kind of thing. At that moment, they heard an announcement that a monster had come out of the gate and all residents were asked to evacuate. They also asked all adventurers near the guild to immediately respond to the emergency call. Fukimoto feels that the announcement came at the perfect time. They had to step in to help at the Adventurers Guild. Adventurers Guilds are known to pay any adventurer willing to participate in such fights, no matter who they are. That way, they could easily collect money if they participated, even if they only wasted time fighting flies and not killing the monsters inside. That's one way to make money that Fukimoto knows about. Of course, Sekiiori understood it. Fukimoto excitedly invited them all to rush to the dungeon. On the other hand, Sekiiori was a little regretful because he accidentally involved himself in Fukimoto's plan. Luckily, the monster that appeared wasn't too strong, so he will be able to finish it in a short time. They have arrived at the location. Fukimoto felt that they were lucky because so many adventurers were also at that location. Of course, Sekiiori was a little confused about whether it would be better for them if more adventurers participated. Fukimoto immediately agreed because the more people who participated, the easier the fight would become. Although, they will get more rewards if they defeat more monsters. However, the main goal of Fukimoto and others is to get participation rewards, which will be easier than getting rewards for defeating monsters. Fukimoto explained that the participation prize was 100,000 yen. Huge rewards just for appearing in that battle area. Yamada explained that no matter how they participated, what they were doing was work that could be life-threatening. Therefore, the Adventurer Guild gave generous rewards. Sekiiori certainly understands it. In his heart, Sekiiori now understands that there are several ways he can make money as an adventurer. That secretly attracted him to this job. Fukimoto started to get serious. As a form of return, he has revealed how to live as an adventurer to Sekiiori. However, right now they had to focus on the monsters that were starting to arrive. Hayakawa was quite surprised to see the monsters starting to rush towards them. The monsters looked quite strong and were probably at rank C. Fukimoto could only sigh because that day meant they had to go through a tiring battle. Unable to dodge any longer, Fukimoto asks the four of them to defeat at least one monster. Fukimoto of course also pointed towards Sekiiori. He hoped that Sekiiori, who looked confident, could show his sword skills. He hopes a lot from Sekiiori. Of course, the man was excited and promised to show his best. In his heart, Sekiiori knew that he was a rank adventurer. Of course, he knew that he would excel in everything he did. Previously, he was even able to get rank because he had conquered the Crystal Mines dungeon. The condition has not changed until now. Therefore, he did not want to show his abilities too much. Fukimoto and his two colleagues started attacking the monsters. Fukimoto even managed to cut off the scorpion monster's tail, which was full of poison. He immediately ordered Hayakawa to complete the rest. Hayakawa prepares and asks everyone to be careful. Before Hayakawa had time to attack, the scorpion monster was about to attack Fukimoto, but Sekiiori quickly handled it. That's when Hayakawa started attacking by shooting fire and burning the scorpion. They attacked the same scorpion monster again, which had not yet been killed. Fukimoto praised Sekiiori for saving him in the previous fight. However, now he would solve the monster alone. Fukimoto starts trying to attack the scorpion monster. The monster had a hard shell on its back. Therefore, Fukimoto tried to attack the scorpion monster's stomach, which was much softer. The attack was successful and again Hayakawa burned it with fire. They managed to defeat the monster. When the smoke began to dissipate, Yamada realized that Fukimoto was crushed by the body of the defeated monster. Hayakawa felt a little regretful because he should have breathed out the fire a little slower so that Fukimoto could save himself earlier. Sekiiori certainly confirmed Fukimoto's condition and the man said that what happened was absolutely nothing. The condition is very good. It's just that he was angry with his other colleagues. They should be more careful next time. He also reminded Yamada to maximize his function as a strong adventurer next time. Yamada of course apologized and said that he would be more careful next time. Yamada was relieved that they had succeeded in defeating that one monster. Now they just need to keep a safe distance until everything is truly over. On the other hand, Seki Iori also paid attention to all the monsters that were ranked C because he felt there was nothing else to pay attention to. Everything should end safely. On the other hand, other adventurers are also fighting monsters. They all also thought that just a little more fighting would be done, and they would be able to finish everything. Moreover, seeing that all the monsters were dead, until suddenly something unusual appeared there. Adventurers asked other adventurers to be careful. An unusual monster appeared. All the adventurers who had thought that everything would end peacefully now regretted their own words. Fukimoto noticed that the monster was a diamond wolf, a rank monster, which adventurers definitely couldn't beat. The monster started attacking the adventurers and everyone started to panic. Fukimoto could only curse because he felt that nothing good happened when he was with Yamada and Eisukawa. They tried to escape then. But of course, Seki Iori couldn't just leave. If he ran away with Fukimoto, not only the adventurers would be in danger, but also the residents. Even though Seki Iori might have stood out a lot at that time, he had no other way. However, while he was still considering that, an adventurer passed by his side while carrying a sword in his hand. The mysterious person confidently ran towards the monster and attacked it quickly. Of course, all the adventurers who saw could only be amazed. They said that it was Superman fighting a monster. Fukimoto also realized that a friend with extraordinary strength had appeared there. Seki Iori is certainly curious about who that person is. Fukimoto explained that it was an S-rank adventurer named Kandasaki. Seki Iori saw the adventurer's figure, which meant he was at the same level as Satsuki Ren. Seki Iori realized that Kandasaki was looking at him. However, the girl turned her face away again. Seki Iori was of course confused about the meaning of the girl's actions. All the adventurers cheered because the diamond wolf monster was defeated by Kandasaki. Fukimoto was relieved by the presence of Kandasuki, who defeated the A-rank monster and allowed them to get 2 times the participation prize. Added to their previous prize for being able to kill monsters, they will get 250,000 yen. Even Kandasuki was able to defeat the diamond wolf monster in just a matter of seconds. They felt lucky that day. Seki Iori felt that the amount of money they got was quite good. Although he actually wouldn't face any financial problems because he could rely on the Adventurer Guild's regulations regarding forbidden limits. Then, because that day they were all able to earn enough money, including Seki Iori, Fukimoto invited the man to drink with them. Seki Iori is grateful for the offer, but he won't do it today. He reasoned that his younger sister was waiting at home. Fukimoto was a little surprised because Seki Iori had a younger sister. Seki Iori said again that he needed to go home and cook dinner for his younger sister, who was still in middle school because they only lived together. Yamada apologizes because they didn't know at all. Heizawa also praised Seki Iori, who was a good older brother. Likewise, Fukimoto asked Seki Iori to immediately return home and make dinner for his younger sister. Seki Iori thanked him and he was relieved because the men were good even though their appearance seemed otherwise. As soon as he arrived in front of his house, Seki Iori could feel mana energy equivalent to an S-rank adventurer coming from inside his house. He immediately knew that there were guests in the house. Sensing the energy, Seki Iori guessed that it was Satsuki Ren. As soon as Seki Iori entered and said hello, Kadoha greeted him while bringing drinks and saying that one of Seki Iori's friends was visiting their house. Seki Iori wants to know if it's Ren, but Kadoha says it's not. She said the guest was a woman. The girl immediately apologized because her arrival had disturbed her. Of course, Seki Iori was surprised because she was the S-rank adventurer girl he had just seen before. On the other hand, Kadoha protests because Seki Iori's friends are mostly cute girls, and for her that is not good. Of course, Seki Iori wanted to clear up Kadoha's misunderstanding. He quickly admitted that he did not know Kandasaki. Of course, Kadoha confirmed the truth and Kandasaki casually nodded. This made Kadoha of course surprised and wanted to know Kandasaki's true intentions. Kandasaki apologizes, but she admits she lied so she could talk to Seki Iori. Kadoha couldn't believe it even more when she realized that her older brother was very popular. At that time, Seki Iori stated that he would talk to Kandasaki and asked Kadoha to go to another room first. Even though she was annoyed, Kadoha had no other choice. Seki Iori started to ask how Kandasaki knew where he lived. Casually, Kandasaki said that she was using her status as an S-rank adventurer in the guild. But of course, Seki Iori was annoyed because the Adventurer Guild should not easily hand over his personal information to just anyone. Seki Iori finally wants to know what Kandasaki wants. Kandasaki admitted that he was curious because previously he was the only one who stood tall looking at the figure of the Diamond Wolf when all the adventurers had run away. Meanwhile, when she tried to find out through the adventurer's data, Seki Iori was just an A-rank adventurer who was still a beginner, but this made him even more suspicious. Seki Iori certainly didn't think that was the reason why Kandasaki came to see him. In her heart, she realized that the data regarding her in the Adventurers Guild was full of several things that were indeed suspicious. Kandasaki finally asked who Seki Iori was. The man casually answered that he was an adventurer. Kandasaki wanted to know how strong the man was. Seki Iori answered casually that his strength was the same as a rank adventurer should be. Kandasaki said that a strong adventurer should fight well and be an example to show to everyone. For her, that was the duty of all high-ranking adventurers. Unbeknownst to him, Kotoha and the spheres heard everything. On the other hand, Seki Iori was confused about what Kandasaki was thinking. Is Kandasaki just someone who happens to have a strong sense of justice? However, not wanting to prolong matters, Seki Iori agreed to the girl's wishes. Kandasaki was relieved to hear that and she immediately left the house. After Kandasaki left, Spheres was also confused by the girl's attitude. Meanwhile, Kotoha views him as a mysterious person. Seki Iori immediately confirmed. However, not long after, they realized that Kandasaki had dropped a card which turned out to be a guild card. Kotoha was quite confused because she had never seen a guild card color like that before. Seki Iori was increasingly confused as to why the girl left after dropping something. Like it or not, Seki Iori has to return it. As soon as Seki Iori tried to chase him, Kandasaki was already far away. He could even feel Kandasaki's whereabouts, that she had gone far in such a short time. But then he could feel Kandasaki's presence and immediately followed him into an alley. Seki Iori immediately handed over the guild card and advised that the card was very important for an adventurer so he should not drop it again. Kandasaki received it and realized that she had accidentally dropped it. What Seki Iori didn't realize was that Kandasaki had been with a man named Noda who was a rank adventurer. The man asked Seki Iori not to disturb them. Of course, Seki Iori quick turned to Kandasaki and checked to see if he was annoying. Kandasaki quickly shook his head, so Seki Iori said again that he was not disturbing anything there. Noda was of course angry and said that Seki Iori had disturbed the two of them because they were almost going to fight at that time. Of course, Seki Iori was curious about the fight. Seki Iori certainly wants to know why Noda wants to fight Kandasaki. Noda wants to defeat Kandasaki and prove that he is strong enough to be promoted to an S-rank adventurer. Kandasaki reveals that things like that often happen to him. It seems like there are a lot of rank adventurers out there who feel arrogant and think that their strength is so high that they can defeat him. Noda was certainly angry to hear that. He again challenged Kandasaki to a fight to prove whether his arrogance was true or not. Seki Iori of course asked Noda to stop. Noda didn't care and instead, he threw Seki Iori away while starting to attack. Seki Iori could see how bad the overzealous man was. Noda immediately headed towards Kandasaki, angry because the girl had called him arrogant. At that time, very calmly, Kandasaki attacked him with one move. Noda didn't believe Kandasaki could beat him with a body like that. Kandasaki casually shows Noda's true arrogance. She also asked Noda to leave there if he was satisfied with the results. Noda leaves cursing and saying that he will remember the incident forever. On the other hand, Seki Iori was amazed to see Kandasaki who was able to defeat Noda in the blink of an eye. Kandasaki casually said that Seki Iori was not a normal man at all. Of course, the man was confused. Kandasaki revealed that the way Seki Iori dodged previously was not something a rank adventurer could do. Likewise, with his reflexes, vision, and even the way he mastered body movements, Seki Iori clearly shows an ability that cannot only be obtained from skill training alone. Of course, Seki Iori didn't think that Kandasaki could judge everything just from the evasion he made. Kandasaki is someone who can judge other people quite well. Seki Iori casually said that Kandasaki was just exaggerating. Kandasaki challenges to test Seki Iori's abilities himself. But Seki Iori refused. As if he didn't want to hear rejection, he attacked the man, but Seki Iori chose to remain silent. Kandasaki is certainly curious why Seki Iori didn't do anything. Seki Iori casually said that it was quite embarrassing and besides, Kandasaki's attack was also too fast for him to act. Kandasaki tried to understand and she helped Seki Iori to stand up. Kandasaki thought in his heart that even if Seki Iori didn't react to his attack, he should at least be annoyed by Kandasaki's actions. However, this man was so calm and it was very abnormal. Seki Iori said that he was not as special as Kandasaki thought. Because he felt his business was finished, Seki Iori chose to leave there. He will return home after delivering Kandasaki's fallen goods. This reminded Kandasaki. How did that man manage to catch up with him so quickly in such a short time? Seki Iori casually states that speed is his main point of strength. That's why he was promoted as an A-rank adventurer. Kandasaki finally understood why Seki Iori was an abnormal man because he was someone whose main point of strength was speed. Seki Iori felt honored to receive recognition from an S-rank adventurer. For him, it was something to be proud of. However, now he had to start cooking dinner, so he quickly left. They said hello to each other bye. After Seki Iori left, Kandasaki still looked at him. To be honest, Seki Iori felt worried because he knew that he was being watched and it felt very troublesome. As soon as he arrived home, Seki Iori could smell the aroma of meat being grilled. Kotoha immediately greeted me and said that dinner was almost ready. Kotoha decides to cook dinner so that it will be ready by the time Seki Iori gets home because he is so busy. Seki Iori thanked him. The sphere could see the happy Seki Iori at that time and called him a Siskin. Seki Iori said that it was because Kotoha cooked dinner for him, so he was indeed very happy. However, he also said that he is not a Siskin or an older brother who is so obsessed with his sister. Sphere of course disagrees and feels that Seki Iori is very stubborn because he doesn't want to admit it. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Seki Iori is no less adamant in rejecting this notion. Kadoha asks everyone to calm down and eat quickly before it gets cold. While enjoying his food, Seki Iori could see Sphere, who seemed to be starting to get addicted to the internet. Kadoha, who was paying attention, also asked if anything was interesting going on the internet. Sphere says that the number of open gates has increased sharply. Seki Iori confirmed, and that means the chance for monsters to appear is also greater. Spheres then said that this also meant that Seki Iori would participate more and more in activities carried out by the Adventurers Guild. However, Seki Iori felt that it was not a good thing at all. Seki Iori advised Kadoha to keep his distance from all areas that have gates so that he is always safe, because an area like that also increases the possibility that Seki Iori will be injured. Of course, Kadoha ensured that he would take good care of himself. The monsters wouldn't be able to defeat him easily anyway. Seeing Kadoha so confident, of course, Seki Iori became very worried. He begged his younger brother not to think one bit about this. Kadoha immediately agreed reluctantly. However, Kadoha still insists that she is really strong enough. Seki Iori certainly agrees because after all, Kadoha is his younger sister. Of course, she is not a weak girl. Seeing this interaction, Sphere realized that Seki Iori didn't know either. But Kadoha knew the man was probably just pretending not to know for Kadoha's good. He was just always the overprotective brother he always was. A week later, after Seki Iori completed the crystal mines, Shimizu finally woke up too. When he heard how Ryuzaki had finally died, the sadness showed on his face, even if only for a moment. Seki Iori also knew that he was only forced to smile at that time. Even though he didn't feel responsible, if only Seki Iori could be a little stronger, maybe he could save Ryuzaki. After returning from visiting Shimizu at the hospital, Seki Iori and Kadoha, who were walking again, talked about it. Kadoha feels that Shimizu seems to be fine now. Seki Iori also saw that Shimizu had fully recovered and would probably be released from the hospital soon. Of course, Kadoha was happy to hear that. Afterward, Kadoha wants to know if Seki Iori plans to continue his work as an adventurer. The man said that he couldn't just stop. He had to train Amami and Suzukaze first. Kadoha knew that it was because she had promised the two before, and Seki Iori said yes. If both of them have become stronger, Seki Iori will also be able to move away from the center of attention and work without having to highlight himself. However, Kadoha knew that as time passed, Seki Iori would also become stronger. Seki Iori didn't avoid it, but from the beginning, his reason was just to save Kadoha. Right now, he didn't have any other goals to pursue. He also asked Kadoha to keep the secret between the two of them. Kadoha teases him and asks if he has to hide it. Seki Iori seemed to understand, so he offered to buy anything Kadoha wanted. Kadoha is of course happy because his method turned out to be successful. Elsewhere, two mysterious men discovered a dungeon yesterday. Until now, the existence of this dungeon has not been known by the Adventurers Guild. This means they can have all the objects in the dungeon without having to compete with others. They were of course very happy and felt lucky at that time with what they found. They then estimated the time needed to conquer the dungeon and estimated that it would take them 1 day. However, other men said they still don't know how much risk they might encounter inside. Another man said that they just had to scout the dungeon carefully and stay clear of the dungeon boss. If they succeed, then they will be able to get a lot of valuable objects from the dungeon. The two of them decided to enter the dungeon, which they still considered lucky. Once they were inside, they were so disappointed because it was an F-rank dungeon, which meant they wouldn't be able to get any big results even if they managed to get all the valuable items inside. It might even be much better for them to report the dungeon to the Adventurers Guild and get rewards from there. The two decided to go back, but suddenly there was a strange voice laughing in the dungeon. The men decided to report it to the Adventurers Guild. A receptionist then listed the new dungeon. Recently, many new dungeons have appeared. The monsters in the dungeon were just slimes, so it wasn't a dangerous dungeon at all. It is an F-rank dungeon, which is a beginner-level dungeon and is very rare. The receptionist decided to recommend the dungeon to the next adventurer who would register. At that time they were in a rank B dungeon called the Great Snake's Limestone Cave. The boss of the dungeon is called the Sea Serpent. Amami started attacking the boss monster with the arrows he had. He regretted that his attack was not strong enough, but at least his ability was surprising enough for himself. Suzukaze praises him, but he'll take over from there. The girl didn't want to lose and showed off the move she had in the form of a fireball. The dungeon boss was finally defeated. Amami praised Suzukaze's strength even though he was a little annoyed, but instead, Suzukaze said that it was all thanks to Amami who paralyzed the dungeon boss first. At that time, Seki Iori also praised the two of them for working very well. He was truly amazed by Amami and Suzukaze's ability to conquer a B-rank dungeon with their abilities. Of course, both of them said that they were able to do it because Seki Iori trained them. Amami also agrees that he now feels much stronger, and he is also grateful because it was all possible thanks to Seki Iori. Seki Iori was happy to hear that. That day was 2 months since he succeeded in conquering the Crystal Mines dungeon. Amami and Suzukaze have grown and developed to become stronger than even Seki Iori himself still finds it hard to believe. Seeing their fighting skills just now, Seki Iori felt that both of them already had strength equivalent to a rank adventurers. They were progressing faster than expected. That means Seki Iori can also stop being an adventurer as soon as possible. Meanwhile, on the first floor of the Adventurers Guild, Amami and Suzukaze were receiving their rewards after conquering the previous B-rank dungeon. Both of them were of course happy because they could get an extraordinary amount of prizes after defeating the dungeon boss. They had never seen that much money before. The prize they received was 1.5 million yen, and that means they will get 500,000 yen each. At that time, Seki Iori felt that he couldn't accept the gift because he was just watching while he was inside. So, he asked the two girls to divide the two parts. Of course, Suzukaze immediately rejected it. However, they managed to do it because of Seki Iori, and it was their way of thanking him. Amami also added that Seki Iori had also succeeded in monitoring and guarding them while they were in the dungeon. Seki Iori, who knew the two girls would continue to force him, could only accept it. They asked Seki Iori to use the money to buy delicious food for Kadoha or other things. Seki Iori then invited the two of them to join as well. He wanted to celebrate the success of Amami and Suzukaze, who had successfully conquered the B-rank dungeon previously. Even though they were aware that Seki Iori could be very wise when it came to involving Kadoha, they would still be happy to do so. They also planned to invite Nagisawa and Shimizu later. They finally agreed to celebrate another day, but that day they decided to go home first. That's when Hamada saw Seki Iori there. He immediately ran over to the man who came at the right time. Seki Iori certainly wanted to know what Hamada wanted to talk about. He wanted to ask Seki Iori for help, but seeing Amami and Suzukaze there, he asked if Seki Iori had time to talk to him. It was at that moment that both Suzukaze and Amami became curious about what the two men were talking about. Even though both of them weren't sure, Hamada did look very nervous. Seki Iori and Hamada finally sat at a cafeteria table while drinking coffee. Seki Iori asked what Hamada wanted to say. Hamada began to show an envelope containing a dungeon investigation request. He wanted Seki Iori to see the contents of the document. The dungeon was said to be very popular recently among adventurers. The dungeon was C rank, but originally it was an F rank dungeon. Of course, Seki Iori was curious about how an F rank dungeon could rise to C rank. Hamada begins to explain that there is something strange about this dungeon. The more adventurers tried to conquer this dungeon, the more they realized that it had no boss or dungeon core. Seki Iori is curious about how the dungeon was created in the first place. Hamada admitted that he didn't know yet, but the Adventurers Guild certainly couldn't just let go of a dungeon that had no known level of danger like that. Therefore, he needed the help of a high-ranking adventurer to check it. Hamada said that if Seki Iori managed to find the dungeon boss or dungeon core, then they could determine the exact level of danger of the dungeon. Seki Iori tries to confirm the task again. Did the Adventurer Guild only need his help to find bosses or dungeon cores and not to destroy them? Hamada confirmed. The dungeon produced a lot of material, so they wanted to leave the dungeon intact, but if Seki Iori's investigation concluded that the dungeon had a high level of danger, he could destroy it. Seki Iori understood, so he thought about accepting the job. Of course, Hamada immediately thanked him. Hamada also added that he hoped that Seki Iori could complete the investigation before the end of the month. Once again, Seki Iori agreed. Seki Iori leaves Hamada. In his heart, he knew there was no need to accept such a mission, but he felt he owed Hamada a small debt of gratitude. That's why he decided to help. Seki Iori also believes that compared to his previous life, he is quite popular now. Just thinking that, Kandasaki greeted him. Seki Iori also hasn't seen that girl for a long time. He wanted to know what Kandasaki was doing there. The presence of Kandasaki, who was with Seki Iori, quickly attracted the attention of other people around them. People recognized Kandasaki, who was an S-rank adventurer. They wanted to know who the man who was currently with Kandasaki was. Somehow some of them felt like they had seen Seki Iori before. Seki Iori realized that many people were looking at them at that time. He also realized that it was not a good place to talk at all. Kandasaki expressed his desire to talk to Seki Iori when they met at the Adventurers Guild. These words made people even more excited and curious about what relationship existed between the two. Seki Iori of course understood, but he immediately took Kandasaki away from there so he could find a better place to talk. Everyone's eyes seemed to be constantly watching the two of them. Seki Iori felt that interacting with Kandasaki was even more difficult than the investigation request task he received previously. Once in a cafe, Seki Iori asked Kandasaki what she wanted to talk about. Kandasaki started talking about the Bewitching Forest dungeon. Of course, Seki Iori secretly knew about it because it was the dungeon that Hamada had just given him to investigate. However, in front of Kandasaki, she only admitted that she knew about it because the dungeon was popular recently. Kandasaki revealed that the dungeon was very strange. So far there has not been a single reliable piece of information regarding the dungeon. Seki Iori certainly wants to hear more. So far the dungeon has produced many types of monsters, and all the types of monsters, there is no pattern or similarity between one and another. The terrain and difficulty of the dungeon also continued to change. Of course, Kandasaki felt that was very strange. There has never been a dungeon like this before. Seki Iori confirmed it, But as far as he knew, the dungeon was currently ranked C. Kandasaki confirmed it, but even that dungeon had so far caused a lot more damage than other C-ranked dungeons. Kandasaki continued to explain that of all the adventurers who returned from the dungeon, 15 of them went crazy. They can no longer live normally. The number may sound small, but it is even more frightening because the dungeon was only discovered 2 months ago. Seki Iori wants to know if the dungeon can be closed by the Adventurers Guild. Kandasaki revealed that so far the Adventurers Guild has no idea what happened to the returning adventurers. She hasn't revealed that to the Adventurers Guild. Seki Iori understood, but he was curious about how Kandasaki knew everything. Kandasaki said that his father was a researcher and she was also the one who collected all the information from all over the city. Seki Iori continued to pay attention to Kandasaki, who was talking. Somehow, the girl seemed indifferent to this quite surprising fact. Seki Iori didn't want to guess too much. He thought that this was just the natural attitude of an S-rank adventurer family which was made up entirely of big figures. After revealing everything she wanted to say, Kandasaki wanted to ask Seki Iori something. In his heart, Seki Iori was already anticipating. But in the end, he could only ask what Kandasaki wanted to ask. She asked Seki Iori to form a team with her and conquer the bewitching forest dungeon. In his heart, Seki Iori somehow already expected it. However, he obviously couldn't do it because Hamada had asked him directly to investigate the dungeon. However, Seki Iori also knows that it will have worse consequences if Kandasaki finds out his secret, and this makes him even more curious about him. Finally, Seki Iori apologized and reasoned that he was busy with his team at the moment. Kandasaki understood but sounded so disappointed. Seki Iori apologized and asked Kandasaki to find someone else who could work with him. Kandasaki finished their conversation and she chose to just leave there after paying for her drink. In his heart, of course, Kandasaki felt very disappointed, but she was sure everything would be fine. Furthermore, she was used to fighting alone all this time. Seki Iori feels guilty about what he just did. Once back at home, Kadoha was very happy with the food served by Seki Iori. He was so excited to hand over a pile of dirty plates while saying thank you. For him, Seki Iori's problems were always the best. However, seeing the expression on Seki Iori's face, of course, Kadoha was curious whether his older brother was sad. Of course, Seki Iori immediately dodged it. Sphere reminded Kadoha that all this time her older brother had never shown a happy expression. Of course, Seki Iori was annoyed to hear that. Sphere was just talking harshly without thinking. Kadoha immediately calmed her older brother. She won't worry anymore as long as nothing happens out of the ordinary. Kadoha just felt like the older brother might not be doing well for some reason. Seki Iori can only be grateful because Kadoha is worried about him. To be honest, Seki Iori also asked himself, is it true that he looks sad? Seki Iori didn't expect that refusing Kandasaki's request would bother him more than he thought. Even though all this time he had always made cold and calculated decisions, now it felt difficult. Because he felt his mind was a mess, Seki Iori finally chose to go for a walk. He thought again about Kandasaki. Seki Iori began to think that he should at least make sure Kandasaki was not in danger. Therefore, before Kandasaki got ahead of him, he had to immediately complete the dungeon first. Seki Iori, who looked at the dungeon, remembered Kandasaki's words, saying that there had been 15 victims from the dungeon. The dungeon core should have been destroyed by previous adventurers. Kandasaki must also be thinking the same thing. Once outside the dungeon gate, Seki Iori could see all the adventurers lying on the floor, leaving one man who still survives and tries to wake everyone up. The man was hysterical and started asking Seki Iori to call a high-ranking adventurer who could help them. He also said that inside there was an adventurer who was fighting alone. Of course, Seki Iori was still a little confused. The adventurer continued that inside there was an S-rank adventurer named Kandasaki who was fighting alone, so they were able to escape at that time. The man asked Seki Iori to immediately contact the Adventurers Guild. In his mind, Seki Iori did not expect that Kandasaki would leave so early. Seki Iori of course had to save him. So, he who was in a rank adventurer would come in to help. Just about to leave, the man once again grabbed Seki Iori's hand. He forbade Seki Iori to go alone because the dungeon was very crazy. Even an S-rank adventurer like Kandasaki could only buy a little time when fighting that boss. Moreover, rank adventurers won't be able to do anything. Seki Iori was still trying to digest the man's words. The man said that everything the dungeon had shown him so far was just an illusion. Everything is just a lie and this dungeon is very dangerous. At that moment, Seki Iori immediately ran into the dungeon. He felt even more guilty because he hadn't gone with Kandasaki before. He could only hope that Kandasaki could last a little longer. As soon as he arrived in the dungeon, Seki Iori could feel a lot of mana in the air. He immediately knew that it was not a C-rank dungeon as had been talked about. He could also feel Kandasaki's mana starting to disappear. Of course, he had to hurry, but suddenly a monster came to attack him. With ease, Seki Iori immediately killed them. He had no time to deal with such petty enemies. Seki Iori started running. In his heart, he still hoped that Kandasaki could wait for him. he would soon arrive at the girl's location. An hour earlier, Kandasaki had arrived at the bewitching forest dungeon alone. Kandasaki paid attention to the surrounding location, which visually looked completely harmless. The dungeon looked safe and calm. However, considering the number of victims, the dungeon felt scary. Something is going on there. At that moment, Kandasaki suddenly heard crying. She was immediately sure that it was the voice of an adventurer. Hastily, Kandasaki tried to find the origin of the sound. In an area, there are monsters and 3 adventurers. 2 of them had even fallen to the ground. There was one man left who was still very confused about the type of monster he saw. A monster that can even take down 3 adventurers at once in one attack. The monster very calmly said that it was clear that the dungeon was a very scary place. The man was clearly in a world that could cause harm if they were only half-hearted in doing so. The man should have understood it. That's when the monster said that the man's role was finally finished. After his final task of being bait had been carried out, the adventurer just needs to die now. However, when he was about to kill the man, a sudden attack thwarted the monster's attack. It turns out that Kandasaki managed to save the man. The monster was quite surprised because Kandasaki was there faster than he expected. At that time, Kandasaki asked the man to take his injured colleague out of there. Meanwhile, he will stay to take care of the monster. The monster certainly wouldn't let off the adventurers easily. She intended to attack the adventurer, but Kandasaki quickly protected them. She knew the monster definitely wouldn't let her, but she was determined to save the remaining adventurers. The monster was quite impressed with Kandasaki's speed. She was sure that the adventurers would be able to escape from it. Kandasaki immediately knew that the monster he was facing was intelligent. The monster was a difficult enemy to defeat alone. However, that wasn't a problem as long as no one else was trapped there. Kandasaki is determined to save them. That is his duty as someone with power. Monster regrets because this is the end for Kandasaki. Of course, Kandasaki didn't believe the monster's words, which sounded absurd even though they hadn't even fought at that time. The monster casually said that when Kandasaki entered the dungeon, it would be the end for him. From the start, he was the one who deliberately lured Kandasaki into entering the dungeon. However, for Kandasaki, this did not affect him at all. For him, any location is the same and it's not a problem for him. Kandasaki started to attack, but the monster managed to dodge it. At that time, she also felt strange. His body suddenly felt heavy. The monster then said that the dungeon was filled with gas that could make humans weak. The monster casually underestimated Kandasaki, who didn't realize it. The monsters also know that even high-rank adventurers like Kandasaki don't have strong resistance to magic. She also told the monster to brag after he was able to defeat him. Kandasaki attacked again, but once again she failed and he was very surprised. The monster regretted that Kandasaki's attack did not affect him. The monster had grown to be very strong. He thanked all the mana he managed to absorb from all the adventurers who entered the dungeon previously. Meanwhile, Kandasaki will not be able to beat him because he has become weak. At that moment, Kandasaki realized that he could not defeat a monster with that kind of strength. Kandasaki felt he had to escape from there. However, the monster first grabbed Kandasaki's head and thanked him for what the monster would get from him. Kandasaki really couldn't do anything. He could feel his body weakening and his consciousness fading away. At that moment, a huge attack immediately fell on the monster. The monster naturally wanted to know who would dare attack it at a time like that. Kandasaki at the end of his consciousness tried to glance too and she could see Seki Iori. It was then that the man apologized for coming late, but he came to save her now. Seki Iori realized that the entire dungeon area was currently covered by illusion magic and a gas that could weaken humans also filled the entire dungeon. Seki Iori needs a spell to remove all the effects of magic on him. Seki Iori was considering what magic could be used in such conditions. He still had spare skill points and was considering what he could do with them. However, before he finished thinking, the monster attacked him. Monsters are easily attracted to Seki Iori's abilities. The monster knew that Seki Iori could see the spell he was using. So far no one has been able to do it apart from Seki Iori. At that moment, Seki Iori kicked the monster very hard. He wanted the monster to release Kandasaki, who had been in his grasp for a long time. As soon as the girl was released, Seki Iori immediately caught her. The man confirmed Kandasaki's condition. The girl said she was fine but felt very weak. Seki Iori knew that it was because the monster absorbed Kandasaki's mana. The man advised Kandasaki to stay where he was and rest until he completely recovered. Seki Iori asks him to take a breath now because he will handle the rest. Of course, Kandasaki forbade Seki Iori to fight monsters. Seki Iori definitely wouldn't be able to defeat that monster alone. She asked him to just run away. Of course, Seki Iori insisted on his determination. Moreover, he also knew that if Kandasaki were currently changing positions with him, he would also do the same thing. Kandasaki still wasn't convinced. Seki Iori ensures that he is only doing his job as an adventurer. He also asked Kandasaki to calm down because he could defeat the monster. Seki Iori's words of course made the monster laugh. He likened Seki Iori to a comedian who was making jokes. The monster certainly believed that Seki Iori would not be able to defeat it. Monsters again remind Seki Iori, who must have heard of the concept of irregularity. Monsters usually rarely mutate and evolve into new species. However, the monster deliberately wanted to undergo this mutation. To do so, he must steal mana from adventurers and store it within his own body, like what he had previously done to Kandasaki. Kandasaki's mana was finally able to fulfill all of his mana needs. Therefore, eventually, the monster could mutate. His previous strength couldn't even compare to his current strength. The monster has completely mutated. His current condition made Kandasaki very surprised. The monster was very confident and believed that he was now much stronger than an S-rank adventurer. He felt that no adventurer could defeat him. Of course, Seki Iori denied it. The monster might be shocked to realize that what he said was wrong. However, humans are creatures capable of distorting common sense. The monster couldn't wait to see him. Without further ado, he immediately attacked Seki Iori and his movements turned out to be very fast. Luckily, Iori managed to avoid the attack. He immediately gave a counter-punch. Seki Iori's attack caused them to collide with each other and both of their bodies were sent flying. Seki Iori immediately realized that at this time the monster had enormous and overwhelming power even without using any magic. Seki Iori didn't expect something like this to happen at all. The monster seemed to notice it. He thought Seki Iori could no longer handle his attacks. Seki Iori understood that the monster was clearly at the peak of its power after mutating. Seki Iori began to think of other ways to defeat him. His arrogance might be an opportunity for Seki Iori. Seki Iori realized that at this time it was impossible for him to defeat the monster by relying solely on physical strength. He realized that he had to change the terms of their battle to suit Seki Iori's abilities, namely turning it into a battle using the power of magic. The monster looked at Seki Iori with a sharp gaze and then asked why the young man was silent. Was he too scared that he couldn't speak? Seki Iori thought the monster would definitely leave an opening due to its overconfidence. Then it would use its skill points to overcome the enemy's strength. Seki Iori looked at his skill status on the window screen and found a skill that had a gravity type that could stop the opponent's movements. However, it is a last resort in times of urgency. At first glance, it was a spell that was difficult to use. The monster felt bored because the young man who was the opponent didn't want to talk. But if Seki Iori didn't want to talk, then he would make the young man scream very loudly. At this moment, Seki Iori used the zero object skill to see his opponent's movements more carefully and then hit the monsters very hard. The big monster was thrown quite far because of Seki Iori's attack. This young man realized that, for a moment, the monster's strength could be reduced and Seki Iori could use that opportunity to fight the enemy. And with the magic eye of wisdom he has, Seki Iori won't miss a single move. Kanda, who was sitting quite far away, thought that Seki Iori was really great. On the other hand, the terrible monster attacked Seki again from behind. Seki quickly dodged, then hit the monster's face again. Several times the monster tried to fight back, but Seki was always able to dodge it. In fact, several times the monster was hit by quite strong attacks from Seki. The monster was surprised and asked in his heart, how could Seki follow and resist his attacks? In the end, the monster receives a kick hard enough from Seki to make him fall helpless. It was at this moment, Seki said that it seemed like the monster was going to scream really loudly. Hearing Seki Iori's words, the monster chuckled and answered that they didn't know yet how the fight would end. The monster asked Seki not to underestimate his observation skills. The monster said he already knew the Seki technique in their exchange. The monster realized Seki could stop the monster's attack temporarily. The monster wondered if Seki Iori's specialty was a fighting type, but it seemed like he did a lot of strange things. Seki started to worry because the monster knew his general skills. The monster said, to be honest, he was surprised at how high Seki Iori's combat abilities were, but it was still just a trivial matter to him. According to him, no matter how skilled Seki was, it was useless in the face of the monster's overwhelming strength. The monster exerted its greater strength. Seki suspected that the monster would unleash its full power. Seki Iori realized he might be in a bit of trouble now. The monster asked Seki to fight longer from now on. The monster attacked Seki again with quite a powerful attack. Seki Iori tried to block the monster's attack, but this time his abilities didn't really have any effect on the monster. With a terrible expression, the monster asked, is there something wrong with Seki? And is that all Seki has? Then, with one powerful kick, the monster managed to throw Seki's body until it hit the stone wall. When he woke up again, Seki's body was covered in wounds. The young man realized the monster's attacks were now faster, so he was no longer able to grasp the timing. He already tried attacking once and in the end, he was almost at death's door. Seeing the condition of Seki's badly injured body, Kandasaki asked him to stop trying and just run away from that place. Because after all, the monster was too strong and too terrible for Seki to fight. Seki Iori knew, and he understood the huge difference in strength between them. But he still couldn't bring himself to leave Kandasaki alone. After all, he still had 90 skill points left. He had to think of a way to defeat the creature and get rid of it. He had to find that one way. It was at this moment, the system suddenly explained the dungeons what was being contracted. Do you want to communicate? Seki Iori was shocked and asked the will of the dungeon. Was it a separate entity from the boss before him? And the question reminded him of the first time he activated the forbidden restriction, so Seki would try to respond, and he was immediately transported to another dimension. The place was so bright that Seki thought it was nature in his mind. Suddenly a point of light said that he was happy to meet Seki. While trying to digest everything, Seki answered that he was also happy to see that light. The point of light said they would just get straight to the point. He has several proposals for Seki. He asks what if Seki unlocked the full power he had in his previous life. With a confused face, Seki even asked how the light knew about his previous life. The creature answered, apparently Seki hadn't realized it yet. The relationship between and the dungeon. The point of light explained that he was the dungeon itself. He only appeared to communicate with Seki. Seki just realized that all dungeons have managers. Seki was surprised that the light knew about the manager. Seki thought this might be some kind of higher existence. It was very possible that this existence was connected to how dungeons and skills appeared in this world. Seki asked whether that existence really thought that the previous was a good idea. If the old man can defeat the dungeon boss, then the dungeon will be destroyed too. The light spot explained he didn't mind if the core was destroyed. He didn't contact Seki for such a trivial matter, so he will immediately tell Seki the information he knows. If Seki Iori continues his fight with the boss like now, then he will fail and die. And that existence didn't want such a tragedy. That's why he made this offer. Limited to this fight alone, the light will restore Seki's former strength. Instead, in 3 months, 4 dungeons will appear, and Seki will conquer them all. Seki asked, so all of this is similar to an urgent search. The light spot explained, maybe it would be many times more difficult. Because the 4 bosses of the dungeon are gods, and unless Seki Iori sincerely tries to become stronger, then he will perish. With a serious face, Seki asked if he doesn't remove that condition, then he will die at any time. The point of light confirmed it. He asked Seki Iori to grow stronger because according to him, the current Seki Iori was too weak. The existence asked Seki to show him how he will grow stronger, growing enough to be worthy of a fraction of its power before this. Now Seki understood that the dungeons will had some kind of agenda. This felt too comfortable. However, what made him angry the most was that he needed such a comfortable situation. Seki is annoyed to realize that he is too weak to die and cannot save Kandasaki. Seki realized he had become too confident in his own strength. He thought that he was strong enough to defeat anything that came his way. Seki really believes in that. Seki regrets it and realizes there should be a limit to how pathetic he is now. There was not even a shadow of the former to him now. Seki finally answered he would accept Light's proposal. The Light said the 4 gods are very powerful. Will Seki be strong enough to defeat them now? Seki replies he will do his best to grow stronger so he doesn't lose to those gods. In that case, the Light would have high hopes for Seki. That was the Light's last message before it completely disappeared and said goodbye to Seki, the reincarnation archmage. Seki bowed his head and thought that it really emphasized his reincarnation. Then excitedly, Seki shouted Saya, and his whole appearance changed. Seki returns to the dungeon and surprises the monster and Kandasaki. They saw that Seki was very different and all the wounds on his body had healed. Seki answered that his appearance wasn't the only thing that had changed. The monster suspected that Seki had become stronger, but in his opinion, the difference in strength between them was still very large, and he will show that difference in strength by attacking Seki. But Seki easily withstood the monster's powerful attack, and then asked with an annoyed face what happened to the praise the monster had for him. Then Seki easily threw the monster's body just by saying a spell. The monster wondered what really happened. He thinks Seki's current strength is extraordinary. He almost can't believe Seki is the same person he fought a moment ago. The monster roared angrily when it saw Seki preparing to attack it again. According to him, he couldn't possibly lose to a human like Seki. When the monster was close, Seki managed to knock it down with just one swing of his hand. The creature didn't move when it hit the ground so hard. Seki said that the creature was indeed strong. Seki even lost a while ago, but now Seki would give the creature an easy ending. In times of urgency like now, the creature begged for mercy to be saved. But Seki wasn't so naive as to believe in that creature. Hearing Seki's answer, the creature immediately cursed. He couldn't accept dying in that place after becoming a mutant. Even so, Seki ignored the creature's words and immediately put the creature into the magic circle. At this moment, the monster was already unable to move its body. He thought, if only Seki wasn't there, then he could conquer all of humanity. Seki apologizes to the creature as this has to end now. Then with one swing of his hand, with the Tenma authority skill, the creature was destroyed like dust. Seeing this, Seki said that the technique was amazing, and he wanted to continue to grow as strong as it did. After the monster was destroyed, Seki turned to Kandasaki and asked, was the girl okay? Kandasaki answered she was fine. More importantly, the girl asked what transformation had just happened to Seki. Seki casually answered that it was part of his skill. Kandasaki said that Seki Iori had extraordinary strength. This girl had never even seen such power. Seki says he can only use the skill under very specific conditions. Seki explains he won't be able to use the skill again anytime soon. Kandasaki answered, before this incident, Seki was even at a stronger level than so according to the girl, Siki should be promoted as an S-rank hunter by the guild. Siki explained that actually he refused to be promoted to S-rank for various reasons. Hearing this, Kandasaki understood and would not try again. Siki expressed his gratitude for Kandasaki's understanding. Then Siki invited Kandasaki to solve the dungeon core and get out of that place as quickly as possible. Kandasaki agreed, so she tried to get up immediately, but her legs were still weak and in the end, the girl fell. Luckily, Siki moved quickly and swiftly caught the girl's body. Siki realized that Kandasaki had lost a lot of mana, so the young man asked Kandasaki not to force himself. Siki offered to carry the girl if he was willing. Then with a red face, Kandasaki asked for help because she couldn't walk. Finally, Siki actually carried Kandasaki through the dungeon. While walking, Kandasaki realized that Siki's back was very warm. Suddenly, this girl remembered that this was the first time someone had come to help her. So the girl carefully asked, why did Siki come to that place? Siki answered he felt ashamed of himself after rejecting Kandasaki's invitation. So before Kandasaki changed her mind, Siki went straight to the dungeon. But it turns out Kandasaki had already preceded Siki Iori. The young man said he was happy he managed to arrive on time. Hearing that answer, Kandasaki smiled while hiding his face behind Siki's back. The girl didn't forget to say thank you, because Siki was available to help her. Suddenly Kandasaki asked if Siki wanted to start dating. Or maybe there is something important that Siki wants to convey. With a confused face, Siki answered nothing. But why suddenly did Kandasaki ask like that? The girl answered she was thinking about being Siki's girlfriend. With a confused face, Siki thought it was too sudden. So Kandasaki invites Siki to make friends first or something to get to the next level. But Siki didn't respond and instead thought that Kandasaki was a little strange. Finally, the two of them arrived in front of a crystal which was the core of the dungeon. Siki lowered Kandasaki's body for a moment, then examined the object on the hologram screen. Suddenly Kandasaki asked whether the object was a grimoire of release. Siki turned and asked if Kandasaki knew about that object. The girl answered it was an item that was rarely found at the end of a difficult dungeon, and when used, the item will awaken skills and talents. Hearing Kandasaki's statement, Siki was curious and asked, how did the girl know? Kandasaki answered that only a small group of people knew, but a lot of information was shared with those S ranks. Siki understood the meaning of Kandasaki's words, so he thought about this carefully. Siki Iori realized that if he became S rank, he would have better access to information. And in this case, the reason Ren has 2 skills is probably because he uses the grimoire of release. Siki Iori slowly reached out his hand to touch the crystal in front of him, and the bright light immediately dazzled their eyes. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, people were busy admiring the unusual dungeon gate. They knew of only 4A ranks and 2B ranks, which showed that they understood how urgent this problem was. They had heard information that an A-rank hunter had entered the dungeon. But because S-rankers like Kandasaki are in trouble, according to them, the entry of A-rank hunters doesn't help at all. Satsuki Ren, who heard those people's words, also thought that the place was too hard for him, and everyone in that place might die in vain. Satsuki secretly thanked him in his heart, because even though his schedule was very busy, he still had free time to come to that place. Suddenly the gate gave off a very bright light. They all looked alert and worried if the gate was damaged. But slowly Siki Iori came out of the gate while carrying Kandasaki on his back. Everyone waiting outside the gate was clearly shocked to see the two of them. Seeing this, Satsuki Ren immediately ran over to Siki, making Siki ask if the young man had come to help him. Satsuki Ren confirmed Siki's question, and according to him, it made sense that Siki was the one who broke into the dungeon. While walking away past Satsuki Ren, Siki said he would give Satsuki the details another time. Now he had to take Kandasaki to a safe place to rest. Seeing Siki Iori able to get out of a very dangerous dungeon safely, and even being able to have a good relationship with Satsuki Ren clearly made people who saw Siki surprised. They began to wonder who Siki Iori really was. Siki Iori himself felt annoyed because he was once again the center of attention. Even so, this young man realized there was no point in worrying about that matter now, because he has bigger problems to worry about. Siki took Kandasaki to the front of her large, luxurious house. Siki was stunned to see the house. Kandasaki explained that this was because her father was a researcher. Siki asks if he asked about it too loudly. According to Kandasaki, Siki didn't need to ask because it was all clearly shown on his face. Before entering the house, Kandasaki asked if would Siki want to be her friend. Siki answered, of course. Kandasaki was very relieved to hear this, so she hoped that the two of them could go out together again next time. Siki Iori answered that maybe his hanging out should be postponed for a while because he had some things to do. Is that okay? Unexpectedly, Kandasaki had no problem with that. After that, Siki asked Kandasaki to rest well. Hearing this, Kandasaki turned to Siki, smiled, and said see you later. After replying to Kandasaki's message, the young man left. When Siki Iori had left, the girl held her face, which felt hot and red from smiling. That night, after arriving home, Siki Iori sat at home contemplating. This youth realized he had truly become arrogant. Siki Iori realized that he excelled in magic, so he felt he could easily deal with the monster. But it turns out he was wrong. His arrogance almost got him killed. Because of this, Seki Iori wants to return to its former glory days. Seki Iori slowly entered Kotoha's room. Sphere, who was looking after the girl, said that Seki had come home too late so Kotoha was already asleep. Finally, Seki Iori sat back in the living room, covering his face. Sphere approached the young man, so with a serious face, Seki Iori said that he wanted to become stronger. Sphere was shocked to hear the young man's statement, so she asked why Seki Iori suddenly changed his mind. Seki replies that he has realized his arrogance, that's all the reason. And he thought about protecting his life at this time. Seki Iori's happy life. That was the reason why he wanted to become stronger once again. So Seki asked if the sphere would help him. Sphere laughed a little before she finally screamed, realizing that Seki Iori was now really serious. Sphere said with great enthusiasm that this was what they had been waiting for the most. Sphere promises to be the perfect support for Seki Iori. Of course, Seki Iori expressed his gratitude for Sphere's help. The next day, while Seki has breakfast with Kotoha, he asks would Kotoha be bothered if he became famous. With a cheerful face, Kotoha answered, not in the slightest. Instead, she would love to brag to her friends about Seki. Hearing this, the worry in Seki's heart immediately disappeared, even though he was really worried that Kotoha would be very disturbed if he became famous. Seki then says it looks like they can move now. Kotoha immediately became excited when he heard that. This girl can't wait to get a new home. After that, Kotoha went to school and waved goodbye to Seki. Now it's time for Seki Iori to act. The young man stood on top of the building. Then he jumped from the top of the building and used the Tenma summon skill to summon the holy dragon Soru. Seki and Sphere ride the dragon to find the right location to practice. Sphere asks where they are going. Seki answered that to grow stronger, he first needs a base. He would search for an uninhabited island with that goal in mind. Sphere asks if that's okay, and would it be okay if Seki had an island of his own. Seki replied he didn't think anyone would know, and if they found out, he would have confronted them right then and there. Sphere commented this is what it's like when Seki Iori is serious. They flew over several islands near Japan. Sphere said, there are several small islands scattered in the area, so which one will Seki choose? Seki answered that he preferred islands that didn't have many hills. Sphere pointed out an island and said, there were quite a lot of trees but the place looked quite flat. Seki agreed with the Sphere, and they landed on the island. They both stood on the beach with a beautiful view. Then the Sphere asked, now what will they do? With a serious face, Seki Iori answered, of course, stay at that place. Sphere asks how exactly are they going to start setting up the place. Seki explains that his priority is a development facility where he can create the items needed to enter the dungeon. Sphere guessed that meant they had to make a shelter, so he suggested starting by making a simple house first. So Seki invited Sphere to find a good place to build a house like that. Seki thought the terrain on the island is mostly flat, but there are lots of trees. Seki thought they needed to make sure there was enough space, and the little fairy found a place that seemed suitable. Sphere finds a cave. Seki inspects the cave and says it looks like it's big enough to accommodate the development facility he has in mind. But then, they saw that there were many snakes in the cave. Sphere was shocked and screamed in fear, especially because the snakes started approaching to attack them. Seki Iori just gave them a sharp look, which scared the snakes, and immediately ran away. Seki gave an excuse, their instincts were probably telling them that their lives were in danger, so the snakes immediately left the cave. This young man also said that he had to apologize to the snakes because he had decided to use their place. Now they need a door and some interior fittings and decorations for the cave. Seki called Nemiya. Then he ordered the mystical lion-shaped animal to cut down several trees around the area and take them to the cave. Sphere comments that Nemiya looks like a pet now. To the point, the Sphere couldn't feel the slightest bit of its majesty since Seki first got it. Seki asked the little fairy not to worry, and now they might as well start cleaning that cave. It didn't take long, they succeeded in turning the cave into a clean and comfortable place. Even now the cave is full of items from Seki's previous life. After finishing preparing the contents of the cave, they went to check Nemiya's work. The mystical lion had finished uprooting several trees in the corner of the forest area, causing the forest which was initially overgrown with many trees to suddenly turn into empty land. Seki praised Nemiya and rubbed the mystical lion's head gently as a form of appreciation for Nemiya's pretty good job. After Nemiya cut down the trees, Seki immediately took out his sword and made a plank to use the trees as a door. Not long after, the large and sturdy wooden door had finished closing the mouth of the cave. Now their base is complete. After that, Sphere asks what else should they do now. Seki Iori answered, my only way to become stronger is to develop skill points and use them to obtain new spells from in other worlds when leveling up. Hearing this, Sphere's expression immediately soured. When Seki asked, why does the Sphere look so unhappy? Sphere firmly said of course he was not happy. Sphere means, why would they come to an uninhabited island and make a base? If in the end what Seki has to do is level up and just keep going through the dungeon in Tokyo. Seki said the Sphere was misunderstood. Naturally, the base is very important for leveling up. Seki Iori took out some magic stones and said, the difficulty of the dungeon that can be entered now is very trivial. So to become stronger, he had to fight even stronger enemies. So he will use the magic stones he has been collecting even after Kadoha recovers. Now, Seki Iori wants to create a strong golem to accompany him in training. Meanwhile, in another corner of the city which was starting to get dark, there was a creature who was cursing because he had just been defeated by Seki Iori. It turns out that the creature was a mutant that Seki Iori fought when saving Kandasaki. The creature felt grateful for having a smaller spare body. Thanks to that, he managed to escape, even after losing the dungeon. But he had to start over from the beginning, and it was all that bastard Seki Iori's fault. That night, a young man passed by. Quickly, the mysterious creature immediately jumped onto the foreign young man's head and slowly took control of his body. The living creature is determined to regain its strength in a short time, and this time he will rule them all. Seki Iori will use the magic stones he previously hoarded because Kadoha was healed to create a strong golem. Spheres of course understood, and now she understood why Seki Iori needed such a large place. Seki Iori confirmed it, and he then started making it. First, he would prepare a magic furnace to remove the impurities from the magic stone. Then he will melt it into a magic ingot that has a high level of purity. Seki Iori will also use all the magic stones he has. Spheres mean that one ingot will come from one magic stone. Each stone will require a processing time of around 10 minutes. Spheres want to know how many ingots it takes to make a golem. Seki Iori said that he needed 50 magic stones and 5 ingots. Seki Iori plans to make the golem from an outer layer of magic stone. Meanwhile, the inner frame will use rods. Seki Iori wanted to focus on the internal mechanism framework in the golem's body. Therefore, he would use all the high-quality magic stones to make the ingots. However, he realized that this work would require expensive costs and also take a long time. Everything was more than the initial estimate he had planned. Therefore, Seki Iori asked Spheres for help to create an ingot for him. Of course, the Spheres who heard this objected because they had to work hard. Seki Iori asks again about the Spheres' wish to help him become stronger. Of course, Spheres did say that. It's just that she didn't expect that she would have to deal with such trivial work. Moreover, the worst part of the job was that there was no internet at the place. Seki Iori said that Spheres is too dependent on the internet lately. But even so, Spheres is still determined to make Seki Iori a stronger figure. If he wasn't the one who helped the man, then who else would? Of course, Seki Iori was grateful, and he would also let Nemiya there to help Spheres lift the magic stone because he definitely wouldn't be able to do it himself. The Spheres of course agree. She asked Nemiya to be a good assistant for her. Seki Iori was happy to hear that. He will hand over the work to make ingots from rank B to rank S. The Spheres were of course sure they could be relied on to do it, but she wanted to know what Seki Iori would do while she worked like that. Seki Iori then says that it seems like he still doesn't have enough magic stones at the moment, so he plans to go to Tokyo and collect more magic stones. As in a rank adventurer, Seki Iori has the advantage of being able to go alone to B-rank dungeons and below. Therefore, he went to the Ghost Castle dungeon. He planned to collect many magic stones for himself, so it would be more comfortable for him to go alone rather than with a team. Seki Iori finally started exploring the castle, and without difficulty, he managed to get 5 B-rank magic stones. Seki Iori certainly felt happy because he was able to get a lot of magic stones even though he had just entered the dungeon. He was sure that the previous adventurers who managed to conquer the dungeon didn't even try to enter the castle. Of course, it was a good thing because he could get more magic stones, although perhaps he might encounter some danger later. It turns out that Seki Iori was not alone in the dungeon. There is an adventurer hiding. However, in his heart, he wondered how Seki Iori, who had just arrived, could defeat so many nightmare monsters so easily. He suspected that Seki Iori was an S-rank adventurer. However, if he remembered, he had never seen an S-rank adventurer like him. Of course, he became increasingly curious about the figure of Seki Iori. He was very annoyed because he had laid many traps in the castle to catch nightmare monsters. However, Seki Iori's presence disrupts all his efforts. He is an incompetent adventurer, but he likes to steal tools and equipment. The man had no other choice. He planned to leave there and act as if he had never been in the dungeon. However, before he had time to run away, Seki Iori appeared behind him. He immediately knew that it was the man who collected the monsters before. The man was certainly very surprised at how Seki Iori could find out where he was. Seki Iori could feel that someone had been stalking him all along. So, he tried to take a look. Who would have thought he would see a criminal hiding? In the dungeon, it was difficult to differentiate between murder and accident. Of course, Seki Iori had to act because he didn't know what kind of criminal he was facing. However, the criminal began to show the spirited away skill which allowed him to disappear. The villain confidently said that Seki Iori wouldn't be able to catch him even though he was very strong. Seki Iori was quite impressed with the villain's ability to completely hide himself and become transparent. This skill is stronger than the invisibility skill he has. It's just a shame that the villain has to fight him this time. Of course, the criminal couldn't escape. Seki Iori easily found it with the Eye of Wisdom. He immediately ran to catch the criminal and knocked him to the ground. Of course, the villain is surprised that Seki Iori can see him. He also asked Seki Iori to defeat him, but of course, the man had another way, namely by giving him to the Adventurers Guild. Hamada was of course grateful for Seki Iori's help. The criminal who was previously caught was a criminal who had often orchestrated several dungeon destructions. Of course, Seki Iori is happy to help. Hamada then said that just yesterday Seki Iori completed the Bewitching Forest dungeon. Hamada didn't even feel like he could be properly thanked for the help. However, today the man was wandering alone in a rank B dungeon. Seki Iori could only say yes, and Hamada praised the man for being a hard worker. Hamada was of course happy. He again offered to help with Seki Iori's promotion if he changed his mind. Seki Iori said that he would think about it. After Hamada left, Seki Iori was thinking about that possibility. Previously he never wanted to accept the offer, but looking at the current conditions it seemed like becoming an S-rank adventurer was the best step he could take. Just not right now, because he still has to determine a new residence for them and ensure Kotoha's safety first. There are many things to do, but now the focus will be on conquering the next dungeon. Seki Iori finally returned home and he was looking at the magic stones he had collected after a day of defeating monsters in a dungeon. He got 24 degrees Celsius rank magic stones and 30 B rank magic stones. Seki Iori soon realized that even if he spent one day in the dungeon, the number of magic stones he would collect was still not enough. Seki Iori is determined to complete several dungeons in one day, and for this, he will start early the next day. Seki Iori greeted Kotoha when she was home. Kotoha also welcomed back the arrival of her older brother. However, then he asked about spheres which he had not seen all day. Kotoha becomes curious about where the spheres are. Almost forgetting it, Seki Iori remembered that the spheres were on an uninhabited island at the moment. However, then the spheres came and landed on Kotoha's head. Of course, Kotoha was happy to see the existence of the spheres at that time. She also wondered where the spheres came from all day. Seki Iori also wants to know when the spheres will return. Spheres casually said that it was easy for him to appear by their side within a certain amount of time. Moreover, he is a manager of Forbidden Restriction. They all understand. The next day, Seki Iori was back in front of a dungeon. He even asked Hamada to help make a list for him. Seki Iori today plans to conquer 5 problematic dungeons. The first dungeon is a ranked dungeon called the Hall of 100 Years of Training. There are no bosses there, but there are various types of monsters from rank B to rank A that will come to attack. That type of dungeon would be a suitable dungeon for him in such a situation. As soon as Seki Iori was about to enter the dungeon, 2 guards immediately stopped him. They reminded him that the dungeon was a ranked dungeon which should not be entered alone. However, Seki Iori quickly showed the permit in his hand, and of course, the 2 men immediately invited him in. They apologized and hoped that Seki Iori could be careful because there were many strong monsters in the dungeon. Of course, Seki Iori immediately thanked him before entering the dungeon. Seki Iori stepped in, trying to think about the strategy to use. If it was true that there were many strong monsters in the dungeon, then he had to maintain his common sense. Meanwhile, outside, the 2 guards were curious about the figure of Seki Iori, whom they had never heard of before. They couldn't believe how Seki Iori could get permission to enter the dungeon alone even though he was not an S-rank adventurer. The 2 guards were still curious about Seki Iori's true figure. Seki Iori finally arrived in the dungeon. He could see several monsters in the form of immortal knights continuing to train against each other. Even if they were defeated, they could restore their bodies to their original form. The Hall of 100 Years of Training is a fitting name. Seki Iori immediately used the power of the Eye of Wisdom to see the Eternal Knights. The man could immediately see a magic circle on each knight's chest. This magic circle is what makes the knight immortal. Seki Iori immediately understands that he must destroy the magic circle to defeat the immortal knight once and for all. Seki Iori tried to attack, but it turned out that the knight's defense was quite strong. He decided to use the Sword of Tenma to penetrate their defenses, even though in the end he also had to suppress the effects of the explosion that might occur later. However, just as he was about to attack, Seki Iori could see the number of immortal knights increasing in number. Seki Iori could only be amazed at the good cooperation between the knights. It was clear that the dungeon was one of the most problematic dungeons he had encountered. Seki Iori is overwhelmed and isn't sure he can defeat all the immortal knights alone. Last night he used the Grimoire of Release and unlocked another contracted familiar monster which also expanded the forbidden restriction in the skill tree. Seki Iori can grow stronger now as he levels up later. Seki Iori also began to change his plans. He initially felt he had to conquer the dungeon by finding and destroying the dungeon core while avoiding the immortal knights. However, now he will not use that method. Seki Iori gave orders to Coral to target all the magic circles inside the knights' bodies. He wants to defeat all the existing knights. Coral sounded very excited, and so did Seki Iori, who was ready. Coral is a horned imperial beast that has the power of lightning. Even now Coral has not reached his maximum potential, but after going through several evolutions, both his strength and speed have even rivaled lightning itself. Coral began to attack the knights very well, but on the other hand, of course, Seki Iori doesn't want to lose. He also started attacking using the Sword of Tenma. Not long after, he stabbed one knight from behind his back. he managed to defeat one knight. Then together with Coral, he agreed to destroy all the knights quickly. In the end, the two of them succeeded in defeating all the Eternal Knights. With this achievement, Seki Iori managed to get 40 rank B magic stones. Of course, Seki Iori was satisfied to see it, even though he could only go up 2 levels, which was very little for him. Seki Iori knows that he must find a strong opponent for himself. Seki Iori finally continues his journey to find the core of the dungeon. As far as he could see, there were only 2 floors left. Seki Iori immediately went up to the 2nd floor and saw a knight there named Diant Death Knight Asger. Before starting the match, Seki Iori let Coral go. He didn't forget to thank him and said that he would handle everything alone from that point on. After Coral left, Seki Iori looked at the monsters that were starting to attack. Compared with his previous life, Seki Iori's fighting ability feels weakened. Therefore, he should try to fight with fast movements at that level. On the other hand, Satsuki Ren was sparring with Kirishima without even looking him in the eye. Of course, Kirishima felt offended because he felt Satsuki Ren was taking him for granted. Satsuki Ren certainly denies it. He didn't mean to do it, but if Kirishima wanted to fight, then he wouldn't hold back either. Returning to Seki Iori immediately restrained the knight's movements. He immediately realized that the knight was strong, even though he was not in rank as Seki Iori began to attack the knight. The attack was successful and the knight lost by being split into 2. Back to Satsuki Ren, who has stopped fighting with Kirishima. The man of course wanted to fight with Satsuki Ren, but currently he was facing many problems. For him, fighting with Satsuki Ren was just a joke. Of course, Satsuki Ren didn't mind as long as the man had limits when joking around with him. Kirishima then leaves after saying Satsuki Ren is a scary bastard. After the man left, Satsuki Ren began to think about Seki Iori, who seemed destined to become famous. Kirishima may also make a big public announcement regarding Seki Iori. Back to Seki Iori, who is still busy conquering the dungeon. There was only one more floor left for him to conquer. In the city, Kirishima Kuji, an S-rank adventurer who has infinite sword technique skills, is meeting Kandasaki at a restaurant. The man said he was quite surprised when he heard that it was Kandasaki. He also said that he had never heard of Seki Iori before. He wanted to know if the man was strong. Kandasaki without hesitation said that Seki Iori was stronger than Kirishima. The man laughed at that. Kirishima then wanted to know whether Kandasaki would fall in love with a knight who helped him in shining armor. Back in the dungeon, Seki Iori finally finished defeating all the monsters. He managed to get 100 B rank magic stones and 2 A rank magic stones. The amount was even much more than he had planned. It seemed he already had enough magic stones to make a golem. But first, he had to destroy the dungeon core. Meanwhile, Kandasaki chose not to say anything more to Kirishima. He chose to leave rather than discuss unimportant things with Kirishima. The man could only say yes. However, he then asked if that meant Kandasaki wouldn't mind if he went to kill Seki Iori. Kandasaki casually told Kirishima to do it, but he assured him he would kill Kirishima first before he killed Seki Iori. At the Adventurers Guild, Seki Iori had already left the dungeon. Of course, the guard who was in front of the gate previously was surprised because Seki Iori had completed the dungeon alone. The other men apologized because they had previously prejudiced Seki Iori. Of course, he didn't mind that. However, not long after, someone approached him and confirmed Seki Iori's identity. Seki Iori certainly wants to know who the man in front of him is. However, Kirishima later said that he was only joking. They are both adventurers, so they should get along with each other. Previously, Kirishima, who was still talking to Kandasaki, finally asked the girl to leave because they had finished talking. Kandasaki once again warned, if he found out that Kirishima was doing something suspicious, then he wouldn't hesitate to take action. Kirishima could immediately see how Kandasaki had never shown interest in anyone before. However, now he shows great attention to Seki Iori. Kirishima guessed that Seki Iori must be someone extraordinary. The dungeon gate guard who saw Kirishima, an S-rank adventurer, was certainly very surprised. However, because he was in a bad condition, Kirishima just kicked the man. Of course, Seki Iori immediately reminded him not to carry out that kind of violence, especially against a guild staff member like before. Back at the restaurant, Kirishima, who was bored because he had missed the interesting dungeon before, was now determined to annoy Seki Iori. Kirishima couldn't help but laugh. He also thought so because their strength was very important for the needs of their country. As long as the adventurers did their job, not even the law could bother them. Seki Iori wants to know what the man wants from him. Kirishima heard about an extraordinary newcomer, so he intended to meet him. Seki Iori certainly wants to know if that's really all Kirishima wants. Of course, Kirishima was happy because Seki Iori quickly understood. Seki Iori said that people like Kirishima are very predictable. He just wanted to prove himself as the strongest. Seki Iori repeated his experience when he was on the 3rd floor of the 100 Years of Training Hall. Seki Iori immediately knew that it was the last floor. He could immediately see a large number of knights and also one giant knight there. Seki Iori tried to face him and called Coral once again to help him. he just had to beat them all. Elsewhere, Satsuki Ren is having a photo session. After finishing his activities, he relaxed alone on the roof. Kirishima soon approached him and quipped that he seemed to be having difficulty becoming a famous figure. Satsuki Ren was quite surprised to see Kirishima there at that time, so she wanted to know what he wanted. Kirishima then says that it wasn't a big deal at all. He just wanted to know about Seki Iori. Satsuki Ren immediately understood what was going on there. He then asked if Seki Iori was now famous enough to make Kirishima interested in targeting him. Kirishima realized that Satsuki Ren looked happy even though they were talking about their friend. Kirishima suspected the man was a psycho. Of course, Satsuki Ren laughed. It's not that he's happy, it's just that he knows that Seki Iori is stronger than anyone else. Of course, Kirishima wanted to know what Satsuki Ren meant. Does that man think he is not a threat to Seki Iori? However, Satsuki Ren did not want to agree or deny these words. Of course, Kirishima was increasingly curious. However, Satsuki Ren asked Kirishima to be careful if the man wanted to chase Seki Iori, or else the man would hurt Kirishima's ego. Hearing all these words made Kirishima very angry and tried to attack Satsuki Ren. Of course, the man easily blocked Kirishima's attack. Of course, Kirishima felt humiliated. However, at that time Satsuki Ren said that he didn't mean that. It's just that if Kirishima wanted to fight, then he wouldn't hold back. Of course, Kirishima wanted it badly, but right now he couldn't cause much trouble. For him, it was just a joke. On the other hand, Satsuki Ren doesn't mind at all as long as the man knows his limits. Kirishima finally left the man after stating that Satsuki Ren was a scary weirdo. After Kirishima left, Satsuki Ren felt that everything was getting even more interesting now. Seki Iori seems destined to be famous. Kirishima could even make this big and even be heard by the wider public. Satsuki Ren couldn't help but laugh because he could feel how a new era would soon arrive. On the other hand, Seki Iori's work is finally finished. He managed to get a total of 100 B rank magic stones and 2 A rank magic stones. More than he expected, and that meant he had to start making golems. But first, he had to destroy the dungeon core. Once out of the dungeon, Seki Iori met 2 guards again. Of course, the guard who was in front of the gate previously was surprised because Seki Iori had completed the dungeon alone. The other men apologized because they had previously prejudiced Seki Iori. Of course, he didn't mind that. However, not long after, someone approached him and confirmed Seki Iori's identity. Seki Iori certainly wants to know who the man in front of him is. However, Kirishima later said that he was only joking. They are both adventurers, so they should get along with each other. The dungeon gate guard who saw Kirishima, an S-rank adventurer, was certainly very surprised. However, because he was in a bad condition, Kirishima just kicked the man. Of course, Seki Iori immediately reminded him not to carry out that kind of violence, especially against a guild staff member like before. Kirishima couldn't help but laugh. He also thought so because their strength was very important for the needs of their country. As long as the adventurers did their job, not even the law could bother them. Seki Iori wants to know what the man wants from him. Kirishima heard about an extraordinary newcomer, so he intended to meet him. Seki Iori certainly wants to know if that's really all Kirishima wants. Of course, Kirishima was happy because Seki Iori quickly understood. Seki Iori said that people like Kirishima are very predictable. He just wanted to prove himself as the strongest. Even if not, he would want to make an example out of him, or even come to cause trouble. Kirishima hearing Seki Iori talk a lot made him even more annoyed, and maybe he would be able to cheer him up later. Seki Iori didn't mind at all. However, in return, he wanted Kirishima not to approach him again if the man lost. Kirishima immediately agreed, but for him, Seki Iori misunderstood him there. He will never approach Seki Iori again even after he wins, because in the end, he will be the one who dies. Kirishima immediately attacks Seki Iori. The man was quite amazed by the extraordinary strength of the man who was an S-rank adventurer. Kirishima knew that the sudden attack was enough to surprise Seki Iori. He hoped that Seki Iori would not disappoint him because he had high hopes for that man. Of course, Seki Iori will not disappoint. After all, he didn't plan to die soon. Seki Iori immediately fought back, and Kirishima was quite impressed with the attack. The guild staff was of course confused about what was happening. The scene before his eyes should not be included in his scope of work. On the other hand, Kirishima saw Seki Iori's good skills, but such skills were completely useless if used against him. Kirishima attacks again and Seki Iori blocks the movement. Kirishima could see the man was confused. The guild staff who saw the fight could judge how Kirishima seemed to be leading the match so far. This was the reason why his infinite sword technique was so feared by many people. Kirishima asks Seki Iori to move because if he doesn't, he will die. However, Seki Iori is secretly studying the techniques used by Kirishima. He eventually finds out that Kirishima absorbed Tenma's mana and made it his own. That's why the differences between them are getting bigger. However, Seki Iori is confident that his ability to manipulate mana is the best in the world. He can play around with the mana that has been absorbed and then create a trap to give some damage to Kirishima. The guild staff now saw how Seki Iori seemed to be taking control. However, he seems to have strength comparable to Kirishima. Of course, it makes him even more curious about who Seki Iori is. Of course, Kirishima, who was starting to get hurt, wanted to know what Seki Iori had done. Seki Iori casually turned Kirishima's words back to him. He could only say that the skills Kirishima had were useless against him. Hearing those words made Kirishima even angrier. He reminds Seki Iori not to focus too much on himself. Kirishima immediately gathered new strength, and at least he was relieved because it turned out that Seki Iori could indeed provide equal resistance. However, now is the right time to end it all. The guild staff who saw the fight grew increasingly disbelieving. Kirishima's strength wasn't even something a human should be able to do. Seki Iori saw what Kirishima was doing. He immediately knew that the attack from the man could still absorb the mana he had. But this time he couldn't use the same trap as before to attack Kirishima. Seki Iori wanted to know if that meant he had no way to win. At that time, Kirishima said that Seki Iori would be cut into several pieces with his unlimited power and end up dead. At that time, Kandasaki arrived and quickly prevented Kirishima's actions. Kirishima didn't expect the woman to come, but she still arrived late. There is nothing that Kandasaki can change anymore. Kandasaki was of course very angry, but Seki Iori quickly said that he was fine and asked Kandasaki to step back and look. Kandasaki had no choice but to agree. Kirishima laughed even wider. Even if the two of them joined forces and worked together, he was sure they wouldn't be able to stop him. Seki Iori said he was tired of Kirishima's words. He chose to immediately point out the differences between himself and Kirishima. Of course, this made Kirishima even more enthusiastic about killing someone he hoped would die at his hands. Kirishima attacked blindly. However, as soon as his sword was about to cut Seki Iori, the man attacked him first and injured Kirishima. Of course, Kirishima couldn't believe how Seki Iori could do it. Seki Iori said that nothing in this world is unlimited. Simply put, he just took advantage of the slight difference between the two and attacked Kirishima. The guild staff who happened to see the entire fight were of course surprised to see that Seki Iori could defeat a famous S-rank adventurer, Kirishima. Kandasaki immediately approached him and asked whether the man was okay or injured. Seki Iori said that he was fine. Kandasaki, using a star shadow blessing, immediately helped the man to recover his body condition. Seki Iori certainly wanted to know if it was healing magic. Kandasaki immediately confirmed it. She uses this ability to heal Seki Iori's wounds. Seki Iori thanked while rubbing the top of Kandasaki's head and making her blush. Not long after, Seki Iori got a call on his cell phone which he had to answer immediately. Apparently, it was Kadoha who called to remind them about their plans for the day. Seki Iori forgets about it for a bit, but then Kadoha reminds him that they will celebrate Shimizu's discharge from the hospital. The party will be held at their house. To be honest, Seki Iori had indeed forgotten about it. In his heart, he apologized to Shimizu. On the other side, Kadoha was still waiting for an answer from Seki. Seki Iori immediately agreed. She will soon be home after shopping for all the party necessities. Kadoha asked her older brothers to come faster because they were all waiting. After that, Seki Iori immediately apologized and said goodbye to Kandasaki because he had to go home quickly. Kandasaki was curious because he heard something about a party. Seki Iori immediately confirmed it and Kandasaki stated that she wanted to attend the party. Seki Iori couldn't decide for himself, so he asked his other friends via group chat. After Seki Iori said what he meant to everyone, they warmly welcomed Kandasaki's arrival. Initially, Seki Iori was afraid of making everyone uncomfortable because of the arrival of a figure they didn't know. However, Seki Iori's colleagues didn't mind Saki's sister's presence at all. After sending the message, Seki Iori told Kandasaki to enjoy the party together. The two agreed to go together. Meanwhile, on the other hand, the guild staff who saw the two of them leave were a little confused when they saw Kirishima who was still lying down. The two finally agreed to take the man to the hospital. At Seki Iori's house, the man finally arrived. Kadoha and Spheres greeted him cheerfully. Seeing Seki Iori who arrived late, Spheres was sure that the man had forgotten about the party. However, Seki Iori dodged it. Kandasaki, who followed in, immediately apologized because my presence might be disturbing. Kadoha didn't think that Kandasaki, who came to their house a few days ago, would actually come. Kandasaki immediately apologized again for causing them problems recently. Kadoha certainly didn't mind it. She is also grateful that Kandasaki has been looking after Seki lately. Seeing Kadoha's friendly attitude, Kandasaki praised her. Of course, as an older brother, Seki Iori recognizes them. Seeing Seki Iori's response, Kandasaki thought the man was a strange person or an older brother who really loved his younger sister. Of course, Seki Iori firmly avoided it. At that time, Seki Iori took Kandasaki to meet his other colleagues. Kandasaki kindly introduced herself. Everyone certainly didn't expect to meet Saki's sister there. They felt so happy and proud to be able to meet Kandasaki. They even scrambled to shake hands with the S-rank adventurer. Shimizu also greeted him and Kandasaki recognized as a former member of the Red Dragons. Shimizu was certainly quite surprised that Kandasaki actually knew me. The girl then said that she really knew a lot about high-ranking adventurers. Shimizu praised Kandasaki's extraordinary memory because the number of adventurers was also very large. However, Kandasaki casually said that it wasn't difficult at all to remember such information since the number of adventurers didn't even exceed 10,000 people. Seki Iori's colleagues were certainly even more surprised because Kandasaki indeed had extraordinary memory abilities. Not long after, they wanted to ask questions about what relationship actually existed between Kandasaki and Seki Iori. Saki's sister hesitantly answered that they were more than friends but also not a couple. Seki Iori, who heard this answer, of course, asked Kandasaki not to give an answer that could make people misunderstand. That's right, because that answer surprised everyone. So Seki Iori quickly had to correct that they were just friends. Seki Iori then asked about the invisible Nagisawa. However, apparently, the girl couldn't come because she had urgent business. However, they will still have fun anyway. Seki Iori, who had bought a lot of delicious food, also asked everyone to eat immediately. They all congratulate Shimizu on being able to fully recover and be released from the hospital. Shimizu was certainly grateful. Kadoha will also start making beef stew for Seki Iori with spheres helping her. Everyone at that time looked so happy while talking. Kandasaki, who was observing everyone, could feel the cheerful and pleasant atmosphere. At that time, she thanked Seki Iori for inviting me to come. Seki Iori just smiles and says that they've only just started. She asked Kandasaki to have fun that night too. In a restaurant, Kyuju Akira, an S-rank adventurer with the mana crystallization skill, is enjoying his drink. He saw someone coming and thanked because that person had accepted the invitation. He immediately checked whether their plan with Kirishima was going well. At Seki Iori's house, Kadoha finally served their meal, namely beef stew. They all ate it with gusto. They also praised the food as tasting very good. Seki Iori's colleagues didn't expect that the girl was actually so good at cooking. Kadoha says that she just tried her best to cook it. Kandasaki also liked it and Seki Iori was relieved to hear that. Kandasaki observed everyone. She hasn't eaten with a lot of people in a long time. Kandasaki glanced at Seki Iori. The girl felt everything was fun. Finally, it got late and they started saying goodbye one by one. Kadoha bid everyone farewell, thanking them for coming and asking everyone to be careful on their way home. On the way home, everyone was happy because of the fun party. Shimizu suddenly became curious. She wants to know how Kandasaki finally got to know Seki Iori. Likewise with other colleagues who are also curious. Kandasaki said that she first saw Seki Iori in a fight against a monster. She was also the first to contact the man. They want to know whether Kandasaki thinks Seki Iori is an extraordinary man. Kandasaki immediately confirmed it. Seki Iori is even stronger than the average S-rank adventurer. They are again curious about who is stronger, Seki Iori and Kandasaki. Without hesitation, Kandasaki said that Seki Iori was the stronger of them. In fact, that man once saved from a dangerous situation. They were all shocked, but also curious about what kind of situation was actually threatening Kandasaki at that time. Kandasaki said that at that time a very strong monster suddenly appeared. However, Seki Iori arrived and managed to defeat the monster. Shimizu was quite impressed by Seki Iori's actions. However, not Seki Iori's two female colleagues were secretly annoyed because it turned out their story was almost the same as what happened to Kandasaki. They wanted to know whether Seki Iori was deliberately only saving the girls. At that time, at Seki Iori's house, he kept sneezing until Kadoha had to make sure that the man was healthy. Seki Iori said that he was fine, but in his heart, for some reason, he had a feeling of a misunderstanding about me. Seki Iori returns to his uninhabited home to continue making golems. He had already collected enough magic stones to make a golem. The spheres had also been there to help him. Seki Iori is of course happy to get this help. Spheres began to ask about the differences between the two golems. Seki Iori immediately explained that the difference between the two lies in fighting style. The blue golems are fast-type golems, while the colored golems are strong-type golems. Both of them are at the same level as S-rank monsters. Spheres are certainly curious about how Seki Iori can make something extraordinary using magic stones. Seki Iori said that it was his specialty when he was still an archmage. Seki Iori began to explain the process of making the golem in detail. However, of course, the spheres didn't understand it at all. He will only come to the conclusion that Seki Iori is a hard worker. Now that he had succeeded in doing so, spheres wanted to know what the man would do with the two golems. Seki Iori has said it before. So far he had only been able to conquer easy dungeons. So, to make him stronger, he will fight these two golems which are equivalent to S-rank monsters as practice. Spheres understood and now she wanted to know which golem Seki Iori would fight first. Seki Iori confidently said that he would fight both of them. Of course, the spheres who heard it were confused and worried. Seki Iori should have fought one at a time instead of all at once. Seki Iori felt he needed a challenge so that the training sessions wouldn't be too boring for him. After all, from the start, it was the spheres that said that I would have to face such difficulties. Spheres was still upset because of course that wasn't the kind of difficulty I was referring to. Spheres then say that Seki Iori must be at least above level 1000 to safely fight an S-rank monster. Currently, Seki Iori is planning to fight two monsters at once. If Seki Iori fails, then that means he will end up dead. However, no matter what you say, Seki Iori won't listen. The man just laughed because Spheres clearly knew him well. After all, fighting two monsters at once meant saving more time and energy. Of course, the Spheres disagreed because fighting two golems clearly required more time and energy. Seki Iori still insisted that the fight against the two golems would be faster. Rather than continue arguing, he decided to directly show it to the Spheres. At school, Kadoha, who was resting, was called by a friend. Her friend asked Kadoha to see a news story about an adventurer who fought with S-rank adventurer Kirishima and won. Of course, Kadoha was interested in hearing more news. The friend said that someone recorded the entire incident even though he could barely see anything in the video. However, just imagining two top adventurers fighting was incredible. Kadoha tries to see the video and is very surprised to find out that it is Seki Iori. Kadoha finally could only say that the fight looked amazing and they couldn't even see what the two were doing. Kadoha's friend agreed. Plus, I'm sure that after this, the man in the video will definitely become a rising star among adventurers. In a dungeon called the Cave of the Big Demon, several adventurers are fighting ogres. They realized that the ogre boss was weak to fire, so they planned to attack using fire. Before they had time to complete their tactic, a man had already launched himself forward towards the monster. Other adventurers naturally tried to dissuade him and asked him not to rush. However, the man ignored him. After all, the ogre was just a small insect to him. The man easily killed the ogres, even making all the adventurers stunned to see his fighting ability. The man defeated the ogre in just a blink of an eye. They started praising the man, who turned out to be Murata. Murata was underestimated because he fought with his bare hands instead of having a sword, but it turns out he was able to prove himself. Murata then kicked an adventurer unceremoniously and immediately caused serious injuries. Of course, the other adventurers were surprised by his actions. Murata revealed that from the start that was his goal. He killed the other adventurers there and left one person injured. From the start, he only wanted a stronger body. He doesn't care about what happens to humans. The adventurer didn't understand what Murata meant. Murata actually thanked the adventurer for her beautiful body and then killed her. On an uninhabited island, Seki Iori starts his fight against two golems. Spheres can only cheer from a distance. The golem started attacking and Seki Iori was quite relieved because the attack was even stronger than I expected. The other golems also didn't want to be outdone and started attacking with punches. Spheres believed that being hit by such a blow could cause death. Seki Iori said that it might happen if he was hit by the monster. However, now he understood how the golem moved. So, now he only needed to estimate the direction of movement and attacks of the two golems. Spheres looked worriedly at Seki Iori, who could only continue to defend against the golem's attacks. He didn't even know how Seki Iori managed to escape that attack. At that moment, Seki Iori saw an opportunity. It uses the circulation boost theme, immediately to counterattack. He managed to make two golems attack each other. Spheres felt excited too. She knows what Seki Iori's plan is. Seki was targeting the point where his attack had weakened. Seki Iori finally managed to defeat the blue golem with his meteor breaker skill. As a reward, Seki Iori managed to level up. Of course, he was relieved and so were the praising Spheres. But then, the red golem took the blue golem's magic stone lying on the grass and put it into its own body. The union caused a huge reaction and Seki Iori had no idea it would happen. The remaining golems turned purple. Of course, this change scared the Spheres. She asked Seki Iori to immediately kill the golem. However, Seki Iori couldn't do it because the golem had already evolved and he couldn't prevent it anymore. The Spheres immediately understood that this meant Seki Iori had no choice but to fight and defeat the golem. The man immediately confirmed. The remaining golem had completely absorbed the power in the previous golem's magic stone. This will make the evolved golem have extraordinary strength and speed. In fact, he wouldn't be surprised if the golem was even above S-rank monsters in general. Seki Iori is really increasingly challenged and is preparing to fight the golem a second time. Seki Iori immediately fought back, as did the golem. Seki Iori could feel that the golem was becoming stronger. Seki Iori tried to think of a way out and he decided to use the trump card he had. At school, a girl was running until she was exhausted. She, who was still grumbling, was quite surprised when someone started running past me. The girl is Kadoha, who is seen running quickly. Kadoha's friend who was left behind was very surprised because it was already the third time Kadoha to pass me. Meanwhile, she hasn't even finished one lap. Kadoha ran very fast. Kadoha could only laugh and reason that she had been very excited lately. Kadoha's friends were once again confused because Kadoha had previously been stuck in the hospital for a long time. When Kadoha was resting, her teacher came and offered her to join the athletic club. She said that Kadoha's previous 1,000-meter run was even good enough to compete in national competitions. Kadoha kindly refused and said she had to finish her homework. The teacher is convinced again because of Kadoha's extraordinary abilities. Kadoha even feels she can win if he takes part in a national competition at the school level. Kadoha then said how her older brother fought very hard for his recovery while he was being treated in the hospital. At least she wants to return the favor by taking care of their house. The teacher was of course amazed to see Kadoha, who was a good girl. The teacher finally apologized for being too pushy without knowing Kadoha's real reason. The teacher is sure that Kadoha's older brother will definitely be happy with all the help given by the girl. Kadoha thanked the kind words, but suddenly, a strange gate appeared in the middle of the field and attracted the attention of the teachers and students there. Master immediately realized that it was a dungeon gate. Everyone immediately ran to save themselves. The teacher asked all students to enter the school. Suddenly, monsters even came out of the gate. The teacher was even more surprised to see this. In the panic, a girl ended up tripping and falling. The monster started to look and the girl became afraid. Kadoha, who saw her friend, certainly wanted to help. The teacher, who saw Kadoha, warned the girl to come back. However, Kadoha didn't listen and instead jumped high to protect her friend. Kadoha asked her friend to leave immediately because she would be the one holding back the monster's movements. Kadoha's friend immediately ran while saying sorry and thank you. Kadoha looked at the monster that was much bigger than her standing in front of her. I honestly felt a little scared, but still managed it. The disease that previously put me in the hospital was incompatible skill syndrome. It was an illness where the body couldn't withstand the skills growing from within me. However, now she has fully recovered. That means she has gained a strong skill. Kadoha tried to concentrate. She finally took out a sword and used demon god art skills to kill the monster. The teacher and her friends were surprised to see everything Kadoha did. Of course, they looked in awe and disbelief. To his friends, Kadoha even looks very cool. Kadoha, who managed to defeat the monster, smiled cheerfully. She knows very well that I can defeat that monster. Seki Iori was watching the golem in front of him. The evolved golem was now much stronger than himself. He had to be brave enough to take risks if he wanted to defeat the golem. He will not protect his entire body with Tenma, but will only focus on one part. However, if he were hit, he could die. Seki Iori immediately tried to fight back with that focus power. However, at least that way, he could overcome Golem's defenses and even defeat him. The all-seeing spheres fluttered as well. She didn't expect Seki Iori to come up with another crazy idea. However, of course, golems don't give up easily. He attacked Seki Iori again. The man also didn't give up easily. The golem's attacks seemed very simple to him and he could handle them easily. The fight was still going on fiercely until Seki Iori showed a smile. In his previous life, Seki Iori lived alone. He only focused on improving his magical abilities and becoming a solitary archmage. So at this time, Seki Iori could even act very calmly in such a dangerous situation. He even looks like Seki Iori from his previous life. Seki Iori, who spheres saw, really enjoyed all the fighting. Not long after, the golem began looking for a way to defeat Seki Iori. The man was suspicious of the golem's movements, which seemed to want to destroy the entire island just to defeat him. Of course, the spheres couldn't let the golem do it. Seki Iori must immediately stop the golem's actions. Of course, Seki Iori would stop the golem even though spheres didn't say anything. Utilizing the power of lightning, Seki Iori attacks the golem again, until a large explosion occurred and the golem was defeated. Spheres were certainly very relieved to see him. She praised Seki Iori, who also protected her and Nemia there. Seki Iori was also happy to see him. He then paid attention to his stats. He managed to get an increase of 150 levels just from his battle with the golem. Spheres of course immediately agreed. Because of this, Seki Iori intends to get a new spell. He immediately tried to look through the list of possibilities. The spheres certainly support all of Seki Iori's wishes, but she wants to know how Seki Iori will raise his level now. Considering that 2 golems have been defeated, Seki Iori wasn't sure about that either. It will be difficult to collect the magic stones that are used to make golems. However, for now, he is more focused on choosing spells. Seki Iori finally chose an interesting spell. This spell will also help him a lot in increasing his level later. Spheres was of course curious about the spell intended by Seki Iori and asked the man to immediately tell him. Seki Iori said that the spell was spirit form. He could use the spell together with the spirit world where he could find the souls of powerful monsters. Spheres wasn't sure because as far as I knew the spirit world didn't even exist in that dimension. Seki Iori said that the spirit world exists on Earth. Many people have seen ghosts or souls in that world. The spheres naturally did not believe in the existence of such creatures. Seki Iori says that they just have to prove it. While they were still talking, Seki Iori's cell phone rang. Kadoha contacts him and immediately says that something happened. She asked Seki to come to school as soon as possible. Seki Iori certainly wants to know what happened. On the other hand, Kadoha said that it was quite difficult to explain over the phone. Seki Iori, who was worried, immediately rushed away and asked the girl to wait for him. Finally, Seki Iori arrived at Kadoha school. The young man walked around the school area thinking that his little sister sounded panicked when he called. So Seki was afraid that Kadoha's illness would recur. But he didn't see anything suspicious and wondered what happened to his little sister. Finally, Seki went to the reception room. In the room, it turned out that there was Mr. Hamada. The glasses guy said Seki and I had been seeing each other a lot lately. Mr. Hamada also expressed his gratitude because Seki took the time to come as Kadoha's older brother. Seki is very grateful that Mr. Hamada has looked after Kadoha. Then Seki sat down and asked what happened. Mr. Hamada explained that dungeon gate appeared in the field. Monsters started to appear from the gate, but strangely Kadoha defeated the monster alone. According to some people who saw the fight in person, Kotoha had defeated the lizardmen, C-rank monsters, in just a short time. Siki refused Kotoha and asked if it was true that Kotoha had done it. Kotoha slowly nodded her head in response. Siki felt strange because he remembered his little sister had an illness. But then this young man remembered what the doctor said, who said Kotoha was sick because her body couldn't adapt to her skills properly. This is called incompatible skills syndrome. Siki suspects that Kotoha has been able to adapt to her skills after recovering from illness. Kotoha confirmed that. She also apologized to Siki for not telling you this sooner. Siki stroked Kotoha's hair and said that it wasn't a problem. The important thing is that Kotoha can use his power to protect other students. Siki thought that was something worthy of praise. Hearing this, Kotoha immediately hugged Siki and thanked him because now the girl felt relieved. Siki then said that he didn't see the gate anywhere, so has Kotoha cleared the dungeon. Mr. Hamada answered that the world had a C rank and that Mr. Hamada had cleaned it up. Siki was surprised to hear Mr. Hamada's answer. However, the man with glasses explained that even though he looks like now, he was previously an A rank player, so he could clear a dungeon alone, especially since it was only a C rank dungeon. Mr. Hamada asked them to leave that for now and get straight to the topic they wanted to discuss with Siki. Mr. Hamada said Kotoha was stronger than adventurers in general, so he wants Kotoha to take the ranking exam and make him an adventurer. Siki said Mr. Hamada needed permission to do that to Kotoha. Seeing Siki object a little, Kotoha immediately said that she agreed to take the test because she wanted to be an adventurer and help everyone. All this time, Kotoha felt left out of everything. Finally, Siki could only hope for a heavy breath while rubbing his face in frustration. Siki couldn't possibly prevent Kotoha's request, so he finally permitted Mr. Hamada, but on the condition that Siki will be Kotoha's opponent during the exam. Siki asked Mr. Hamada if he was allowed to do that, right? Mr. Hamada allowed it because he knew how strong Siki was. Hearing their decision shocked Kotoha. She didn't expect to have to fight with her older brother. I think it's very scary. According to Kotoha, it would be much worse than having to fight an adventurer like Ryuzaki who had a hideous face. After it was decided, a few days later they did the exam in a special room. Kotoha excitedly asked whether his older brother would hold back. Siki confirmed this but said that if Kotoha wants to work as an adventurer then he must have enough strength, so Siki will counterattack a little. Hearing his older brother's last words made Kotoha worried because Siki said it very seriously. Meanwhile, Mr. Hamada watched them from the surveillance room. This bespectacled man knows a skill from Kotoha called Demon God. He had never heard of a skill like that before. Many people have rare skills. Also happens to be very powerful. Apart from that, this girl is Siki Iori's sister who is famous for being strong. Mr. Hamada can't help it, but he has high hopes for Kotoha. Not long after, the fight between the two brothers began. Kotoha immediately used Demon God arts and created a sword to attack Siki. Siki was surprised, but he managed to dodge in time. This young man did not expect Kotoha's abilities to be better than his expectations. So Siki uses the storm skill to counterattack Kotoha. Kotoha managed to dodge, but Siki didn't expect his younger brother to be hit by the attack. Kotoha is annoyed because her brother broke the promise to play a little more smoothly. Mr. Hamada, who saw the match between the two brothers, was amazed. Didn't expect Kotoha to be stronger than I thought and he thought it was very scary. Siki stretches and says that it was his fault because he didn't expect Kotoha to be stronger than he thought. So he became increasingly curious about how strong Kotoha was. At this point, Kotoha, instead of being afraid, was annoyed with her older brother. Siki Iori said with a serious face that he was going to test the extent of his sister's strength. Kotoha didn't care what Siki said and immediately attacked her older brother. Even so, Siki thought he couldn't let the fight end like this. But Kotoha says she will come to you again with full force for the final. Hearing this, Siki immediately asked Kotoha to attack with all the strength she had. Without any hesitation, Kotoha immediately attacked Siki with the Heaven/skill. A sizable energy attack came at Siki, but the young man casually said that Kotoha's attack was amazing. So Siki Iori responded to the younger sister's attack with the theme of boosting circulation. Siki has to use his full strength to be able to withstand Kotoha's attack while ensuring his little sister is safe. After the flash of light from the two clashing energies disappeared, Kotoha immediately commented that Siki was amazing. But Siki also wanted to comment on the same thing, seeing Kotoha's ability, which was very strong even though he had just developed his skills. Kotoha was very relieved to hear such praise from Siki. Siki approached Kotoha and said that this exam was over, so Kotoha could rest now. At this moment, Mr. Hamada entered the testing room and immediately clapped. Mr. Hamada said that the two brothers were extraordinary, and they have presented a very amazing sight to see. Mr. Hamada had expected Siki's little sister to be that strong. Siki himself didn't expect Kotoha to be that strong. As for Kotoha's ranking, they would only find out after returning to the guild. But since Kotoha had no accomplishments as an adventurer before this, Lord Hamada was worried that they would have difficulty deciding. Siki understood that, so he asked if Kotoha would mind it. Kotoha answered she didn't mind at all. The girl just felt tired, and just thinking about going back home and sleeping. Hearing this, Siki immediately said to Mr. Hamada that he must immediately deliver this younger sister back home. Because Kadoha was coming back, Mr. Hamada immediately bowed to her and said thank you because the girl was willing to take the test today. After the two siblings left, Mr. Hamada looked at them and said that he didn't expect that girl to have skills and stats that weren't very high, but her strength was very scary. This bespectacled man had very high hopes for the two brothers. After arriving home, Kadoha immediately sat on the sofa and complained because she felt very tired. Siki said that Kadoha would often be tired like that when fighting monsters. Siki said he would take care of the rest of the housework, so Kadoha could rest as much as she needed. Hearing this, Kadoha smiled happily and thanked his older brother with a cheerful smile. Sphere suddenly appears and says finally the two of them are back. Sphere asks what happened. Siki answered that Kadoha had awakened her skills. Sphere said casually that she had felt that centuries ago. Siki was shocked and asked why Sphere didn't tell him that before. Sphere answered, she likes seeing Siki look stupid because he doesn't know anything. Hearing this, Siki increasingly thought that this creature had a very bad personality. Sphere says that now Kadoha can also help Siki. Sphere also said that Siki Iori has a skill assessment device, so they should try that to see Kadoha's skills. Siki and Kadoha thought maybe they could check it with that tool. So Kadoha immediately put her hand on the tool and immediately they knew that Kadoha's skill was Demon God. She is ranked S rank even though she is only ranked first. Kadoha cheered happily, realizing she was in S rank. Siki also said that her little sister was indeed very strong even though she had only awakened a few moments ago. It turns out that she is indeed an S rank. Sphere is sure that soon Kadoha will become an S rank adventurer. Kadoha himself is very confident that she will soon become famous. Siki Iori was happy to see his little sister so excited. The young man guessed that his little sister would never stop being an adventurer. Siki thought it wasn't just his little sister's talent that was so strong. Kadoha's fighting skills are also something very surprising. According to him, Kadoha lacks nothing in the talent department, so he was sure that Kadoha would become a very great adventurer if she trained seriously. Meanwhile, in a corner of the city, the monster managed to control an rank adventurer. He planned to restore his original strength slowly. Now he had to train the skills that body possessed, before finally moving on to an S-rank adventurer. The creature thought he could become stronger than he was before, only then would he try to rule the world again. The creature turned into the alley when it heard something. He saw a dog being bullied by 3 adult men. The creature was sick of seeing humans still like to oppress the weak, but in his opinion, this was the perfect opportunity to test that body. The creature smiled horribly while thinking it would teach them that they were the weak ones here. The 3 young delinquents were surprised to see a strange man approaching them. One of the delinquents asked what he wanted in a foreign man. The man who had been controlled by the monster answered that he wanted to have a little fun, just like the 3 delinquents. The 3 of them immediately laughed at the young man's words, but without permission, the young man immediately beat one of the delinquents until his head shattered when it hit the wall. Seeing one of his comrades die with just one attack, the other 2 thugs tried to escape, but the monster youth swung his finger slightly, causing the other 2 men to fly and fall right in front of him. The monster man said he didn't want to risk anything that might draw attention to him, so he had to erase them both without leaving any traces. The 2 young men panicked and immediately apologized. They promised not to do bad things like that again in the future. With a terrible face, the monster youth said that he did not want to punish them. The monster boy said he was just doing this for fun, so the 2 delinquents in front of him also didn't do anything wrong. After that, there was a very loud scream, and the bodies of the 2 delinquents were destroyed and nothing remained. The monster youth looked at his hand, which was still emitting residual energy. He thought that the skills the young man had mastered were very interesting. The dog that the young man had rescued finally approached his feet. The dog seemed to be thanking the young monster for helping him. After that, the young monster healed the puppy and told him to go as he pleased. But the puppy instead followed the monster man. The man suspected that the puppy had sworn allegiance to him as the future ruler of the world. So finally the mysterious man let the puppy follow him. That morning at her house, Kadoha was surprised to hear that she still had to go to school. But Siki explained that the girl still had to go to school because she was still a student. Kadoha can go to the dungeon on weekends. Besides, the association hasn't given the right rank to Kadoha, so the girl still doesn't have permission to enter the dungeon. Kadoha confirmed that with a sullen face chewing bread. Suddenly Siki reminds Kadoha that she is already late and she should hurry. So Kadoha quickly ran out of the house to go to school. As Kadoha leaves, Sphere says that now Siki Iori seems to be acting like a strict guardian. Siki Iori doesn't deny that because according to him, Kadoha is still young and she still has more important things than hunting in the dungeon. According to Siki Iori, Kadoha doesn't need to fight because Siki Iori is strong enough to protect her. After Siki Iori finished breakfast, he also returned to training. This time, Siki Iori practiced releasing the spirit from his body. Siki thought that the technique was very successful without any problems. Sphere says that now Siki Iori is semi-transparent. Siki confirmed this because now he is a spirit. But Siki wonders why the sphere can still see him. With great pride, Sphere answered, because he is a very special figure for Siki Iori. Sphere then asks how they get to the spirit world. because he didn't see any monster souls around this area. Siki explained that the spirit world is between the underworld and the real world. So if they want to go there, they just have to go there. Sphere asks if that means they have to fly into the sky to get to the spirit realm. Siki confirmed that that was why he summoned the dragon Soar. Then with one command, Siki asked the dragon for help to send him flying towards the sky. They continued to fly towards the firmament at a very high speed. Above the sky, Siki felt that there was a lot of mana in that place. Then, while flying, he suddenly saw a circle that looked like a gate. Siki suspected it was the entrance to the spirit world. Siki entered the spirit realm and saw that there were many monster souls in that place. Siki thought that place was a dungeon. Sphere replied that was not correct, because there is no dungeon core in that place. Siki was surprised to hear that Sphere knew about the dungeon core because he often didn't know many things. Sphere was annoyed because it seemed like he was being thought of as stupid or something. To improve Sphere's feelings, Siki asks him to help Siki in the future. Sphere was immediately excited and said of course he would do that. Sphere found the place very interesting, because souls were floating above those tombstones and they were monster souls. Sphere believes that if Siki touches the tombstone then he should be able to see the monster. And the Sphere believes the size of a monster's soul corresponds to how strong the monster is. Siki Iori understands the meaning of what Sphere said, so he didn't have to fight a horde of monsters at once. He just needed to fight them one by one. Sphere confirmed Siki's words, so that place is the best if Siki wants to find a strong opponent. Siki immediately lured one of the monsters by showing his energy to the energy at the end of the tombstone. Quickly the spirit of the Grim Reaper monster came out of the spirit energy. Siki smiled seeing the creature. According to him, it was the right opponent to start training with. Siki used to fight many of these creatures in the past. The monster immediately launched an attack on Siki, but Siki quickly repelled the Grim Reaper's attack with his sword. According to Siki, the creature would have no chance of defeating him. Sphere was surprised to see such a strong monster defeated with just one attack. Sphere realized that Siki Iori had developed into a very strong figure. Sphere thought the day when Siki Iori would surpass his past self might come sooner than he thought. Siki realized that the Grim Reaper-sized monster corresponded to an A-rank monster. Siki wants to look for bigger monsters. Sphere immediately encouraged Siki Iori to quickly find S-rank monsters and level up. That night, at his house, Kanda Siki, who had just finished bathing, received a message from the association that S-rank hunters had to meet immediately. Kanda Siki suspected that the emergency meeting was held because an S-rank dungeon must have appeared. Quickly, several S-rank hunters gathered in one of the rooms in the association. One of the hunters who came that night was Sakureja Magento and Kuro's Kyoyuka. Mr. Hamada, from the start of planning the meeting, realized that only 5 of the 9 S-rank hunters would come. Even so, Mr. Hamada still expressed his thanks to all of them who were willing to come that night. Mr. Sakurajima said it didn't matter because he happened to have finished his daily practice. But Mr. Sakurajima complained because many did not come and ignored this important meeting. Satsuki Ren asked Mr. Sakurajima not to have high hopes for an S-rank hunter. While they were arguing, Kuro's Kyoyuka asked the meeting to start immediately because he wanted to go home immediately. So Mr. Hamada immediately opened the meeting. He thanked Mr. Kyuju for successfully identifying the appearance of an S-rank dungeon. Master Kyujo said that the place had more mana than any dungeon he had ever seen before. In fact, according to him, the dungeon boss they defeated a year ago, namely Moonlight Leopard Eclipse, was nothing compared to the boss from the dungeon this time. Satsuki Ren was very surprised when he heard this because he knew that the Moonlight Leopard Eclipse was a monster that was defeated by Siki Iori and Kanda Siki some time ago. If the monster this time was stronger than the Moonlight Leopard, then Satsuki could barely believe it. Mr. Hamada said that the monster could cause heavy casualties if it escaped and entered the city. For this reason, Mr. Hamada asked all S-rank hunters to work together to defeat the monster. The S-rank hunters were willing to cooperate. But before that, they want to know where the S-rank dungeon appears. Mr. Hamada answered on Mount Fuji. Meanwhile, in the spirit world, Siki finally found the greatest soul in that place. Siki hopes to find a good opponent. When the spirit changed form, Siki did not expect that the creature would turn out to be a Moonlight Leopard Eclipse with perfect form. Siki saw the creature as a strong figure. Siki was relieved to have used up his skill points before coming to that place. They both showed each other their respective strengths before finally starting a fierce fight. Sphere looked very scared because the creature looked very strong. But Siki instead asked, "Why didn't the Sphere give me a recommended level or rating?" Sphere asked Siki to stop being silly. After all, Siki Iori's strength couldn't be measured by level or rank. Sphere exclaimed even more panicked when he realized this was not the time for useless chatter. Suddenly, the leopard monster made a move. The monster disappeared into the darkness. Siki was confused about finding the creature's whereabouts. From within the darkness of Siki's shadow, a leopard monster suddenly jumped out and immediately used the Moonlight Claw skill to attack Siki. Luckily, the black-haired youth managed to repel the leopard monster's attack. Siki didn't expect the monster to try to end his life with just one attack. Siki jumped far enough to avoid another attack from the leopard monster, then give a heavy blow until the monster moves away. Siki realizes the creature can move freely through shadows, so he had to be able to predict the creature's movements. Unexpectedly, the moonlight leopard appeared again from behind Siki through his shadow. Siki quickly turned around and immediately attacked the monster. Realizing that his condition was getting worse, the monster immediately created a fairly large black hole with its mouth. The black hole created a storm big enough to make the sphere panic. Sphere is worried that they will be sucked into the black hole, but Siki was still relaxed and trying to read the situation. Siki realizes the creature may be trying to turn the environment in its favor against Siki. At this moment, Siki realized he had to be more serious, so this young man activated Tenma's extreme skill. This is a skill that is a combination of boost circulation and focus power. This skill will make Siki many times stronger. Siki suspected the creature would move faster, but apparently, Moonlight Leopard created several shadow troops. Siki was quite amazed that the creature could create such an army. Then suddenly, many shadow troops attacked Siki simultaneously, but Siki was not afraid. He used the Shantraz skill, which made his sword full of spiritual energy so that it was able to instantly wipe out all the shadow troops in front of him. Meanwhile, at the association building, Satsuki called Kandasaki, who was already walking home. Satsuki honestly asked what Kandasaki thought about the S-rank dungeon that would appear. Is Kandasaki confident enough that they will win? Kandasaki was silent for a moment before finally answering, "It doesn't matter whether you are confident or not. The important thing is, he must do his duty to save humanity." Satsuki Ren suddenly said that the Moonlight Leopard eclipse was so strong that the three of them, as S-rank adventurers, had to risk everything. But according to him, it would be different for Siki Iori. Satsuki asked whether Kandasaki agreed with my thoughts. Without hesitation, Kandasaki said that she agreed and was sure that Siki could do it. Satsuki suspected that Kandasaki was confident that even his trump card would not affect Siki Iori's performance. This time, Kandasaki only answered by nodding her head. Hearing that, Satsuki smiled with satisfaction, because I also believe that Siki Iori is able to help them without any obstacles. It seemed like they would have to ask Siki Iori to participate in that dungeon. Currently, Siki Iori is still trying to defeat the Moonlight Leopard in the spirit realm. Siki saw that the monster had quite a large amount of mana in its claws. Siki didn't want to give up fighting the monster. Once again, the monster attacked Siki Iori with the Moonlight Star Slash skill, which looked scary. Seeing the dazzling attack, Siki just smiled. This young man raised his sword and used the Shan Brave skill. With two huge energy collisions in the air, a dazzling light was created. It was as if the sun had just risen above them. Finally, the system appeared to notify that Siki Iori had successfully leveled up. Because of this, some of Siki's stats also automatically increase. This young man commented that his opponent this time was quite tough. However, according to him, Siki's current level is still not high enough. Not long after, Siki was actually able to level up more than he expected. Sphere said Siki had already fought an S-rank monster on one, so it was only natural that he leveled up quite significantly. Siki said, "The monsters in that place are quite strong and no one can compete with them." This was the best place Siki could ask for. Sphere says that there is no way anyone out there can compete with Siki. However, the young man actually said that maybe one day suddenly there would be. Sphere was annoyed and said it was something stupid because Siki's development was too fast and didn't make sense. According to Sphere, not even S-rank adventurers would want to deal with Siki. Siki humbly said that he didn't know about that. But Siki didn't deny that he was indeed much stronger than he was a moment ago. However, the Sphere still says that the young man's abilities are still far from those of his previous life. Meanwhile, at his residence, which looks simple, Mr. Sakurajima is busy practicing his skills. This adult man practices his kicks with the Cherry Blossom kick skill. He also used his inner strength several times combined with his martial arts skills. Mr. Sakurajima's way of fighting looks quite extreme, but according to him it's still not much and he looks quite chaotic today. Not long after, Satsuki came and wanted to talk to Mr. Sakurajima. Without speaking nonsense, Satsuki said that there was an A-rank adventurer who wanted to be invited to clear the dungeon when an S-rank dungeon appeared. Mr. Sakurajima was very surprised to hear Satsuki's words. According to him, an A-rank adventurer would immediately die there. Satsuki knew Mr. Sakurajima would think like that, but the young man said that the A-rank adventurer was much stronger than Satsuki. Mr. Sakurajima was clearly shocked to hear Satsuki's words. However, Satsuki quickly explained that this person could be promoted to S-rank whenever he wanted. He only chose to stay at Ranka because of personal desires. Mr. Sakurajima said it was very hard to believe, but he was still curious. What was the adventurer's name? Satsuki answered that his name was Siki. Satsuki thought that Mr. Sakurajima would understand after he personally checked Siki Iori's abilities from the Adventurers Guild. Meanwhile, Siki Iori has returned home and is warmly welcomed by Kadoha. The girl couldn't wait to tell her older brother that she had received a notification letter about her rank. Siki was quite surprised because the letter came faster than I expected. Because they couldn't wait, Kotoha and Sphere decided to immediately open the letter. In a short time, Ketua's face brightened even more when she received the notification that she got rank. Sphere smiles, realized it was the same rank as Siki. Unexpectedly, Siki looked sad when his little sister had gotten her ranking. Sphere asks why the young man looks unhappy. Siki said that he was happy about the ranking, but he was worried that Kotoha had to get into a dangerous situation in the dungeon. But Kotoha tries to comfort Siki by saying that she won't experience anything dangerous. Siki asks for Code H to promise that her sister will not fight anyone or anything who is ranked higher than her. Kotoha promises not to take on such a dangerous fight. While they were chatting, Siki suddenly felt the presence of a guest who had quite strong mana. When the door was opened, it turned out that the guest was Mr. Sakurajima. Without further ado, Mr. Sakurajima said that he knew about Siki from Satsuki. Then Mr. Sakurajima said that they needed as many strong people as possible to find the upcoming dungeon. So, Mr. Sakurajima's very serious face wanted to directly test Siki's strength. Siki was silent and realized that the person in front of him was the most powerful figure he had encountered so far. Just by looking at his strength, Siki knows that Mr. Sakurajima always does perfect training. So without hesitation, Siki asks where they should do it. Mr. Sakurajima says they can use his dojo, which is not in use. Worried, Kotoha comes out of the house to ask if everything is okay. Siki replied that everything was fine and he would come back for dinner. After arriving at the dojo, Siki saw Mr. Sakurajima using his bare hands when preparing to fight him. But the adult man invited Siki to use whatever sword or weapon he wanted. But Siki said that if Mr. Sakurajima fought with his bare hands, then the young man would too. Mr. Sakurajima smiled dismissively and said that he hoped Siki could withstand his attack. Because he is the strongest S-rank adventurer, Siki takes a stance and says that he doesn't plan to withstand all of Lord Sakurajima's attacks, and they better start the fight now. Unexpectedly, in the first attack, Mr. Sakurajima immediately used the Cherry Blossom lighting skill, which added lightning as attack damage. Unexpectedly, Siki could dodge the attack so quickly. Mr. Sakurajima was surprised that someone could dodge his super lightning attack without using any skills. Siki asked, "Is that enough for Lord Sakurajima to acknowledge Siki's abilities?" It was clear Mr. Sakurajima's answer was impossible, but now he became even more curious about Siki's abilities. This time, Siki turned serious and said that he didn't expect Mr. Sakurajima to make him come home. Siki really wants to finish this fight quickly and gain recognition in a short time. Siki said that it was almost time for dinner, so he wanted to go home immediately. That's why he asked Mr. Sakurajima to show everything he was capable of. Seeing the scary look in Siki's eyes made Mr. Sakurajima a little surprised, and says it's been a long time since he met someone as brave as Siki. Then he will be more serious about showing the skills he has to Siki. Mr. Sakurajima took a stance and released deadly mana energy. This grown man thought no one could get away with his technique on the first try. This technique allows Mr. Sakurajima to shoot deadly energy in all directions. Siki used the Eye of Wisdom technique to monitor his surroundings carefully. Siki knows that Mr. Sakurajima has amazing speed, but there is nothing that cannot be seen with the Eye of Wisdom. This ability allows Siki to analyze whatever he sees, and all of Mr. Sakurajima's movements can be analyzed easily as if Mr. Sakurajima were moving in slow motion. That's why when Mr. Sakurajima moved as fast as lightning trying to hit him, Siki could easily dodge the attack. Even this young man was able to try to attack the senior. Mr. Sakurajima believes that if he attacks Siki with incredible speed, he will definitely be able to see Siki's true abilities. However, in reality, Mr. Sakurajima was overwhelmed by Siki's counterattack. Mr. Sakurajima stepped back to give himself some distance and said he didn't think anyone could escape his attack, so he asked if it was true that Siki was able to see his lightning-fast movements. Siki confirmed this with a faint smile. According to Mr. Sakurajima, that is very impossible. That's why he stopped attacking Siki and asked why a figure as great as Siki was only ranked A. Siki replies that he has personal reasons. Now Mr. Sakurajima knows that what Sasuke said was true. After the fight ended, the two of them sat together and Mr. Sakurajima said that S rank should be reserved for people like Siki. Now, Siki asked about the dungeon they were talking about before he was taken there. Mr. Sakurajima explained briefly that it was likely that an S-rank dungeon would appear, which had a very high level of difficulty, plus the boss in the dungeon. So as S-rank adventurers, they feel they have an obligation to clear the dungeon. That's why they asked Siki for help to help clear the dungeon. Without much thought, and without hesitation, Siki immediately said that he would join in clearing the dungeon. Sakurajima commented that was really amazing, and don't forget this adult man thanked Siki for his help. Suddenly Mr. Sakurajima bowed very deeply while apologizing for suddenly dragging Siki to that place. Siki asked the elder to stop acting like that because he felt it was okay. That evening Siki was finally able to return home for dinner. Kotoha had been eagerly awaiting her older brother's return. The girl looked excited when she saw her brother come home safely. She asked if her older brother was okay, or did Siki have a wound. Siki said that his little sister didn't need to worry because it wasn't a dangerous problem and that she was completely fine at the moment. Only after that could Kotoha breathe a sigh of relief. Sphere asked what was the meaning of the dungeon that Mr. Sakurajima was talking about. Seki answered that they would go to an S-rank dungeon this weekend. Kadoha is worried that something dangerous will come again, but Seki casually said that it was only a little dangerous. Meanwhile, at home, Kandasaki sat pensively on the sofa alone. This girl thought that if she remained like this then she might be defeated by the monster because she knew the monster was getting stronger. So she was determined to strengthen my body. Kandasaki slowly stepped down into the basement and opened the door to her father's lab. Currently, a man is busy staring at a laptop screen with lots of notes around him. Kandasaki asked her father, has her father made any new discoveries about improving skills? The father actually asked Kandasaki to stop working as an adventurer because it was too dangerous. Even so, this girl still begged her father. Kandasaki said that after she recovered from her illness, she wanted to use her abilities to help other people. Kandasaki knows her father did a lot of research for him. Finally, the father invited Kandasaki to examine the documents on the table. Kandasaki's father knew that his son would find what he wanted among the documents. Hearing this, Kandasaki smiled happily and thanked her father. Meanwhile, in a luxurious room, a man was busy enjoying the alcohol in front of him when suddenly he heard the door of the room being smashed. The purple-haired man known as Kirishima Kuji asked in annoyance, who would dare disturb his rest time? Apparently, the person who had just barged in was a foreign man who had been possessed by a monster. The foreign man said he didn't care about anything Kirishima Kuji wanted. He only came to kill the purple-haired guy. According to him, Kirishima Kuji is the right person to become a host for his body. Well, let's stop the storyline of this manhwa because the chapters still stop at chapter 72, so when the latest chapter comes out we will discuss it as soon as possible.